The man smiled as he finally cornered his prey inside his own home. In this dying world, the strong simply take what they want. His companion laughed, telling him not to blame her for choosing the winning side. He didn't have time to beg before the first blow landed, painting the walls in crimson. 28 weeks passed as the world turned into a tomb of ice. Skyscrapers became jagged tombstones in a white wasteland. Beneath the layers of frost, the remnants of humanity were preserved in their final moments of terror. A pair of spiked boots crunched over the remains of those who weren't fast enough to escape the cold. Walking through the silent, frozen alleys, a lone scavenger searched for any sign of life. Every breath was a struggle against the biting air. He knew he was entering territory no one had touched since the frost began. Food and fuel were now more valuable than gold or blood. Suddenly, the ground groaned beneath his feet. He froze, realizing the ice wasn't as solid as it looked. The surface shattered. He plunged into the dark abyss. Wind whipped past him as he fell toward certain death. Scrambling for a grip, he slammed his ice axe into the wall. The metal sparked against the frozen stone. He couldn't stop the slide. With a deafening crash, he slammed onto the roof of a buried building. Darkness swallowed him as he coughed against the rising dust. The soft snow had saved his life. He lay there for a moment, laughing at his own luck. A narrow escape usually meant a change in fortune. But in this world, luck was just a precursor to a different kind of nightmare. Sharp teeth glistened in the shadows. 3 glowing eyes stared back at him from the dark. A bipede stood before him, a monster that fed on the few humans left. His eyes went wide as the creature loomed over him. It lunged with a guttural roar. He barely rolled away as the floor exploded into shards of ice. Realizing his mistake, he scrambled to his feet. The monster swiped again, its claws missing his head by inches. Scrambling through the debris, he looked for any exit. The beast wasn't going to let its meal get away so easily. Blood sprays across the darkness as the monster strikes. Roaring with fury, the beast erupts with blue energy from its multiple eyes. Scrambling away, he narrowly dodges as massive pillars of ice crash around him. The entire mountainside gives way in a deafening roar that shakes the earth. Shock paralyzes him when he realizes there is nowhere left to run. Suddenly, a wall of white death slams into his back and buries him deep beneath the surface. Everything goes cold and dark as a single block of ice floats above his sinking body. His vision fades until a strange glowing creature appears in the depths. Reaching out with a trembling hand, he touches the shimmering light. The entity pulses with a strange neural energy that seems to call to his very soul. Blue electricity surges through his veins and rewrites his physical being. At that moment, his eye snaps open with a sudden jolt of life. Gasping for realizes he is still alive against all odds. Kneeling in the snow, he wonders how he survived such a massive collapse. A faint blue glow flickers at the base of his neck before vanishing into his skin. Picking up a discarded chocolate bar feels like a small victory in this frozen hell. The city stands as a desolate graveyard of steel and glass. He pries open a heavy manhole cover to reach the only safe passage home. These underground tunnels are filled with the hollow eyes of the desperate. Resources are running low and he knows people will eventually turn on each other to survive. Reaching his hallway, he checks the shadows for any sign of trouble. Pounding on the heavy metal door, he waits with a sense of rising urgency. The door swings open and his girlfriend throws her arms around him in relief. She smiles and tells him how much she wanted to see him. He produces the chocolate bar and watches her eyes light up with joy. She stares at the wrapper with a hunger that goes far beyond simple food. She thanks him with a hug, but her expression remains strangely cold. Her mood shifts instantly when she realizes he brought nothing else back. She notices the blue stains on his pack and her suspicion grows. A look of pure resentment crosses her face as she bites into the candy. Later that night, he sits by the fire and stares at their last bag of seeds. Eating these would mean the end of any hope for a future. He looks at the toxic monster meat and wonders if it can be used as fuel. A glance at the digital clock reminds him that today was supposed to be Valentine's Day. He turns to apologize for forgetting but finds the room empty and the door open. Just then, a strange knocking echoes through the room and he senses something is wrong. The door swings open and a heavy metal club strikes his head before he can react. Steel meets bone and his world explodes into a crimson blur. He collapses to the floor as his own blood pools around his head. His girlfriend stands there watching as a stranger looms over his broken body. He gasps out her name and asks why she would betray him like this. She screams that a piece of chocolate is not enough to buy her loyalty anymore. Lua Dalong sneers and calls him a weakling who cannot even provide for his woman. He slams his golf club into the floor and demands every scrap of food. The protagonist spits out blood and tells them he has nothing left to give. Lua Dalong raises the club high with a murderous grin. The first blow shatters his teeth and sends him spiraling into darkness. Other thugs move in like vultures to finish the brutal job. Covered in wounds, he realizes his life is slipping away into the cold. Lua Dalong pulls out a knife to deliver the final strike to his heart. His consciousness drifts through a sea of blue light and ancient energy. Suddenly, he gasps and finds himself sitting at his old office desk. He screams the name of his murderer in a fit of pure rage. His hands slam onto the desk as he tries to catch his breath. Looking at his body, he cannot believe he is still in one piece. The city outside is bright and full of life instead of ice. The lights of the skyscrapers flicker with a warmth he thought was gone forever. He looks at the date and realizes he has 28 hours before the world freezes. Monster blood sprays as it collapses. Huge shards of ice rain down while he desperately sprints for cover. Seeking any shelter, he ducks behind a frozen wall to avoid the crushing weight. The ceiling begins to crumble above him. Panic fills his eyes as a massive spike of ice pierces the ground. Suddenly, the world turns white as he is buried alive under the freezing rubble. Tearing through the snow, he slides down a dark slope. He lands hard in a pitch-black chamber. Just then, a strange blue light flickers in the dark. A ghostly creature with multiple eyes stares directly into his soul. Blue lightning surges through the air. His eyes snap open as the energy consumes. Gasping for air, he finds himself back on the surface. He stares at his hands in disbelief. Why was he just sitting there in a daze? Rubbing his neck, he feels a strange mark burning into his skin. Activating his flashlight, he spots a small treasure in the snow. Not a simple chocolate bar feels like a miracle in this wasteland. Towering skyscrapers stand like frozen tombstones around him. Reaching a heavy manhole cover, he grips the cold metal. He pulls it open to reveal the only path back home. Sliding down the rope, he enters the dark underworld. The sight of the shelter is grim. Starving survivors huddle together in thin blankets. They watch him pass with hollow, desperate eyes. He keeps his head down and walks toward his apartment. Reaching the door, he hopes the guards haven't started their rounds. He pounds on the door of Unit 409. It swings open and a familiar face greets him. His girlfriend throws her arms around him instantly. She smiles warmly while pulling him inside. Not blushing, he forgets the cold for a brief moment. He reaches into his coat and pulls out his prize. Her eyes widen at the sight of real chocolate. She kisses him and calls him the best. But her expression shifts to cold suspicion a moment later. She glares at his backpack, sensing he is hiding more. Later, he sits alone by a dying fire. He looks at the few seeds left in his hand. These plants were supposed to be their hope, but they are withered. Desperation makes him consider eating the poisonous monster meat. He grips the frozen blue flesh, wondering if it is worth the risk. At least the ice provides some fuel for the flames. Checking the clock, he realizes it is February 14th. He calls out to apologize for forgetting the holiday. Silence answers him. Sudden pounding on the door echoes through the room. He recognizes her secret code and rushes to open it. Thinking she was just outside, he swings the door wide. A heavy metal pipe slams into his face before he can speak. The force of the blow sends blood spraying. He collapses to the floor in agony. Vision blurring, he looks up at his attackers. A man named Luo Dalong stands over him with a cruel grin. Ming Ming clings to the man's arm without a shred of guilt. He chokes out a question asking why she would betray him. She screams at him, calling him a liar for hiding food. Luo Dalong kicks his bag, mocking the content. The thug leans down to taunt him further. Ming Ming watches with cold indifference. He laughs, telling him that the weak have no place in this world. He raises the pipe high. It strikes the floor with a terrifying thud. Luo Dalong demands all the food immediately. He shouts back that there is nothing left. The thug decides he is no longer useful. He swings the club with full force. The metal connects with his skull in a sickening crunch. Blood covers the floor as the life leaves his body. Luo Dalong strikes again and again. The other men join in, tearing at him like animals. They realize he truly had nothing but moldy grains. Luo calls for a knife to finish the job. The blade sinks deep. Suddenly, the blue creature reappears in the void. It reaches out as his spirit dissolves. A sharp ringing sound fills his ears. His eyes snap open. He screams Luo Dalong's name and slams his hands on the desk. Gasping for air, he looks around a bright office. He checks his chest and finds it completely intact. The city lights outside are glowing and vibrant. A digital sign reveals the truth. The world has only 24 hours left before the big freeze. While people protest in the streets of Queens, the authorities struggle to maintain order. The wealthy drink away their final hours in Manhattan, oblivious to the coming storm. Criminals in Brooklyn focus on their petty deals while the sky begins to change. No one understands the doom approaching except for one man. Standing in the middle of a busy plaza, he waits for the end to begin. Suddenly, a brilliant aurora lights up the night sky. People stop to take photos of the beautiful harbinger of death. At that exact moment, his phone begins to vibrate in his hand. It is Ming Ming, the woman who betrayed him in his past life. She thinks he is still the same weak man she can manipulate for her own gain. Looking at her face on the screen, he remembers her cruelty. He decides to end their connection once and for all. Pressing the answer button, he listens to her fake, sweet voice. Ming Ming asks for more money while partying at an expensive club. He tells her they are finished and to never call him again. Her voice turns to a screech of confusion as he prepares to hang up. Deleting her contact feels like the first real step towards survival. He walks into the shadows with a cold, focused heart. She can freeze to death with the rest of the world. Crossing into Brooklyn, the clock ticks closer to the final hour. He looks up at the skyscrapers one last time. This time he will be prepared for the apocalypse. He knows the temperature will drop rapidly within the next day. Chaos will consume society as the cold takes hold of the street. He only has 1 hour left to gather the most vital resources. Along with water and tools, he needs a way to defend himself. His eyes land on a police officer's holster as a plan forms. 2 officers in a patrol car spot him lurking in the dark. They think he looks suspicious in the late night hours. The older officer commands him to stop and stay still. Suddenly, the younger partner draws his weapon in a panic. He raises his hands while the cops close in on his position. Holding his phone, he tries to stay calm despite the tension. Anger bubbles beneath the surface at their interference. The timer on his screen finally hits 0. He leans against a nearby structure as they begin their interrogation. The rookie officer is clearly nervous and keeps his gun aimed low. Reaching slowly into his bag, the man tries to explain his presence. His hand grips a rectangular object hidden inside the pocket. The rookie screams about a weapon and loses control of his nerves. A loud bang echoes through the street as the gun fires. The bullet tears through the air toward his head. Everything moves in slow motion as his instincts take over. He stares at the approaching lead with wide, shocked eyes. He cannot die after getting a second chance to fix his fate. His mind screams that he wants to live through this nightmare. A surge of blue energy erupts from the depths of his soul. Lighting crackles across his vision as time seems to stop entirely. He can see the rotation of the bullet in midair. Realizing his power has awakened, a dark smile touches his lips. Blue electricity wraps around his limbs and pulses with strength. He tilts his head slightly to let the bullet pass harmlessly by. The panicked cop continues to fire wildly into the void. He lunges forward with supernatural speed and grace. Another bullet is caught and frozen by his icy aura. Moving like a blur, he leaves a trail of afterimages behind him. He becomes a phantom of vengeance in the moonlight. A single punch sends the rookie flying backward into the pavement. The impact shatters the officer's composure and his weapon. The older cop falls to the ground in sheer terror at the sight. He tries to aim his gun at the monster standing before him. Standing tall, the man radiates an icy and lethal power. His glowing blue eye marks the birth of a new king. The city bridge stands silent as the first snow begins to fall over the world. Not everything is about to change forever. Brooklyn is the first to feel the bite of the extreme cold. Thick snow buries the city as a regular apartment building prepares for a long night. Inside the Department of Homeland Security, officials watch the monitors with growing dread. Something serious is happening, and the red phone on the desk remains a silent omen of the chaos to come. While the city freezes, a man in a pink shirt smokes a cigarette in a dark room. He watches as a victim is beaten into submission. The boss holds up a phone to show the evidence of unforgivable betrayal. Daring to drug his daughter was a fatal mistake. The victim trembles and pleads for a mercy that will never come. Only God can save a soul this wretched. A heavy hand pins the victim down as a sharp blade is drawn. The knife sinks deep and blood sprays across the floor. Red stains the darkness as the life is cut out of him. The boss counts his trophies with a sick smile. 6 severed fingers sit inside display case. Now the evidence must be erased forever. He orders his men to toss the body into the apartment boiler. A heavy bag is shoved into the furnace as a final resting place. The goons wonder if the old machine can handle the weight, but a strange feeling settles over them. Suddenly, a violent flash of energy erupts from the pipes. An explosion throws the men backward as the boiler room becomes a death trap. In another part of the building, a young man works with a steady hand. He finishes building a frame meant for indoor crops. His room is packed with stacks of water and food. Self-sufficiency is the only way to survive the coming disaster. He checks the timer on his phone and realizes the freezing phenomenon is moving faster than expected. Every second is precious now. A sudden knock at the door interrupts his work. He opens it to find the building security guard standing in the hall. Old Joe looks apologetic as he explains the situation. He asks the guard what is wrong and learns the heating system has failed. The guards are visiting every tenant to warn them about the drop in temperature. He remembers the boiler was a mess the last time it broke. Wanting to keep his home safe, he offers to help fix the machinery. The door clicks shut behind him as they head out. He follows them down the stairs but realizes they are heading the wrong way. Old Joe points toward the basement level. Memory flashes back to a neighbor mentioning the real boiler room was actually upstairs. Doubt fills his mind as he looks at the dark staircase. They step into the pitch-black basement where the air is unnaturally cold. The floor is covered in a thick, chilling mist. He notices the smoke looks strange and warns the guards to be careful. While checking the pipes, he discovers a weird blue liquid on his fingers. He stares at the substance and feels a sudden surge of danger. Massive pale arms with glowing blue eyes emerge from the darkness behind the guards. The guard with glasses asks if there is any other problem, completely unaware of the shadow looming over him. A giant hand smashes down and crushes him instantly. A horrific mouth lined with eyes and teeth opens wide. Blood sprays against the ceiling as the monster devours its prey. Old Joe stares in paralyzed horror as the white-skinned beast rises. It towers over the remaining guard with a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Blue energy flares around the young man as he activates his hidden power. He moves with blinding speed and grabs Old Joe just in time. The monster's hands slam together on empty air. He carries the guard through the dark, glancing back at the nightmare following them. The exit door is still open and safety is just a sprint away. But the creature is faster than any animal, its jaws snapping at their heels. He grinds his teeth as he realizes the monster is keeping up with his maximum speed. Terror strikes as the realization hits that they might not make it out alive. The monster's massive jaws snapped shut with bone-crushing force. Blue energy flared around his feet as he pushed off the ground. Grabbing the old man was a risk, but he refused to let another life slip away. Tucking his shoulder, he prepared for the momentum. With a powerful heave, he threw the man toward the only exit. The old guard tumbled through the doorway and vanished into the darkness. At least one of them was safe for now. Sweat poured down his face as the blue markings burned. A deafening roar shook the foundations of the building. The white-skinned beast lunged with a speed that defied its size. Dust and debris exploded everywhere. Gasping for air, he realized the monster's eye was locked onto it. It was a cold, calculating gaze. He stood his ground against the towering nightmare. Something about his ability felt different this time. In his previous life, this creature was an unstoppable predator. Now he needed to find the hidden condition for his power to work. The beast loomed over him like a god of death. Dodging a lethal swipe, he felt the air pressure crack the floor. He noticed a strange resonance between his energy and the surrounding objects. His eyes dropped to the scattered gravel at his feet. Small stones began to vibrate and lift into the air. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He did not have to just run away anymore. By reaching down, he gripped a jagged rock tight. If his theory was right, the hunter was about to become the prey. He leaped into the air with everything he had left. Aiming carefully, he funneled every ounce of blue energy into the stone. A blinding beam of kinetic force tore through the room. The impact sent the massive creature reeling back into the shadows. He landed heavily as the blue flames flickered around his body. A grim smile touched his lips because he finally understood. Even a tiny pebble could become a cannon shell with enough acceleration. Suddenly, a wet thud echoed on the floor. Blue liquid began to leak from his nose and eyes. Panic flared as he realized his own body was breaking down. His vision blurred while the blue stains spread across his skin. A violent cough forced a fountain of glowing blood from his mouth. His legs gave out instantly. Everything turned cold as the world started to fade away. Far away, he heard the frantic cries of the man he had saved. He felt hands grabbing his shoulders, begging him to stay awake. Memories of the freezing blizzard outside mixed with the chaos of the present. People were shouting about poison and the lack of a hospital. They dragged his limp body through the halls in a desperate rush. Faces blurred into a sea of noise and shadow. The old man watched in silence as the light left his eyes. Someone screamed for a doctor as they reached the medical bay. A heavy door slammed shut behind them. He lay motionless on a cold metal table with blue veins webbing across his chest. A woman in a white coat hovered over his unconscious form. Machines beeped rhythmically in the sterile room. She watched the centrifuge spin his blood into distinct layers. The results were unlike anything she had ever seen in her career. Blue impurities had completely separated from the red cells. Leaning down, she traced the glowing patterns on his skin. It looked less like a wound and more like a total transformation. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open with a sharp gasp. He stared up at the bright surgical lights in a daze. Trying to sit up, he demanded to know where he was. The woman calmly lit a cigarette and let out a slow puff of smoke. She introduced herself as an unlicensed doctor working in the shadows. A playful smirk crossed her face as she gave him a name to use. He looked at her with growing suspicion. She blew smoke into the air and asked what really happened in that basement. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous curiosity. The monster's jaws snapped shut just inches from his back. He realizes his current burden is far too heavy. Deciding in an instant, he grips the older man tight. He throws Joe through the open doorway to safety. The man flies across the room with a shout of terror. He tumbles down a dark maintenance hatch and disappears. A heavy metal door slams shut behind him. Lin Mo stands alone against the beast. A deafening roar shakes the entire basement floor. The monster smashes its massive foot into the concrete. Gasping for air, the young man tries to steady his racing heart. A single cold eye fixates on its prey with murderous intent. He notices the creature lacks any distinct fingers. It towers over him like a living nightmare made of flesh. He needs to understand why his power failed him earlier. Memories of the encounter flash through his mind as he searches for a clue. He suspects a hidden condition limits his acceleration ability. The monster prepares to strike again with overwhelming force. Suddenly, he remembers the strange energy coating Joe when he threw him. That same energy is leaking from the monster right now. His eyes drop to the small stones scattered at his feet. Blue light begins to wrap around the pebbles as they vibrate. A plan finally clicks into place within his mind. Escaping is no longer the only option left. He scoops up a small rock with a grim, determined smile. The hunter has now become the prey. He leaps high into the air with explosive speed. Focusing every ounce of power into his hand, he lets go. The pebble streaks forward like a railgun shot. It tears through the monster's flesh with ease. Landing softly, he watches the beast crumble to the ground. He realizes his power only works on objects contaminated by this energy. High speed turns even a simple stone into a deadly cannon. Something warm and wet drips onto the floor near his feet. He stares at the thick blue liquid staining his hand. It is not the monster's blood. Confusion turns into pure agony in a split second. He retches violently as a torrent of blue fluid erupts from his mouth. Darkness begins to claw at the edges of his vision as he falls. Voices call out his name from the shadows of the hallway. Joe rushes to his side in a state of total panic. Everything starts to fade into a cold black void. Fragments of conversation drift through the air around him. They talk about the freezing storm and the locked main gates. He feels himself being lifted and carried by multiple people. Mrs. Fang orders them to find the doctor upstairs immediately. Joe struggles to keep him steady as they run through the dark. They burst into a room filled with blinding clinical lights. A woman looks down at his shivering body with a cold gaze. He lies naked on a cold metal operating table. The doctor notes his body temperature has dropped to 10 degrees. She records his vital signs with a fascinated tone. Machines hum as they process his unique blood samples. Dark vein-like patterns spread across his chest like a web. A vial shows a clear separation of red and blue fluid. She leans closer to inspect the strange markings on his skin. They look more like an allergic reaction than normal human veins. His eyes snap open with a sudden jolt of energy. The doctor greets him with a calm, unnerving gaze. Panicked, he tries to sit up and demands to know her identity. She casually lights a cigarette and watches the smoke rise. Her white coat flutters as she stands before him. She tells him he can simply call her Doc Joe. She asks how he managed to ruin his body so thoroughly. Smoke fills the space between them as he struggles to breathe. A predatory smile plays on her lips as she admits her extreme interest in him. The thermometer showed an impossible truth. 11 degrees was the temperature of a corpse. Normal humans died long ago at this limit. He stared at his own skin in disbelief. Blue veins crawled across his chest like frozen rivers, wondering if this was the cost of his power made his head spin. The doctor watched him with a sharp and knowing smile. She knew he was a medical freak. Trying to stand up proved to be a mistake. His feet slipped on the cold metal floor. She warned him to stay still because his body was too weak. At that moment, the woman asked the forbidden question. She wanted to know if he possessed a superpower. Panic flared in his chest. He needed to get away now. He tried to trigger his acceleration ability. Blue liquid erupted from his mouth instead. His lungs burned like liquid fire. The power refused to obey him. Desperation set in as the clock ticked toward 3 o'clock. Footsteps suddenly echoed in the sterile hallway. A predator was approaching the room with heavy strides. He reached door 509 and stopped. The doctor grabbed the boy's hand with surprising strength. She ordered him to lie down and act like a body. He had to hide his life to survive. He closed his eyes and held his breath. The lock clicked open with a sharp snap. Luo Dalong stepped into the room looking like a king in fur. He loomed over the doctor with a fake smile. The man asked if he could come in to chat for a moment. Dr. Joe kept her voice flat and cold. She claimed the resident he was looking for had already died from poisoning. Luo narrowed his eyes at the still figure on the table. The protagonist recognized that voice from a previous timeline. Hatred boiled in his frozen blood. He wanted to kill this monster right now. Luo leaned in close to inspect the skin. He claimed he just saw the corpse blink. A butterfly knife flashed in his hand with a metallic ring. He prepared to stab the body to check for a reaction. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the lab. Dr. Joe slapped him across the face with all her might. Her eyes burned with a cold and dangerous fury. The lackeys screamed in outrage at the disrespect. Luo held up a hand to stop his men from attacking. He offered a mocking apology for his rudeness. Then he lit her cigarette while wearing a dark grin. He whispered a reminder in her ear about who really owned this clinic. The heavy door finally closed behind the thugs. He sat up with a heavy heart and a shaking frame. Questions about Luo's motives raced through his mind. He wondered why the doctor was risking her life to protect him, but one problem felt more urgent than the mystery. He asked where she had hidden his clothes. Brooklyn is a frozen graveyard at 40 degrees below zero. Inside the shelter of a boiler room, two men discuss the desperate reality of survival. One wonders if the weather will ever return to normal while the other scoffs at his optimism. Standing in the shadows, Luo Dalong listens with a cold, calculating gaze. Communication has completely died as the internet remains a ghost of the past. Hope is a luxury they can no longer afford because the government has likely abandoned them. Gripping across, Luo Dalong smiles as he declares this frozen hell is a divine punishment. He stares down at the apartment manager who hangs bound and helpless from the ceiling. Maintaining a harmonious new order is his only goal in this lawless wasteland. The manager spits back that this order is nothing but theft and murder. Denying heat to anyone who cannot pay is just a simple matter of equivalent exchange to the tyrant. Screaming in rage, the manager calls him a vampire as Luo mentions another tenant has already died. Luo Dalong turns his back on the suffering because he has more people to exploit. Hearing that Mr. Lin from room 409 is dead sends the manager into a state of shock. Meanwhile, a voice asks if the patient is finally ready to stand. Struggling with his own clothes, the young man feels his body trembling with an unnatural chill. He demands to know the truth about his condition while the doctor watches him with a cigarette. Reality hits hard when she reveals he has been unconscious for 6 long days. Much has changed during his slumber as the world outside continued to rot. Luo Dalong now rules the apartment complex with an iron fist and a leopard print coat. Forcing residents into the sub-zero winds to find supplies is a death sentence for most. Hearing that name triggers a surge of murderous intent within the boy. He asks Dr. Zhou if there is any way to fix his broken, freezing body. Clenching his fist, he prepares for any price she might demand. She leans back and explains that her medical services are never free of charge. Fixing him is possible as long as he agrees to her specific terms. Becoming her personal research subject is the only way he will survive. She admits her intense interest in his unique physiology as she touches his face. Accepting the deal is his only choice if he wants to exact his revenge. She shows him vials of blood containing a mysterious substance that absorbs thermal energy. Without a constant source of heat, his body will remain in a permanent state of starvation. He wonders if a simple meal is enough to restore his fading strength. Finding enough fuel is the problem because the doctor is out of resources. Stepping out into the hallway, he knows exactly where to find what he needs. Sneaking past the guards is easy after his earlier trip to the supermarket. Not reaching his own apartment door feels like a final victory in this silent war. His hand trembles as he reaches for the cold metal of the handle. Opening the door reveals a room transformed into a tomb of solid ice. Seeing his supplies frozen solid makes him realize just how cruel the new boss truly is. Searching through the wreckage, he finally locates the high-calorie fool he requires. He pulls a heavy box from the frost with desperate strength. Ripping it open reveals a stash of chocolate bars meant for survival. Bitter memories of his past failure flood his mind as he stares at the candy. Shoving the food into his mouth, he waits for the energy to ignite his blood. A terrifying sensation takes hold as something inside him begins to crave more. Panic sets in when he realizes he is about to lose all control over his own mind. Shadows fall across the floor as 2 thugs the door to room 409 is open. They walk inside expecting to find a corpse and easy loot. Instead, they find a monster with glowing red veins and a predator's grin. Fear strikes them instantly as they demand to know who he is. Back in the lab, the doctor watches the final simulation report with growing dread. Seeing the data on the screen makes her blood run cold. Replenishing his glycogen levels has triggered a violent neural reversal. The thugs scream threats, but their voices are drowned out by a low, guttural growl. He smiles as the red aura of raw energy begins to leak from his pores. Total madness takes over as he prepares to tear his enemies apart. The lab floor was covered in a strange blue substance. She wondered what could have turned the room into such a mess. Picking up a sample, she noted the bizarre growth within the bag. Security cameras watched her every move from the shadows. Lighting a cigarette, she knew the truth was hidden in the security room. Suddenly, the public announcement system crackled to life. The broadcast demanded everyone's attention immediately. Families huddled in their kitchens as the voice told them to ration food. An elderly woman stared at her static-filled television in confusion. In the hallways, thugs dragged a man toward the basement. They laughed about how heavy the old guard felt. A man stood at the microphone with a cruel grin. Residents realized this was not the usual guard speaking. He claimed they needed to pay compensation for their survival. His finger hovered over the main control switch. With a flick, he cut the heating to the entire building. He laughed as the residents realized their nightmare was beginning. Locked away, the young man stared forward with cold eyes. His hands were clasped tightly during the intense questioning. Wearing an orange jumpsuit, he looked like a broken prisoner. The interrogator asked if his hatred for the blonde man was real. His eye suddenly pulsed with a terrifying crimson light. A red aura erupted around him as he lunged forward and grabbed a thug by the throat. Veins of red energy surged through the victim's face. The blonde leader joked about the taste of human flesh. He mocked his enemies while the red mist intensified. Without hesitation, the young man hurled the thug over the railing. The body hit the floor several stories below. Nothing remained but a charred skeleton smoking on the tiles. Horrified onlookers stared at the gruesome sight from above. Another thug gripped his weapon as sweat poured down his face. Standing in the center of the red glow, the killer looked inhuman. The energy was so strong it began affecting the nearby plants. Desperate to survive, a thug charged forward with a knife. He decided to go all out in one final strike. The leader swung a golf club with murderous intent. He missed completely as the red blur moved behind him. It was too fast for the human eye to track. He toyed with them by beckoning them to try again. Red afterimages filled the room as he danced around their attacks. The leader screamed for him to stop moving. He called the boy a weakling to mask his own fear. Another attacker rushed in with a roar of desperation. The young man's eyes locked onto his target. In a single flash, the attacker was sliced into pieces. He stood over the corpses as the door creaked open. A girl called out his name in a trembling voice. He turned his head and saw her standing there. She raised a gun and aimed it directly at his chest. A small dart suddenly buried itself in his shoulder. The doctor stood nearby holding a specialized dart gun. Strength left his legs as the sedative took effect. She caught him before he could hit the cold floor. She whispered that the medicine would cool the heat in his body. Silence finally returned to the room full of strange greenery. Hunger has always been the ultimate catalyst for human atrocities. History remembers the cannibalism and the wars fought over a single meal. While agriculture once stabilized society, those days of plenty are long dead. In this frozen world, farming is a forgotten dream. Yet an exception exists deep within the darkness. He wakes up to find a woman smoking nearby, apologizing for his forced sleep. Reaching into the thick greenery, she plucks a ripe tomato. She bites into it with a primal hunger. Red juice stains her lips like fresh blood. Surveying the lush room, she realizes there is enough food here to feed the entire building. Outside, the reality is far more cruel. A couple wanders through a blinding blizzard. Shivering violently, the woman asks if they can truly survive this. Her husband smiles and promises everything will be fine. He frantically searches his pockets for a hidden bar of chocolate. Desperation sets in when his fingers find nothing but empty fabric. His wife gently stops him and reminds him of the truth. They gave that last bit of food to their daughter this morning. He stares blankly into the white void. A hollow laugh escapes his frozen lips as he tries to mask his failure. Calling himself useless, he does not notice the massive claws emerging from the snow. A sudden flash of silver ends his life in a heartbeat. Blood sprays across his wife's face as her world shatters. A towering nightmare stands over her, holding the remains of her husband. It crushes the body and feeds with sickening wet crunches. The creature looks at her and declares her flesh will be even better. Paralyzed by terror, she waits for the end. A voice suddenly cuts through the wind and tells her to move. She looks up with hollow eyes. High above in a skeletal building, a man waves her toward safety. He screams for her to run if she wants to live. She finds her legs and bolts through the deep powder. The monster roars and gives chase with impossible speed. Every step feels like lead as the beast gains ground. It lunges with a jagged claw. She trips and tumbles into the freezing drifts. Towering over her, the monster prepares to feast. Death is only inches away. Suddenly, the man above strikes a lighter and pours liquid into a bottle. He hurls the makeshift bomb with perfect aim. The glass shatters against the monster's hide. Fire erupts in a blinding orange bloom. Screaming in agony, the creature reveals its hatred for the heat. She crawls away as the beast thrashes in the flames. Stumbling into a nearby construction site, she finds an old elevator. Relief floods her mind as she thinks she is finally saved. The monster drops from the ceiling, its body already cooling the fire. It is not hot anymore. Its massive vertical maw opens wide to swallow her whole. She pounds on the controls and begs the machine to move. From the darkness above, the man tells her to close her eyes. She huddles in the corner as the elevator groans. A wall of stadium lights flares to life with a deafening hum. The creature shrieks, blinded by the artificial sun. Standing amidst the light, the man grips an electric guitar. He strikes a power chord that shakes the very foundation of the tower. Sound waves ripple through the air like physical blows. The monster recoils in pure agony from the sonic assault. Collars were once a symbol of absolute ownership. History viewed them as markers for those who had lost their freedom. Looking down at him, the doctor insists this device serves a different purpose. Lin Mo scoffs while strapped to the cold metal chair. Her eyes remain cold as she clarifies his role as a research subject. Leaning over him, she reminds him of the foreign substances now coursing through his veins. Tension fills the room as he feels the weight of her gaze. She explains the collar is a tool designed to prove her wildest theories. The light on the metal band flickers between a calm blue and a violent red. He demands to know what she means by a second state of being. Fragments of a lost memory flicker behind his eyes like broken glass. Sweat beads on his forehead because the last 20 minutes are a complete void. Tapping his nose, she tells him not to worry about the missing time. She blows a cloud of smoke directly into his face with a mocking grin. Everything is just data for her grand experiment. He feels trapped by her influence but desperately needs the truth. Turning away, she walks toward the control console with a purposeful stride. Her finger descends on the button that will change everything. Agony rips through his body, the machine's hum, he screams. He gasps for air while the sensors record every jolt of pain. High-concentration glucose begins pumping directly into his bloodstream. Watching the readings, she notes his intense reaction with clinical detachment. Red veins erupt across his chest as he asks what she is doing to him. She smiles and mentions she almost forgot the most important part. Squatting before him, she places a small potted plant on his lap. Confusion briefly overrides his pain as he stares at the green leaves. The plant sits innocently against his glowing skin. His pupils dilate while the energy in the room reaches a breaking point. A massive shockwave of red light blasts outward, forcing her to shield her eyes. He roars that she dared to trick him. Someone else begins to laugh with a voice that sounds far too familiar. A hooded figure manifests from the smoke and effortlessly dodges the doctor. This stranger walks through the chaos with total confidence. Standing directly over the bound man, the intruder asks if he can see him now. Lin Mo looks up in pure disbelief. The man in the hood is a perfect mirror image of himself. Panic sets in as he calls out to the doctor for help. His double leans in and whispers that the doctor is currently deaf to his cries. She stands frozen like a statue while the two versions of the same man face off. A sinister grin spreads across the double's face. Lin Mo demands to know why this intruder shares his fate. Holding up two fingers, the double claims they are two halves of a whole. He pulls back his hood to reveal the terrifying truth. Horror washes over Lin Mo as the reality of his situation sinks. 4 glowing eyes appear on the double's face as he asks for recognition. Memories of a strange translucent creature from the past resurface. The double confirms his suspicions with a chilling nod. An intricate blue mark glows on Lin Mo's back, pulsing with alien life. The power shifts as a blue entity takes the form of a woman before him. The National Logistic Agency operates as the final line of defense for a crumbling civilization. Deep within its reinforced corridors, the silence is broken by a desperate question about the failed network. Dark hallways lead to the heart of the facility where the lights flicker with uncertainty. Barbara Ripley stares at the digital display with cold intensity. The information department claims hardware issues are to blame for the total blackout. She leans back and lights a cigarette to mask her growing frustration. Everything is falling apart. Different departments are simply passing the blame while the world freezes outside. Progress on the latest report is slow and agonizing. Barbara demands the data immediately despite its incomplete state. She knows the situation is far too urgent for bureaucratic perfection. Walking toward the command center, she prepares for another headache. Inside, Frank Kordick is already losing his mind. He screams about the total failure of their communication systems. Their frontline operatives have been silent for 2 full days. He believes they are already at war and demands immediate action. Barbara watches his tantrum with utter boredom. Suddenly, she delivers a sharp kick to his groin to shut him up. They move toward the sample observation room to face a much darker reality. Frank stares through the reinforced glass and forgets his pain. A horrifying mass of blue coils sits where a human should be. This nightmare was found discarded near the bunker. It is a hollow shell of twisted blue muscle. The creature stands on spindly, translucent leg. Technicians confirm the mutation originated from a person. Barbara tells him to look closer at the object around its neck. The dog tags reveal a name from their own field operations department. It is one of their own men. He was declared dead before the network crashed. 24 hours later, his corpse transformed into this monstrosity in the morgue. Intelligence from the CIA confirms these creatures were monitored long before the cold wave hit. Footage from a local supermarket shows the same horror in action. They turn their attention to a new subject they call Number 0. Inside the tank, the young man wakes up in a cold sweat. The monster he saw moments ago has vanished. In its place stands a beautiful woman bathed in blue light. She smiles at his confusion and notes his shyness. She leans closer until their faces nearly touch. The world around them seems to freeze in time. He realizes she can hear his every thought. A strange blue network of energy pulses through his entire nervous system. She explains that they have merged into a single entity. She drifts around him like a ghost made of flame. The substance injected into him was her own blood. This connection grants him his new abilities. He demands to know why she is acting as a parasite. She finds his curiosity amusing and stares into his eyes. Her people are not from this dimension at all. They must inhabit the bodies of natives to survive and understand this world. Her true form is a primitive glowing organism drifting through the void. Time has no meaning to her kind. They use intelligent beings as vessels to break the shackles of their existence. She wants to experience the world through his senses. He feels a sudden wave of pity for her loneliness. She laughs hysterically at the idea of a human feeling sorry for her. This is the empathy she expected from a chosen host. Her smile fades as she prepares to deliver a warning. Because they are merged, he is now a prime target for the shell creatures. Outside the facility, the heavy snow begins to churn. Massive spear-like legs pierce the frozen ground. A giant monstrosity sniffs the air for food and enemies. A massive army of these hunters is already on the move. Snow falls over the silent city. Below the skyline, white nightmares tear through the building foundations. Inside the facility, the mysterious woman smiles as she mentions the shell. Leaving the room, she tells the captive man he knows what to do. Chaos erupts instantly in the neighboring labs. Beakers shatter against the floor as unnatural vines surge forward. Panic spreads like wildfire. Screams echo through the narrow corridors as the beasts hunt. Blood spatters the walls while the creatures feast on the staff. Rambling for his life, one survivor races up the stairs. He reaches the exit only to find the door locked tight. Two monsters corner him in the shadows. Terror paralyzes his heart as they loom closer. They pounce with savage hunger. Others stand ready to fight, though their weapons look like toys against these demons. Tied to a cold metal pillar, the guard watches his allies fall. These monsters are identical to the one they captured. Watching their backs swell with stolen blood makes his stomach churn. He realizes they haven't noticed him yet. Escape is the only option. Recalling his violent past, he prepares for a desperate gamble. He grips his own thumb with a grimace. A sickening pop rings out as he forces the joint to snap. Old injuries prove useful in this nightmare. Slipping free from the ropes, he collapses to the floor. Sneaking past the feeding beasts requires absolute silence. Pain flares in his hand, but he cannot go empty-handed. He spots the weapon locker and prays the thieves missed it. Suddenly, a monster appears directly behind him. Cursing his luck, he realizes his end has arrived. Dr. Zhou observes the rapid plant growth with cold fascination. She ignores the captive man's plea to be released. Data collection is her only priority. A thunderous crash from above shakes the entire room. Dust falls as the ceiling begins to buckle. The man senses the impending danger. A massive creature bursts through the roof and lands with a heavy thud. It is a white-skinned shell monster. The blue-flamed woman reappears to tease him during the crisis. She touches his face mockingly while the beast roars. Warning him of the doctor's death, she pushes him to act. The monster lunges forward with lethal intent. Lunging for Dr. Zhou, he barely grabs her in time. He pulls her close as the floor shatters behind them. Blue energy surges through his veins as he leaps to safety. Not landing hard, he shields her from the debris. He asks if she is okay, his eyes wide with adrenaline. She stares back in stunned silence. Amused by his power, she regains her composure quickly. The monster turns back to finish the job. Standing tall, he prepares to face the abomination. This thing is more dangerous than anything they have seen. He tells the doctor to stay back while he handles the threat. Dr. Zhou warned him not to overdo it with his abilities. She acknowledged that while his methods were awkward, the results spoke for themselves. A playful smile touched her lips as she wondered if this was the right time for a certain conversation. Monsters loomed in the distance, their sharp forms ready to strike. He promised to give her a proper thanks once the trash was cleared away. Suddenly, the ceiling erupted as dozens of creatures descended like a hailstorm. Seeing them act as a collective unit caught him off guard. One monster was easy, but a swarm presented a much deadlier problem. He worried that overextending would leave him in a weakened state again. Dr. Zhou teased him about her reward while the beast closed the gap. They lunged forward with terrifying speed. Facing them head-on was the only option left. He blurred into motion, weaving through the jagged limbs of his attackers. From the sidelines, she watched closely to see where his true limits were hidden. Monitoring his internal energy showed his glycogen levels were still at peak capacity. He calculated that continuous acceleration would burn through his stamina too quickly. The solution was to activate his power only at the precise moment of impact. They tried to trap him in a pincer formation, but he just smirked. He refused to be treated like prey ever again. Time seemed to crawl as his perception accelerated beyond human limits. Every strike was telegraphed, allowing him to flip and dodge with ease. That was time to go on the offensive. He focused his speed into his fists, unleashing a devastating supersonic shockwave. The monsters were torn apart in an instant by the sheer pressure. He stood amidst the blue gore of his fallen enemies. This was only the beginning of the slaughter. Looking at the data, Dr. Zhou noted that he had barely consumed 10% of his reserves. She called out to her favorite test subject with a satisfied grin. She encouraged him to let loose and show her what he was truly capable of doing. He gritted his teeth, knowing she was analyzing every fiber of his being. Another wave of creatures swarmed him from every angle. He released a massive burst of energy that shook the entire room. Glowing blue veins pulsed across his skin as the power surged through him. His efficiency had improved drastically despite the intensity of the fight. Stepping over the mangled remains, she approached him with cold curiosity. The patterns on his back glowed with a ghostly light. She had a new question that needed an immediate answer. Her voice turned demanding as she told him to reveal everything he knew about the creatures. Elsewhere, a man lay broken in a pool of blood and monster parts. Josh Castillo snapped his eyes open, gasping for air. Confusion washed over him as he stared at the carnage surrounding his body. His hands were gripped tight around a bloodstained crowbar. He realized that he had somehow survived an encounter that should have killed him. Without that simple tool, his life would have ended right then and there. Fear gripped his heart as he wondered if he would be lucky a second time. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He answered with a trembling voice, only to hear his own name on the other end. A mysterious man with a cross tattoo called him by a title he had not heard in years. Keeping his secret was the only way to survive. He watched the girl adjust her posture as she asked for a simple favor. Reaching out, he carefully helped her with the zipper of her specialized suit. She warned him to look toward the ceiling immediately. Monsters were already crawling through the maintenance ducts above them. Cold air flooded the room as she threw on a jacket. They both stood frozen as a strange noise echoed from the shadows. A small child stood there with blood splattered across her face. He recognized her from the neighboring apartment. Before he could speak, the girl bolted down the dark corridor. They chased after her with mounting dread. Thick trails of blood coated the floor and walls of the hallway. Following the carnage led them to a pile of fresh corpses. The scale of the slaughter was beyond anything they expected. Stepping over the remains, they climbed the stairwell. He noticed the victims didn't die from monsters but from gunshot wounds. The child began to sob as they reached the next landing. There lay old Joe, a man who had been kind to him in his previous life. Blood pooled around the elderly man's motionless body. Memories of Joe sharing food during the first apocalypse flashed through his mind. It seemed the cruel world always took the good people first. Suddenly, a blood-stained hand reached up and grabbed his arm. He nearly jumped out of his skin as the corpse spoke. Old Joe was clinging to a final spark of life. The child looked up at the girl with desperate, tear-filled eyes. Seeing the red cross on her gear, the girl asked if she was a doctor. She begged the big sister to save her uncle. Moving with professional speed, the girl began to treat the wounds. Old Joe coughed and started to explain what happened. He had tried to lead survivors up the fire escape to safety. They were climbing when the real monster appeared. A man in a leopard print coat blocked their path. Without a word of warning, the stranger opened fire. Bullets tore through the heads of the innocent survivors. The man used the fallen bodies as bait to distract the monsters. He laughed while calling them weaklings who existed only to buy him time. Every plea for mercy was met with another muzzle flash. People tumbled down the stairs in a chaotic heap of limbs and lead. The child watched in horror as her world was destroyed. Ludalong sneered as he aimed his weapon at old Joe. A bullet pierced the old man's chest, sending him reeling. The killer didn't even look back as he continued his ascent. Finishing the bandages, the girl noted that the bullet missed the heart. The name of the murderer burned in the protagonist's mind. Fury radiated from him as he clenched his fists tight. Blue flames erupted from his skin as his power surged. He remembered the faces of the people Luo Dalong had slaughtered. The man had murdered a woman in cold blood just to clear a path. Stepping over her body, the killer had headed for the warehouse. He was currently searching for supplies, unaware of the shadow trailing him. Luo Dalong froze when he felt a sudden spike in temperature. Turning around, he saw a figure wreathed in ethereal blue fire. His eyes widened as he recognized the man he thought was dead. Panicking, he pulled his trigger and emptied his magazine. The protagonist moved like a blur, dodging every projectile. He lunged forward with a hand glowing with lethal energy. One swift strike sliced through the air with terrifying precision. The killer's arm fell to the floor before he could even scream. He grabbed the murderer by the face and slammed him against the wall. Luo Dalong gasped, asking why this was happening to him. He claimed they had no reason to fight. Looking down at the carnage below, the protagonist felt a cold realization. In this timeline, these crimes were still fresh and unpunished. He had wasted too much time being naive and building shelters. His anger wasn't just for the killer, but for his own hesitation. He vowed to never let another innocent person die for his mercy. With a roar of rage, he hurled the man into the abyss. He watched the villain fall toward the monsters waiting below. From this moment on, every threat would be met with immediate retribution. The doctor gestured toward the cramped space and noted the landlord used it for storage. She sifted through piles of junk looking for anything useful. Lighting a cigarette, she watched him settle onto a stack of wooden crates. He stared at his hand while questioning why his successful revenge felt so hollow. A haunting image of a blue spirit flickered in his mind like a persistent curse. Suddenly, a sharp smack to his head snapped him back to the present. She sat beside him and spoke about the impulsive nature of people with powers. A rare smile touched her lips as she thanked him for killing that bastard. Looking up, he asked if she shared a personal grudge against the man. Memories of a dark room and a pointed gun flashed through her mind. Sensing her pain, he promised not to pry any further into her past. Safety was a luxury they couldn't afford once they stepped past the heavy metal door. They looked into the dark maintenance area filled with pipes and ladders. Old Joe sat with a child near a small fire to keep the freezing air at bay. Outside, massive white skins patrolled the frozen ruins of the city. Restoring the heat required a dangerous trip into the monster-infested basement. The little girl let out a series of loud sneezes that echoed through the room. Death felt certain until old Joe pointed toward a hidden path. A loud metallic clang signaled the opening of the escape route. They peered down into the dark, yawning mouth of a garbage chute. He tumbled down the shaft and landed hard on a pile of refuse. Looking up, he gasped at the sight of the horror waiting below. White skins were fused together with the decaying remains of human residents. Red orbs pulsed with life inside a network of skeletal remains. The entire floor had been converted into a massive fleshy nest. Sweating from the sight, he wondered what could have built such a nightmare. This transformation was far beyond any normal biological process. The doctor landed gracefully behind him and scanned the perimeter. A heavy bang echoed as she secured their position. She pinned him down to keep him from making a sound. Pressing a finger to her lips, she watched a giant eye blink nearby. They sprinted past a towering beast that seemed to be guarding the area. He whispered a question about why she had followed him into this hell. She held up 2 fingers and explained the boiler switch required 2 operators, that if he collapsed alone, they would all freeze to death. A massive monster with a writhing tongue stepped into the light. He knew instantly that his remaining energy wouldn't be enough to win. Red orbs filled with stolen blood lined the walls like fruit. These fleshy pipes were pumping the fluid deeper into the structure. From a high window, old Joe and the girl watched the horror unfold. Enormous white limbs reached out to grab at the sky. Tendrils wrapped around the buildings and squeezed the concrete. The scale of the infestation covered the entire city block. At the center sat a bloated queen pulsing with a sickening red light. Looking at the creature, the girl wondered if it was even alive. She noticed a light blinking in a rhythmic pattern. It looked like a signal code used by the old world. She focused on the different arrangements of letters and numbers. Inside the building, old Joe used a flashlight to send a desperate warning. The girl struggled to translate the rapid flashes. She finally realized the message was a plea for them to stay away. Old Joe screamed in silence behind the glass as he was cornered. A giant white skin stood in the hallway and blocked their only exit. Peeking around the corner, he looked for a way to slip past. The monster turned its head when a loud noise distracted it. They moved quickly while the beast's back was turned. Navigating the nest required stepping over piles of biological waste. These structures were formed by thousands of smaller monsters merging together. Skulls were embedded in the walls like decorations in a charnel house. Recombination began as bone and muscle fused into a terrifying new shape. A sleek armored warrior stood where the mess of bodies had been. It reached into its own gut and pulled out a pulsing blue blade. Blue flames erupted from its joints as it took a combat stance. A sudden swish of air was the only warning before it moved. Dread pooled in his stomach when he felt the presence directly behind him. Realizing the danger too late, he tried to turn. The monster swung the energy blade with blinding speed. He barely threw himself out of the way as the strike narrowly missed. A strand of hair was sliced clean by the passing edge. Blood sprayed into the air from a shallow graze. The blue sword hummed with a lethal intensity. Shock paralyzed him because this creature was faster than his own enhanced reflexes. He struggled to catch his breath under the monster's cold gaze. This was no ordinary hunter. It was a specialized killer designed for one purpose. This guy is no ordinary warrior. Charging forward, the white armor monster moves with blinding speed. This beast is clearly more than just a simple machine. Its internal core pulses as it locks onto the doctor. Watching the beast approach, the doctor wonders why she is the primary target. Blue flames dance around the boy as he prepares for the impact. Stepping forward, the monster closes the distance in an instant. Shoving the woman aside, he barely manages to save her from the strike. Sharp blades tear through the air and find their mark. Now blood sprays everywhere as he screams in agony. A brutal cross-slash tears across his chest. Gasping for air, he realizes the enemy speed is far beyond his limits. The skeletal nightmare looms over him with a terrifying grin. Death feels certain as the monster prepares its final blow. Closing his eyes, he wonders if he's destined to die once again. Suddenly, a mysterious spirit appears in his mind with a haunting smile. She whispers that he should just run away and save himself. Hovering near his wound, she mocks his desperate attempt at heroism. This frozen world offers no mercy to anyone. Backing away now would mean losing everything he believes in. Shaking his head, he flatly refuses to abandon his humanity. Choosing to run now would make him no better than the villains he hates. That survival means nothing if he loses the very thing that makes him human. A confident smile returns to his face as he finds his resolve. Surprised by his reaction, the spirit looks on in confusion. Memories of the innocents' lives lost in the hallways fuel his spirit. Feeling the agony of others is the proof that he is still alive. Shouting at the darkness, he claims that his empathy is a source of strength. He remembers that even primitive humans help their wounded companions. His eye transforms into a glowing sigil of ancient power. Living blue tendrils burst from his back to stitch his wounds shut. Energy wraps around his frame to form a new kind of biomass. Hardening into a sleek suit, the armor pulses with an intense blue light. The power flows directly into the glowing symbol on his chest. Shocked by the sudden evolution, the doctor can only watch in silence. He catches the monster's blade with a deafening metallic clang. Dust and light explode from the point of contact. Impact tremors shake the entire room. Standing tall, the new warrior shields the doctor from any further harm. She looks up at his back with wide eyes. This power will now be used to protect every innocent soul. Standing firm, he prepares to counterattack. 2 armored giants face off in a high-stakes duel. Though it resembles the white armor, this form is fundamentally different. Grabbing his head, he feels the biomass beginning to darken and shift. The blue light turns into a menacing black with glowing neon lines. Darkness consumes his form as the true armor awakens. Smiling from the shadows, the spirit realizes the essence of power. Leaping forward, he delivers a punch that creates a massive shockwave. Moving like a blur, he strikes before the enemy can react. The force of the impact shatters the surrounding floor. The white armor is sent flying across the room. Pressing the advantage, he follows up with a lightning-fast kick. Every movement he makes is now faster and more precise than before. Speed alone is no longer enough to save the beast. Still, he pushes his body to reach even greater heights of speed. Their blades clash repeatedly as they move through the facility. Scanning the energy readings, the doctor sees a nearly unlimited supply of power. The nature of this biomass is unlike anything she has ever studied. Heat and energy radiate from the black suit as the battle rages on. Flickering blue light reflects in her eyes as the pressure mounts. Clenching his fist, he prepares to land a decisive blow. Both warriors are locked in a struggle that will decide their fate. Every strike carries the weight of a desperate struggle for survival. Blocking a heavy overhead swing, he feels the impact vibrate through his frame. Metal clangs against metal in a shower of sparks. A new strategy forms in his mind to end this fight once and for all. Vanishing from sight, he leaves the monster swinging at empty air. The beast looks around in total confusion as its target disappears. The doctor watches with bated breath as the final exchange begins. One last command to stop echoes through the hall. Crashing into the ground, a massive blast of energy levels the area. The white monster recovers and lunges at the defenseless doctor. Time seems to slow down as the sharp edge inches closer to her head. Just then, he appears behind the beast and declares that he is caught up. At this moment, the predator becomes the prey. Lunging into the air, he prepares his most powerful attack. Multiple phantoms of black armor tear through the white monster simultaneously. The Phantom of Doom leaves the enemy with no hope of survival. With a final explosion of blue mist, the white armor is completely destroyed. The doctor remains unharmed as the blue energy dissipates. Collapsing against the wall, she catches her breath in the aftermath. Reaching out a hand to help her up, his face returns to its human state. He looks exhausted but relieved that she is safe. Blue markings fade from his skin as the adrenaline begins to subside. On the control panel, the temperature indicators begin to climb rapidly. Reaching 26 degrees, the system confirms that heat is restored. In the shelter below, the survivors celebrate the return of the warmth. Holding her scarf tight, a young girl wonders when her mother will come back. Suddenly, a loud clang echoes through the tunnels. Hearing the sound, a man wonders if the white armor has returned. The heavy metal door creaked open as they finally returned to the hideout. Old Joe looked up with wide, bloodshot eyes and breathed a sigh of relief that they were back. His bandages were soaked and his wounds were reopening from the stress of waiting. Just then, a strange scratching sound echoed from the heating ducts above. The metal groaned under a heavy weight. Lin Mo told the old man to stay calm because it was likely just an illusion. Suddenly, the vent cover shattered into pieces. A massive object slammed onto the floor with a deafening bang. Smoke filled the room as a dark silhouette rose from the wreckage. Maggie gasped and called out for her mother. Two coughing figures emerged from the haze instead of a monster. The young girl began explaining how the blonde man had saved her during the chaos. Grinning widely, the stranger recognized Lin Mo and called him a brat. He lunged forward with his arms wide for a hug. Lin Mo recoiled in pure confusion. The man claimed he had traveled across the entire continent on foot just to find him. Rage boiled in Lin Mo's eyes because he had no idea who this person was. Lin Mo swung his fist. The blow landed hard, teeth rattled. The intruder went flying. The blonde man rubbed his bruised cheek and whined about the harsh treatment. Staring into the distance, Lin Mo wondered if his resurrection had somehow altered the past. The woman mentioned their old dreams of forming a legendary band together. Lin Mo pushed the annoying minion away and demanded to be left alone. His mind raced with the terrifying implications of the butterfly effect. Perhaps the timeline was far more broken than he realized. He retreated into his consciousness to demand answers from the parasite dwelling within him. Silence was his only response. Her selfishness made his blood cold. Dr. Zhou watched the bickering and reminded them that catching up was a luxury they didn't have. She pointed toward the window to show them the true scale of the nightmare. A massive white creature loomed over the city like a god of death. It was birthing children that would soon consume everything. Lin Mo clenched his fist and declared he would use his own power to stop it. The doctor noted that his blue light had grown significantly brighter. He realized that activating his black form required an immense amount of heat. Without a constant source of energy, he would be defenseless against the mutated armor. Survival demanded a sacrifice he wasn't sure he could make. Suddenly, a desperate plan clicked into place. He turned to the doctor and asked for extra metal plates. Grabbing old Joe's crowbar, he prepared for backbreaking labor. He began prying up the floorboards with frantic energy. Hunger was the greatest enemy they faced in the coming days. Dr. Joe mocked his idea of starting a farm in the middle of a war zone. He ignored her and insisted that a laborer's skills were his only path forward. With more survivors arriving, the food shortage would soon turn them into animals. He knew exactly what desperate people did when their stomachs were empty. The doctor blew a cloud of smoke and stared at the empty tanks. They couldn't create food out of thin air. Lin Mo stepped into the hallway and noticed the floor was eerily clean. Every single corpse had been dragged away. A massive scavenger was likely nearby collecting the dead for the nest. Time was running out before the floor was completely assimilated. He had to eliminate the source before the mutation became unstoppable. The blonde idiot suddenly grabbed his shoulder and asked where he was going alone. Lin Mo's eyes twitched with pure irritation. The man joked that Lin Mo was just embarrassed to have him as a friend. He continued to ramble about their shared history as they climbed the stairs. Lin Mo covered his ears to drown out the annoying chatter. He froze as a shadow fell over them. A horrific rib-faced monster blocked their path and let out a piercing shriek. Under the rain-slicked bridge, Kurt sat alone with his guitar and the rats. They were both outcasts now with nowhere else to go. The steady downpour felt like it would never end. Gasping for breath, Lin Mo finally found his friend hiding in the shadows. He looked down at the other boy with a mixture of pity and resolve. A sharp grin spread across his face as he teased Kurt for choosing such a pathetic hiding spot. Pointing toward the city, he declared that running away should at least be done in style. Kurt looked away in annoyance but could not hide his desperation. Lin Mo reached out a calloused hand. He promised they would face the world together as best friends. Hesitating for only a second, Kurt reached back. Their hands met in a pact that changed everything. Back in the cold reality of the building, Lin Mo grabbed Kurt by the collar. He shouted for them to run as the massive creature lunged. They scrambled through the corridors where the pulsing blood nest had already claimed the walls. Lin Mo joked about running with style just like the old days. Kurt barked back that now was hardly the time for nostalgia. Suddenly, the concrete wall behind them began to buckle and moan. A massive pale hand shattered the barrier with ease. Lin Mo realized they were out of time. The monster dragged its bloated body into the hallway and hissed. Before he could react, the creature fingers clamped around his skull. He felt his bones begin to groan under the pressure. Kurt did not hesitate and lit a glass bottle filled with fuel. With a roar, he hurled the Molotov directly at the beast's chest. Flames erupted across the monster's white hide. The force of the blast sent Lin Mo flying into a thick patch of webbing. He tried to pull away, but the blood nest was alive. It began to drain his very life force through the sticky strands. Panic flared as he reached out for help that was not there. The webs climbed higher, binding his limbs tight. His vision began to blur while he struggled to breathe. He wondered if this was the end of his journey. Darkness swallowed him until he stood in a chamber of rusted wire. Something moved in the center of the room. A girl sat bound and broken in the middle of a barbed cage. He could not tell if she was a human or some new form of armor. As he stepped closer, her eyes snapped open. The world shifted violently under his feet. Suddenly, he was standing back on the bridge in the pouring rain. Confusion washed over him as he stared at the familiar skyline. He looked down and saw two figures from his past. His younger self was shaking hands with a younger Kurt. The memory felt twisted and wrong. Young Kurt pointed a finger at the older Lin Mo and called him a minion. The boy who shared his face stared back with wide, terrified eyes. They shook hands again, but the atmosphere turned dark. The younger version of himself sneered and called him a thief. A terrifying blue light glowed in the child's eyes. A hand suddenly broke through the vision and grabbed his wrist. Kurt was there, straining to pull him from the nest's grasp. He screamed at Lin Mo to stop being so pathetic and move. The webbing stretched and snapped as he was hauled to safety. Dazed, Lin Mo rubbed his head and tried to process the nightmare. There was no time to think as the white monster loomed over them again. Kurt prepared another bottle, but Lin Mo told him to hold back. He noticed the monster was not just resisting the fire. It was actually absorbing the heat to close its wounds. Kurt marveled at how his friend could analyze the situation while nearly dying. Defying the warning, Kurt threw the bottle anyway to buy a few seconds. The explosion did nothing but fuel the creature's hunger. Lin Mo knew he had to finish this now. He tried to summon his black fury, but his body refused to transform. He realized he lacked the raw power to win a head-on fight. Then a new plan formed in his mind. If the monster could absorb heat, then so could he. He ignited his blue state and charged straight into the flames. A prayer for the dead drifts over a lonely grave. For a month they have lost men to the white armors. No matter where they hide, the monsters find them. Standing in the snow, Lin Mo watches his companion pray. He tells old Joe that enough is enough. A new fire burns in his eyes as he declares he will not run anymore. Flames lick the surface of a twisted experiment. Lin Mo realizes that heat can be converted into raw. Dark fluid begins to consume his body. He smiles as the armor bonds to his skin. His fist clenches with newfound power. Suddenly, a massive white armor giant looms over them. Lin Mo surges forward like a shadow. His footsteps crack the ground. Kurt cowers as the pressure from the clash explodes. A massive shockwave ripples through the air. Kurt looks up in total disbelief. Lin Mo stands tall in his sleek dark. He tells Kurt that his old self is gone. Kurt ignores the gravity of the situation and praises the cool outfit. He even asks where he can get one for himself. Framing the hero with his fingers, he admits he can barely recognize him. Lin Mo facepalms at the absurdity. He asks how many explosives Kurt has left. Kurt gives a thumbs up while showing off a case full of Molotovs. The giant monster begins to stir again. Kurt asks if they should take the chance to run. Lin Mo looks back at the grave marker. His armored eye glows with a cold blue light. He decides that running away is simply too lame. He launches himself at the beast with blinding speed. Kurt watches as the dark blur engages the titan. A heavy strike lands directly on the monster's chest. The impact sends chunks of stone flying everywhere. They dance in the air as Lin Mo evades every clumsy swipe. He realizes the beast has high regeneration but moves too slowly. A flurry of punches rains down on the creature's thick hide. Blue sparks fly with every impact. Lin Mo lands and prepares for the next phase. He shouts that it is now Kurt's turn. A volley of Molotovs hits the giant and explodes into a fireball. Lin Mo explains that the monster's fat is highly flammable. The giant screams as blue flames engulf its upper body. Lin Mo moves in close to the heat. He begins to absorb the thermal energy directly from the enemy. His armor glows with an intense blue radiance. Power surges through his limbs until he can barely contain it. He steps forward with a heavy thud. Spinning into a high-speed charge, he breaks the sound barrier. The force of the movement shatters the surrounding walls. A massive vortex of energy rips into the... Lin Mo lands the final blow with overwhelming force. His fist glows with the heat of the absorbed fire. He pokes at the monster's eye as the rest of its body disintegrates. The entire skeleton is exposed before it finally shatters into dust. Debris rains down on the battlefield. Kurt is stunned that Lin Mo actually broke the sound barrier. The armor melts away as Lin Mo returns to his human form. He admits that even an unreliable minion like Kurt was helpful. Kurt immediately ruins the moment by being loud and silly. Lin Mo stares at him with pure regret. A desperate sprint ends at the threshold of room 409. He questions if they are only there to scavenge seeds and nutrient solutions. The blonde companion wonders when he even learned how to farm. Questions about superpowers and hidden strengths start to fill the air. Suddenly, a sharp buzzing sound erupts from the metal collar around his neck. The blonde man leans in with wide eyes to investigate the strange noise. Irritated by the proximity, the boy snaps at him to back away immediately. Not a woman's voice crackles over the frequency, screaming about pain and bleeding. It is the doctor, and she sounds like she is in the middle of a crisis. He demands to know if the collar has been a hidden communication device all along. The woman ignores his anger and reports finding a stash of old equipment in the warehouse. They have uncovered an old radio station and various gardening supplies. Among the rubble sits a bag of high-grade nutrients intended for flowers. Waiting for the catch, he asks what else she has found. She mentions a personal request that requires him to enter a restricted area. Stepping back into the dark, sterile clinic feels like walking into a trap. His companion is stunned that such a professional lab exists within the crumbling building. The target is a heavy metal capsule sitting prominently on a table. Looking at the object, he feels a wave of intense suspicion wash over him. He realizes the woman might not be a simple doctor all. A bright yellow biohazard label on the side warns of extreme biological danger. Questions about her research into forbidden armor technology fill his mind. He wonders who this woman truly is as he stares at her distant image in his head. Suddenly, the blonde idiot manages to bypass the security on a nearby computer. A sharp slap to the head stops the tampering before any damage is done. Messing with her private files could lead to a death sentence for them both. The blonde man protests, claiming he is far from an idiot. Just then, a flicker of restricted information catches the boy's attention. He kicks his partner out of the room, ordering him to find more useful supplies. The door slams shut, he sits down, the screen glows. Fingers fly across the keyboard in a frantic search for the truth. Not one specific file finally opens under his command. An old photograph reveals a younger, shyer version of the doctor in a professional setting. Her identification card displays a symbol and a rank she never mentioned. Everything begins to click into place as the truth settles in. Returning to the base, they find the wounded old man waiting for their arrival. The atmosphere is heavy with unspoken secrets as they regroup. Doc watches them with a cold, calculating gaze from the shadows. They present the bags of seeds recovered from the upper floors. Food is a luxury they cannot afford, making these seeds their only hope for survival. He suggests they begin the planting process without any further delay. The old man offers to help, despite his bandages and broken body. Doc steps forward, claiming her expertise in botany and biochemistry is needed. He stares at her, his expression hardening as he recalls the files he saw. When the blonde man tries to offer his help, he is told to go sit at the kid's table. Pulling her aside to a quiet corner, he prepares for a final confrontation. She reaches out for the capsule with a calm, expectant hand. He pulls it back, refusing to let it go so easily. He demands an explanation and her true name before he hands over the prize. She lights a cigarette and smiles, looking entirely unbothered by his discovery. Her mocking expression confirms that she led him to the lab on purpose. The capsule was merely a lure to see if he was clever enough to find her secrets. Finally, she reveals her true identity as a former national security agent named Joe Shuya. He passes the metal container over, watching her reaction closely. She opens the capsule to reveal a cluster of glowing organic blue orbs. This was never bait, but a collection of experimental seeds that could change everything. The woman pointed at the strange creature and noted the terrifying similarity to his own transformation. She held up a glowing energy storage organ that functioned just like his own body. He demanded to know why she was revealing her identity now. Ignoring his question, she explained that the city needed energy to survive the massive growth spreading outside. Huge white vines choked the buildings like a parasitic web. She claimed the only way to accelerate growth was for him to enter his red limit state. Red markings burned across his skin as his power flickered. His current organs were simply too inefficient to maintain that level of output. She suggested that adding this new organ would solve everything. He clutched his head in confusion while she moved in closer. A cold smile crossed her face as she prepared to finish the procedure. Fear gripped him when he realized there was no turning back. Suddenly, thick black tendrils erupted from his chest and lunged for the tank. The woman recoiled in pure shock as the energy took a life of its own. It looked like a living nightmare tearing through his clothes. He screamed in agony while the black fury demanded the white armor lump. The glass shattered instantly. Red light exploded from his eyes as the transformation completed. A massive shadow loomed behind him like a demonic guardian. Shaking with adrenaline, he watched the darkness recede into his skin. She whispered about the parasite and wondered how such a mass fit inside him. The energy vanished back into his spine. He smirked because the power felt intoxicating. Focus shifted to a single green seedling fighting for life in a small basket. He looked at the hydroponic racks and knew the clock was ticking. A little girl named Maggie peeked over the edge with wide eyes. He told her it was just a tiny lettuce plant. She compared the small sprout to herself because they were both little. Sadness filled her eyes as she stared at the dirt. He reached out to comfort her while she worried about her father. She did not even remember what real lettuce tasted like. Her mother promised they would eat burgers together when her dad returned. The mother's expression darkened at the mention of her husband. He realized the man was likely never coming back. Silence fell over the group as the weight of their loss settled in. Corbin broke the tension by asking about the wheat seeds. They dreamed of bread and burgers while the world froze outside. He promised Maggie a feast once the plants grew tall. She asked how long it would take for them to grow. Flexing his muscles, he claimed to be a god of agriculture from ancient times. Maggie cheered with newfound hope. The mother thanked him and he introduced himself as Lin Mo. Despair still lingered because they were all stuck in this dying facility. Corbin started to brag about Lin Mo's real strength. Panicking, Lin Mo slammed his hand over his friend's mouth. He hissed that no one could know about his true powers. The danger of exposure was too high to risk. The woman from the lab lit a cigarette and spoke of her time in the Secret Service. She revealed a classified program involving immersive infiltration. Agents were brainwashed into believing they were normal civilians to act as human monitors. These spies reported everything to the National Security Bureau. She warned him that the monitors could be anywhere among them. If the government found him, they would treat him like an animal. He brushed off the concern and laughed with his friends to keep up appearances. Corbin continued to hype him up as the savior of their hunger. Once the room was empty, he scanned the shadows for any watchers. He confirmed he was finally alone. Standing before the racks, he reached toward the dying sprouts. He closed his eyes and concentrated his will. Red veins pulsed with heat as he forced his body into the red limit. Energy flooded the room as the miracle began. High above the planet, a cold signal flickers back to life. Technicians scramble to reboot systems and reconnect with the eye in the sky. They need to know what happened to the frozen wasteland below. 3 drones launch from the wreckage of a ground vehicle. Their cameras hum as they navigate the sub-zero temperatures. Floating through the ruined city, they search for any sign of life. One camera pans across a shattered building. Suddenly, a strange growth appears on the side of a skyscraper. It looks like a massive fleshy web. Without warning, something slams into the drone. Blood spatters across the lens as a nightmare emerges from the shadows. A colossal white entity with a single pulsing eye looms over the wreckage. It crushes the remaining drones with terrifying ease. Fresh blood drips from its pale limbs. Deep inside a nearby base, the floor begins to heave. He wonders if an earthquake is tearing the facility apart. The doctor points toward the window with a trembling hand. Outside, the world is turned into a scene from hell. A massive blue eye stares directly into the room. This is the child born from the mother's womb. It searches the building with predatory focus. Its gaze locks onto him, seeking the power within his mind. The creature strikes the building with a massive hand. Inside, the survivors scream as the walls begin to buckle. Glowing energy gathers in the monster's palm. He lunges forward to shield the doctor as the ceiling gives way. A massive explosion levels the structure in a cloud of dust and debris. He grits his teeth against the weight of the rubble. Pure determination burns in his eyes. Holding the doctor close, he stands among the ruins. He asks if she is hurt. She looks up at him with a strange, knowing smile. She notes how fast his heart is racing. Around them, chunks of stone begin to float. The monster is not finished yet. He realizes the air is thick with magnetic energy. The giant's eye glows with a lethal light. It releases a wave of power that sends debris flying like bullets. Shockwaves rip through the area. The other survivors huddle together in terror. They can only watch as the world falls apart. The blonde man looks out over the devastation. He shouts for his friend, fearing the worst. Looking into the massive crater, he sees only smoke. The destruction is absolute. A voice calls out from the darkness below. The doctor reaches up, pulling herself from the pit. He asks where the test subject went. Just then, the monster appears right behind them. They freeze as death stares them in the face. Suddenly, a streak of crimson energy slashes through the air. The doctor recognizes that familiar red flash. They can hardly believe what they are seeing. The giant creature is sent reeling backward. A new shadow falls over the battlefield. Standing tall, a black armored titan prepares for war. The lens of the last surviving drone cracked against the frozen earth. Static filled the screens of the command center as the signal finally died. Inside the armored vehicle, the operators stared at the empty monitors in silence. They couldn't risk sending a scouting team into the unknown blizzard. Outside, the snow continued to bury the ruins of the city. Suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the silence. From the center of the blast, a dark figure clad in crimson armor emerged. This was the power of the reburned embers. He didn't hesitate for a single second. Launching himself forward, he struck the towering monster with enough force to shatter the ground. The beast retaliated by lifting massive chunks of debris into the air. He dodged through the falling rocks with lethal grace. His power wasn't a wildfire, but a silent eternal. High above, the monster gathered the rubble into a crushing sphere. It threw the mass down with the weight of a mountain. Clenching his fist, the warrior felt the heat of his soul reach a breaking point. He met the impact head-on and punched through the core of the debris. The sky rained fire and stone as the sphere disintegrated. Below, the survivors watched the destruction in utter terror. They couldn't decide if the Red Warrior was a savior sent from heaven or a devil from the depths. Walking through the smoke, the warrior finally came to a halt. His mind drifted away from the battlefield and into a cold, dark void. A mysterious woman sat waiting for him among the blue flames. She mocked his human emotions while staring him down with piercing eyes. He demanded to know the truth behind the monsters he was fighting. Smiling cruelly, she explained that the white armors were nothing more than empty shells. They were the soulless bodies left behind by his own deaths in other timelines. Every time he jumped to a new world, a monster was born from his discarded corpse. He wasn't being reborn, he was simply traveling across parallel universes. The realization hit him harder than any physical blow. He was the source of the very nightmare he was trying to stop. Deep inside the high-security vaults, the search for the monster's delivery begins. Cutting through the heavy seals, the leader wonders if their boss will be angry about the breach. A pale face stares back from inside a glass jar. Suddenly, a headless body wreathed in blue fire appears in the corridor. Searching for its lost parts, the creature demands to know where its head has been hidden. High above the ground, the spirit moves like a blur of cold energy. Every movement creates a whirlwind of frost and destruction. Bracing for the coming impact, the armored warrior prepares his blades. His companion suggests that since the enemy is a special case, they should simply ask her for the truth. Arguments break out between them regarding the nature of her kind. She lectures him that time is not linear and he should read more books. Stop acting like a child, he screams as the pressure mounts. Crap, he mutters while the enemy closes the gap instantly. Blinding speed makes the creature almost impossible to track. Blue light gathers in the monster's palms as it prepares a lethal strike. Dodging at the last microsecond, the warrior feels the air ripple. This thing is faster than anything he has ever faced. Smashing the floor, the creature sends a shockwave through the building. A heavy hand pins the rubble down with sheer force. Floating helplessly, the warrior realizes he has lost his footing. Is this the power of gravity manipulation? Grabbing him by the face, the monster begins to tighten its grip. The creature starts absorbing all the heat from his body. Despair fills his eyes as his internal systems begin to fail. Are they truly from the same origin? The monster wonders. Sucked dry of his energy, the girl inside him decides she has had enough. There she goes again, meddling in a fight she was supposed to observe. What is happening? He gasps as blue limbs erupt from his own back. Tearing through the armor, a second presence forces the monster away. A new form begins to manifest from the shadows of his soul. Manifesting with a terrifying scream, the internal spirit takes physical shape. Standing tall, a queen of frost and armor looks down at her opponent. "Not you," the warrior whispers while looking at the woman standing behind him. Turning slowly, the armored warrior cannot believe his eyes. She smiles, explaining that she was never going to just watch from the inside. With the second core secured, she can finally maintain a separate body. Lunging forward, the headless monster refuses to back down. Aiming a powerful kick, the beast tries to reclaim its dominance. Blocking the strike effortlessly, the queen proves her superior strength. Sparks fly as their legs collide in a burst of energy. The monster tries its gravity trick once more to pin her down. It is useless against a being of her caliber. "Don't worry," she whispers while stepping toward the stunned warrior. "Let's ignite the power within you," she says as she touches his chest. He gasps as a surge of pure heat floods his veins. A massive explosion of blue and red energy levels the room. Energy waves ripple outward, shattering every window in the vicinity. Reaching into the air, the queen prepares her final move. Summoning a crystalline blade, she grips the hilt of a star-shaped sword. The headless monster senses the shift in the atmosphere. Striking with the force of a falling comet, she cuts through the air. The monster's armor cracks and shatters under the weight of the blow. "I found 13, a voice crackles over the radio from a distance. Binoculars track the chaos from a nearby skyscraper. It is not far, but the man in the white hat hesitates to move. "Watch this," the queen says as she prepares the true power of the Black Fury. Standing amidst the frost, she looks like a goddess of war. It's a waste to fight with bare hands when you have such potential. But the monster is not finished yet. That guy can also summon weapons from the void. Summoning a jagged trident of blue ice, the headless beast prepares for the second round. Priest Cross adjusted his hat while watching the chaos unfold below. He had not expected the girl known as 13 to be pushed into such a state. Originally, his plan was simple. He wanted to sneak her into the common shells to locate a secret bunker. But this unexpected harvest was far more interesting. Irina stood beside him and wondered if they should jump in now. Patience was a virtue she still needed to learn. As members of the prophetic association, they had to tread carefully. Irina stood ready with her sword at her hip. She didn't like waiting while others fought. Jinyu suddenly grabbed her from behind and told the girl to relax. She insisted that Irina was still just a child. Irina struggled against the embrace with a look of pure annoyance. Cross ignored their bickering to focus on the distant battlefield. The stage was finally set for the plot to unfold. Far below, a massive scythe sliced through the air with terrifying speed. The ground shattered under the weight of the impact. A massive wave of energy swept across the ruins. Worm stood his ground while the wind roared around him. He analyzed the enemy's movements with cold precision. The white-skinned monster stood tall despite the pressure. It moved with a speed that defied logic. Worm held his partner close and prepared for the next exchange. Ordinary shells could never use an ability like that. He knew the enemy was something far more dangerous. It was a vessel where the soul and body were completely disconnected. A superhuman monster stood before them. Watching from the shadows, the commander hoped her test subject would not disappoint. Worm focused on his breathing. He remembered how the enemy used attraction force from its white parts. The bronze sections were used for repulsion. A plan finally formed in his mind. He turned to his partner and asked for more firepower. She gave him a knowing smile. They reached out and locked hands. Energy surged between them instantly. He placed his hand over her core to synchronize their power. Veins of blue light erupted across her skin. The air screamed as they prepared to strike. Worm moved like a shadow through the debris. Every step cracked the pavement. A pillar of red energy blasted toward the target. The enemy tried to dodge, but the attack was too fast. A violent explosion consumed the street. The white-skinned monster was caught directly in the center of the flame. Alarms flashed within its glowing visor. A massive pillar of light reached into the sky. The shockwave leveled the surrounding buildings. When the smoke cleared, the enemy lay broken in the rubble. Worm's blade hummed with residual heat. He stepped through the crystalline remains of the battlefield. But the fight was far from over. He noticed the enemy's left hand was still pulsing with repulsion force. It would use that force as a shield if he attacked from the left. He needed to control the path of the engagement. Sprinting forward, he leaped into the air. He swung his massive sword down from the right side. The enemy was forced to use attraction force to counter him. This was the opening he needed. Attraction force cannot be used for defense, so she can only change the path of the strike. He realizes her body is acting like a giant magnet. These magnetic fluxes will become his new acceleration zones. He lunges forward with enough speed to tear the air apart. The red blade descends like a falling star. He pours every ounce of strength into this single moment. A deafening explosion shatters the silence of the night. The ground erupts in a massive shockwave of dust and stone. Debris rains down on the ruined street. The red warrior drives his weapon straight through the target. He watches as the energy pierces clean through her chest. 13 falls back as her power begins to flicker and fade. Suddenly, a man in a white suit prays for the Lord to protect the Holy Child. Cross activates his golden pilgrimage and light floods the area. A hand reaches out through the shimmering air. Iron lands in the center of the crater. She ignores the frantic questions coming through her earpiece. Her eyes glow with an eerie green light as she focuses. 13 swings her massive blue blade toward the newcomer. Iron watches the reflection of the attack in her own pupils. She stands perfectly still as the tip of the blade stops inches away. With a sudden blur of motion, she draws her own weapon. Green energy arcs across the battlefield in a deadly circle. The red warrior watches the clash with growing disbelief. He realizes this girl is no ordinary human. Iron activates a strange device and blocks of matter begin to float. She manipulates the environment with effortless grace. 13 attempts to strike from behind. Iron senses the danger and readies her guard. Their blades meet with a shower of sparks. The red warrior intervenes and pulls 13 away from the girl. Here's the final extraction sequence. She looks up at the skyscraper to lock her coordinates. Cross warns her to jump before the floor is taken with her. Iron grumbles about how troublesome the mission has become. Lin Mo watches the golden light envelop the girl. A massive flash consumes the street. Han Jinyu catch in as she teleports back to safety. The girl finds herself crushed in a tight embrace. She screams in frustration and tells the woman to let go. Han Jinyu just smiles and tells her she did a wonderful job. Cross explains that his ability has very strict limits. Iron hurls the device at his head in a fit of rage. They have successfully retrieved 13, but her body is gone. A small glowing essence floats inside a containment jar. The red warrior stares at the empty spot where his enemies stood. He admits that they have completely escaped. Smoke drifts through the ruins of the apartment building. Joe coughs and asks if the nightmare is finally over. The little girl looks around and asks where the dark big brother went. Joe stares into the abyss with a look of pure despair. He wonders if Lin Mo fell into the darkness. A voice from above asks what everyone is looking at. Lin Mo leans casually against a doorway on the 6th floor. Joe sighs in relief and thinks it must be a blessing from God. The woman grabs Lin Mo and insists on checking his head. He tries to pull away and claims he is perfectly fine. She leans in and whispers that they have to make the act look real. The group gathers in the cold remains of the factory floor. Shockwaves from the fight have shattered all the heating pipes. Joe looks completely dejected as they face the freezing night. Lin Mo tells him the situation is not as bad as it seemed. He noticed that the blood nests have vanished from the lower levels. They might be the only survivors left in the entire building. They need to scavenge supplies from the abandoned apartments. Lin Mo tells Joe not to worry so much about the future. Joe prepares to tell everyone to move out. Suddenly his phone begins to vibrate with an urgent call. He looks at the screen and realizes the timing is terrible. A massive armored transport truck plows through the snow. Armed soldiers step out into the middle of the street. Zion White identifies himself as a secret agent for the Bureau. He tells the group he is here under orders from the bunker. He pulls out a digital ID and reveals their true mission. They are here to capture the superhuman known as Zero. Just because the monsters below had vanished did not mean they were safe. Shivering in the cold, she wondered if the nightmare was truly over. Danger still lurked in the shadows of the frozen world. A more immediate problem was brewing within their sanctuary. The central heating system had completely failed. Pointing toward the ceiling, she explained that the situation was critical. Moving the base was now their only chance at survival. He suggested taking advantage of the quiet to relocate immediately. Lower floors still had functioning systems they could exploit. Being the only ones left in the building gave them total freedom. Defense was just as important as warmth in this new reality. He gestured toward the security office with a grim look. Joe was asked about the weapons stored for self-defense. Due to the rough history of the area, the equipment had been significantly upgraded. Joe confirmed they had barricades and wire netting ready for use. Doubts lingered about whether metal wire could stop such supernatural monsters. Barbed wire seemed like a thin hope against the white skins. Suddenly, the musician chimed in with a ridiculous claim. He believed a specific tune could freeze the creatures in their tracks. Maybe the power of music was the secret weapon they needed. Skepticism filled the room as the survivors stared in disbelief. Joe couldn't believe his ears after everything they had seen. Ignoring the nonsense, he ordered the team to prepare for a descent. The dark hallways below were waiting for them. Corbin was told to stop dawdling and focus on the mission. Packing his guitar away was the only priority for the eccentric man. He treated the instrument like his own child. Looking around the condo later, Corbin noted how luxurious the living conditions seemed. It felt suspicious compared to their old life in Seattle. Normalcy had become a rare and expensive luxury in the apocalypse. Even a simple room felt like an extravagant dream. Outside, the white skins had turned the city into a frozen graveyard. Serenity was a fragile thing that could break at any moment. Water flowed tired skin as Sonia sought a moment of peace. She needed time to wash away the stress of the hunt. Her hidden revealed her true identity as a high-level biosafety field agent. Secrets were being kept even among the closest allies. Sorting out feelings was a luxury they barely possessed. Memories of lost family members provided the only reason to keep fighting. Even with wounds on their souls, they had to survive. Joe stared into the mirror, preparing for a more brutal kind of survival. He reached for a mask that would hide his humanity. The time had come for total honesty between old friends. Standing firm, he prepared to reveal a secret that would change everything. Corbin was called over for a serious conversation. The truth he was about to hear was almost inconceivable. He warned that what he was about to say would be hard to accept. Corbin wondered if the constant fighting had finally broken his friend's mind. There was no trace of a joke in those cold, serious eyes. His brain wasn't faulty, but the reality was far from normal. He pointed out the obvious inconsistencies in their reunion. The real Lin Mo would have recognized his best friend instantly. Finally, the truth came out like a physical blow. The man standing there was a ghost from another timeline. This soul was simply occupying a familiar body. The original owner of this shell was no longer present. Silence followed the heavy confession as Corbin processed the horror. Hiding the truth would only lead to betrayal in the dark days ahead. He watched for a reaction, expecting to be cast out. Corbin considered the idea of a friend who grew up without a dark past. A new introduction was the only way to bridge the gap. Corbin reached out his hand with a knowing smirk. Lighting a cigarette, he accepted the impossible reality. Regardless of the timeline, he still saw the man as Lin Mo. The cool act hadn't changed even across different worlds. Their bond was sealed with a firm grip and a promise of loyalty. Somewhere in the frozen city, a different group was on the move. Heavy tires churned through the deep snow as an armored truck approached. A rescue team was arriving, but their motives remained unclear. They questioned why they were assisting the secretive fieldworkers. Their leader remained stoic, focused entirely on the grim mission. Agent White explained that the information blackout was a calculated move. His eyes were sharp as he discussed the true enemy. Humans were the ones who had cut the communications to the world. The truck plowed through the deep snow as the explanation began. National security protocols were supposed to save them, but everything collapsed into chaos. Standing by was no longer an option when communications vanished. Inside the armored vehicle, the older man argued that monsters were not the true threat. Only humans possessed the intelligence to sabotage the world so effectively. Intelligence gathered in the bunker pointed to a single conclusion. A secret organization had planned this glacial catastrophe from the shadows. No official records existed for this group within any global intelligence network. The pink-haired woman leaned back, skeptical of such a massive oversight. Even if they were ghosts, humans always left a trail behind. She mentioned the intelligence department had seen untraceable entities before. He called them psychics. If he had not seen it himself, he would have laughed at the idea. Pulling several dog tags from his collar, he showed the price of that encounter. His entire team had been wiped out by these invisible enemies. Now the higher-ups were desperate to find a psychic of their own to recruit. Corporal Lee wondered if they were just looking for more weapons. The driver gripped the wheel tight as the mission details became clear. Their only lead was a target known as Zero. Finding him was the only way to understand the monsters they faced. Suddenly, the truck screeched to a halt in the middle of the frozen road. Corporal Lee leaned forward to see what blocked their path. Two survivors stood in the headlights holding hands. The older agent sighed at the awkward timing of the encounter. Stepping out into the cold, he asked if they needed help. The couple begged to be saved from the hell Brooklyn had become. He explained they were a rescue team on a critical mission. Shock washed over the woman when she realized they would not be taken aboard. He offered them supplies from the truck as a compromise. Desperation turned to cold fury in the survivors' eyes. They did not want food, they wanted out. He told them to calm down, but it was too late. The man lunged forward with a hidden blade. Screaming in rage, the survivor tried to gut the officer. A single shot rang out from the truck's roof. The silver-haired agent pulled the trigger without hesitation. Blood sprayed the snow as the man's head snapped back. Above them, another survivor appeared on a bridge with a Molotov cocktail. The agent shifted his aim instantly. Flames flickered as the bottle was lit. He fired 3 quick rounds. The glass shattered while still in the man's hand. A massive explosion engulfed the attacker in a ball of fire. Screams of agony filled the air as the burning body collapsed. On the ground, the woman continued her frantic attack. The burning man fell from the bridge like a discarded torch. With a cold expression, the older agent put a bullet through the man's skull. He turned his pistol on the woman and fired twice. She fell back into the snow, dead before she hit the ground. Another man charged from the ruins wielding an axe. The silver-haired agent drew his sidearm in a blur of motion. He squeezed the trigger as the axe swung high. Bullets tore through the attacker's chest and stomach. The threat was neutralized in a matter of seconds. Looking down at the carnage, the team confirmed the area was clear. Corporal Lee stared at his father, unable to believe the brutality. They drove away, leaving the bodies to freeze in the wasteland. In this new world, even survivors were just another kind of monster. Away from the carnage, a blonde man organized the latest technology. He checked on the progress of their new facility. They were turning the interior into a greenhouse for survival. The final plans for the base were laid out across the table alongside a heavy weapon. They would transform the eastern side into a greenhouse to ensure a steady supply of food. Living quarters would occupy the west side while the higher floors remained too damaged for use. The security was the main priority, with traps set at every entrance and a command center monitoring the cameras. Despite the preparation, he felt a nagging sense that something was still missing. Laughter echoed as the old man bragged about his youthful marksmanship. He claimed he could fire with just one hand, prompting a mocking challenge from the youth. Grinning through his bandages, the elder offered to prove his skills right then and there. Watching the childish display made the protagonist sigh in pure exhaustion. Suddenly, a voice crackled through his collar and ordered him to report immediately. He turned away from the group to find the source of the summons. Entering the medical bay, he asked what could be so urgent. She leaned against the equipment and asked about the other beings he had encountered during the last fight. He confirmed seeing someone who stole a core from a fallen monster. Instead of answering, she gestured toward a radio and told him to listen closely. A broadcast began to play, addressing the survivors trapped in the frozen wasteland. He found the static-filled message confusing and demanded to know why it mattered. The voice on the recording spoke of ancient floods and the current snowstorm as divine punishment. It ranted about evil governments brainwashing men through greed and control. Images of suffering children and war flashed through his mind as the speaker continued. Then the tone shifted to promise mercy for untainted souls. They claimed that certain individuals were holy children chosen for a higher purpose. A woman clad in black harnessed purple flames that flickered with supernatural power. She aimed a massive rocket launcher toward the sky with a confident smirk. The broadcast labeled these warriors as descended holy spirits and prophets. With one shot, she obliterated a towering monster and left nothing but smoke. She watched the creature crumble as if it were a simple nuisance. Witnesses watched in awe, folding their hands in desperate prayer. This was the Prophetic Association, a group claiming to bring hope to the end of the world. Inside a moving vehicle, listeners scoffed at the religious fanaticism. The message promised salvation to any soul willing to join their cause. She turned off the recording and asked for his honest opinion. He dismissed it as nothing more than a typical anti-government cult. Looking at her serious expression, he realized she was not joking. The mention of holy children suggested they were actually hunting for superhumans. She confirmed that if his theory was right, the situation was becoming far more dangerous. History was full of stories about shadowy organizations controlling the world from the darkness. While most people laughed at conspiracy theories, the truth was far more sinister. The Prophetic Association had managed to infiltrate nearly every level of the country. They started as a small cult but gained power through secret government backing. Eventually, the government created the NSLB to hunt down the very monster they helped create. Ashes filled the tray as she explained that the group had been reborn in the snow. He interrupted, questioning how a simple biochemist could know such classified information. She revealed she had a friend who used to be a high-ranking intelligence agent. Memories of the agent's face surfaced as she spoke of the group's supposed total destruction. She concluded that these new prophets were not survivors at all. Her eyes narrowed as she suggested they were ghosts from a parallel universe. Shocked by the revelation, he asked how she could possibly know about his own origins. He pointed a finger in accusation, realizing his privacy had been compromised. She admitted to eavesdropping on his emotional conversation with the old man. He shouted in embarrassment, defending the sacred bond between men. Ignoring his outburst, she told him the association likely had their sights set on him. She then ordered him to start moving her belongings into her new room. Elsewhere, a hand adjusted controls on a glowing terminal. A soldier questioned if the news was really a major concern. His partner stared ahead, noting that this involved the very foundation of their organization. She began to explain the higher-ups' true beliefs. Just then, a gloved hand clamped over her mouth to silence her. A scarred officer reminded her why she had been reassigned in the first place. He tapped his temple, demanding silence and discipline. A transmission came through to a lone operative sitting in the back of the transport. The command confirmed a link between the cult and the superhumans. Their top priority was the immediate capture of Code Zero. Back at the base, the old man prepared his weapon with a grim look. Glass shattered instantly into 1,000 pieces. He laughed at the target, proving he was still a deadly asset. The heavy door of room 303 remained shut while a feast was prepared inside. Taking a massive, greasy bite, the young girl could not believe how perfect the burger tasted. The meat sizzled on the grill as Lin explained how his agricultural background allowed him to develop food this quickly. He felt a sense of pride seeing them eat, though he downplayed his skills as mere technological advancement. Just then, old Joe peeked into the room with a look of pure anticipation. He revealed a bottle of vintage tequila he had found among their old belongings, offering it as a gift for his savior. Clear liquid poured into a glass as the atmosphere turned celebratory. Slicing into a fresh lime, Joe prepared the traditional ritual with practiced hands. He poured salt onto the back of Lin's hand and handed him a green wedge. Lin stared at the setup, questioning if this was truly the real way to drink. Joe flashed a wide, confident smile and insisted it was the only way for a hero to enjoy a drink. Accepting the gesture, Lin decided it would be rude to decline such a heartfelt offering. He licked the salt from his hand with a sharp tongue. The burning liquid went down in a single gulp as he tilted his head back. Squeezing the lime between his teeth, the sour juice exploded in his mouth. Joe turned to offer a shot to the doctor while Lin's face twisted from the sheer strength of the alcohol. The girl mentioned they hadn't seen Corbin lately because he was currently on his monitoring shift. In the control room, Corbin sat hunched over his screens, unaware of the feast happening nearby. Mrs. Perez insisted on bringing Corbin his share, even when Lin offered to take it for her. Outside in the freezing snow, a tactical tablet displayed a live feed of the group eating dinner. A white-haired soldier adjusted his headset and ordered everyone to double-check their communications. Back at headquarters, a pink-haired woman confirmed she had a clear signal and began checking in with the rest of the squad. The veteran soldier known as Pops confirmed he was in position alongside Delta. Static hissed through the line as the pink-haired captain adjusted her equipment. Snow fell heavily over their rifles while they waited for the signal to move. Two soldiers stood in the blizzard, questioning the static they were hearing on the main line. Moving her hand to the console, the captain switched them over to a private, personal channel. She asked what the veteran was being so secretive about and why he was resorting to such forceful methods. The feed on her screen showed the group laughing, yet she felt the errand boy was hiding something significant. As the squad leader, she expressed her deep concern for the veteran's safety regardless of the higher-ups' agenda. Pop stared into the distance with a hardened gaze, telling her that his only wish was for her to stay safe. A small smile touched her lips before she cut the transmission to focus on the mission. The operation officially began as the sunset bled into a cold winter night. Their armored transport rolled slowly through the ruins of the abandoned city. Inside the room, more tequila flowed as the mood grew somber and reflective. Joe took another drink and confessed his long-held dreams of starting a family before the world ended. He looked at Dr. Joe and remarked that his own daughter would be about her age by now. The doctor warned him to stop drinking because of his injuries, but Joe was already lost in his grief. Tears began to stream down his face as he cried out about failing his little girl. He clutched a white glove adorned with pink crosses, sobbing the name Joanna over and over. Dr. Joe froze at the mention of the name, her eyes widening in sudden, shocking realization. Lin watched the emotional breakdown and suppressed a laugh, thinking that the doctor had finally found her long-lost father. Joe begged for forgiveness through his tears, wishing things were different in these end times. Lin looked on with a calm, knowing expression as the man poured his heart out. For a brief moment, they looked like a perfectly normal family sharing a meal. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the entire room into an oppressive silence. Lin and the doctor immediately went on high alert, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Joe stood up slowly, his drunken sorrow replaced by a grim, cold determination. He turned his back to them, his posture shifting into that of a seasoned warrior. Lin asked where he was going, but Joe simply reached for a heavy green case. A metallic click echoed through the dark room as he unlatched the lid. He pulled out a massive, sharpened machete that gleamed even in the dim light. Down in the maintenance tunnels, the soldiers found the main gate jammed exactly as expected. They located a side entrance and prepared to breach the facility. Moving with tactical precision, the team began their quiet infiltration. They successfully reached the third floor and reported their status back to headquarters. The captain watched through their body cams, her eyes fixed on the mission as it unfolded in the wild. The squad split up according to the plan, prioritizing the security of the civilians. They moved without honorifics or hesitation, clicking their safeties off. Flashlights cut through the darkness of the stairwells as they ascended. High above them, a figure wearing a cold, perforated mask waited in the shadows. The group waits for news in the dim room. He looks around with growing suspicion. She turns away because she has no answers to give. Suddenly, a scout bursts through the door, gasping for air. He warns them that armed men are approaching with bad intentions. Tactical teams sweep the lower levels with flashlights cutting through the dark. They move in perfect formation toward a lone figure. The leader keeps his weapon raised while scanning for threats. Every corner could hide a trap. Standing before them is a man wearing a heavy security vest and a haunting mask. They announce themselves as a rescue squad dispatched to help. The captain lowers his guard slightly to offer assistance. The masked man scoffs at the idea of them caring about insignificant lives. Seeing that specific mask triggers a buried memory in the captain's mind. Back at the command center, the operator searches through restricted files. She finds a match and warns the team that this is no civilian. The captain demands to know what she means. This man is Machete, a legendary mass murderer who vanished decades ago. He was a brutal killer who once used his enemies to escape a high-security prison. Realizing the man was once an asset, the captain tries to claim him as one of their own. The mention of his past sends a surge of rage through the killer. He draws his blade in a blur of motion. Screaming that his loved ones died because of people like them, he strikes. Fingers fly through the air as the captain's hand is shredded. Machi pounces with the speed of a predator fueled by pure grief. He plunges his weapon deep into his target. Blood spatters his mask as he mocks the idea of ever being one of them. Another soldier fires his weapon from the shadows. He screams for his captain to get down while pulling the trigger. Bullets fly, but the masked monster moves far too fast. A shot grazes the mask, leaving a trail of smoke. Machete lunges forward to close the gap instantly. He pulls a secondary blade from his belt. With a flick of his wrist, he launches the steel. The soldier watches the blade grow larger in his vision. It finds its mark with a sickening crunch. High above on the catwalks, another agent demands a status report. He clicks his tongue when he hears only silence from his team. A voice behind him remarks on the windy weather outside. He spins around to find a stranger bathed in blue flames. Reaching for his sidearm, he prepares for a fight. The stranger moves like a ghost through the flickering light. He mocks the agent for being a noisy rat in his house. The agent identifies himself as Zion White of the NSLB. He levels his rifle with cold precision. He vows to take the intruder in regardless of the cost. The stranger asks why they care more about arrests than the freezing world. He wonders if the authorities are hiding something sinister. Zion stares back with eyes that show no. A dark smile plays on the stranger's lips. Zion warns him not to force a lethal response. Blue energy erupts from the stranger as he challenges the agent to try. He pulls the trigger. Brass shells hit the floor. Bullets shred the empty air. The stranger blurs into multiple shadows to evade the fire. A metal pipe behind Zion is sliced clean through. Zion realizes his perfect aim for the head somehow missed. He narrowly avoided a counterattack that should have ended him. Turning around, he explains that a gut feeling saved his life. He claims he can predict an opponent's move without even looking. The stranger asks who he really is to possess such luck. Zion's eye begins to glow with a digital circuit pattern. A massive portal of pixelated energy tears open behind him. He reveals his true nature as a superhuman while a chained mermaid beast emerges. Radio static screams through the comms while a frantic voice calls for Alpha. Staring at the scrambled screen, the operator realizes she has completely lost visual contact. Panic spreads through the frequency as HQ begs for immediate backup. Standing at her station, she hears the urgency in every crackle of the transmission. Deep in the tunnels, the soldiers struggle to carry their wounded comrade to safety. Suddenly, a massive blade whistles through the air. They dive for cover as the floor explodes around them. Dust chokes the hallway while the men scramble backward in terror. Raising their weapons, they search for the source of the attack. Something massive shifts in the dark corridor. They squint through the gloom to identify the shadow. A hulking figure in a hockey mask looms over them with a blood-stained blade. Shouting in fear, the men prepare for their end. Before the blade can fall, a violent shockwave rips through the ceiling. Debris rains down on the cowering soldiers. Emerging from the smoke, a blue-haired warrior protects the masked man. Massive chunks of concrete continue to fall around them. A colossal creature bound in heavy chains reveals its grotesque form. The stench of the beast is unmistakable to the blue-haired fighter. Recognizing the intruders, the veteran sergeant demands to know why they have returned. Stepping forward, the young man ignores the question to focus on the immediate threat. He helps his masked ally to his feet as the ground continues to tremble. Reporting to HQ, the sergeant confirms they have made contact with a high-level shell. The monster stares back with cold, glowing eyes. Its gaze pierces through the darkness like a predator. Ancient chains begin to hum with a lethal blue energy. Grabbing the restraints, the white-haired controller orders the beast to hold its position. The massive entity towers over everyone in the room. Blue energy pulses through the links as the pressure rises. Standing defiantly, the controller identifies the blue-haired fighter as the primary target. A tense silence follows as the two adversaries lock eyes. The white-haired man watches with calculated indifference. Glowing sigils flare across his skin as he prepares his next move. Realizing that a peaceful resolution is impossible, the blue-haired warrior prepares for battle. He knows that they cannot avoid a fight in this confined space. Apologizing to an old friend, he prepares to unleash a forbidden power. Dark energy swirls around him as he begins a terrifying transformation. His skin becomes covered in a liquid metal armor. Standing tall, he completes his change into a sleek killing machine. The controller recognizes the legendary code 0 and feels a chill run down his spine. Challenging his opponent's knowledge, the armored warrior prepares his first strike. The controller screams for the monster to capture the intruder. It lunges forward with savage intent and massive force. Standing perfectly still, the armored man waits for the beast to close the gap. A massive claw swipes through the space where he stood just a second ago. Declaring that this area is too small for a real fight, he shifts his weight. He moves with a blur of motion that defies the laws of physics. The beast misses its target entirely as the warrior vanishes. A series of thunderous impacts rock the creature's massive frame. The beast is stunned when its own speed is used against it. Shock washes over the controller as he sees his attacks being deflected by a sound barrier. Launching himself forward, the armored warrior becomes a streak of light. A massive explosion craters the floor as they fall into the abyss below. The monster quickly deploys a shimmering energy barrier to protect itself. A metal fist slams into the shield with the force of a falling star. Shattering energy ripples through the chamber as the two forces collide. Exhaling slowly, the armored warrior analyzes the situation. He realizes the beast is a specialized power type based on its sheer physical scale. Its defensive capabilities make it a truly tricky opponent to bring down. Looking past the monster, he decides to target the leader instead of the tool. The controller stands protected behind his massive servant. He mocks the armored warrior and tells him that his efforts are futile. Banking on his superior speed, the warrior ignites his thrusters. He kicks off the ground with enough force to crack the concrete. Trails of blue light weave through the air as he accelerates. The controller claims he can predict every path thanks to his enhanced gut feeling. His special eye glows with a hypnotic pattern to track the movement. Streaks of energy crisscross the room as the warrior increases his velocity. The monster watches the dizzying display of light. By leaving multiple trails, the warrior hopes to overwhelm the controller's senses. He creates a complex web of motion to disrupt the enemy's intuition. Searching for a single opening, he pushes his body to the limit. The controller sneers and calls him cocky for relying on such a simple trick. Suddenly, the monster's own muscles ripple with newfound power. It moves with a speed that matches the armored intruder. The massive tail slams down as the beast enters a state of frenzy. It turns out the warrior is not the only one who can take pride in their speed. The monster roars as it matches his velocity. Shadows blur together as the two titans collide. Every strike creates a shockwave that threatens to collapse the facility. The controller smiles as he watches his creation dominate the field. He claims that no human can outrun a shell in its true state. The armored warrior narrows his eyes and prepares one final gambit. He dives into the heart of the storm, lighting crackles as he breaks the sound barrier once more. The controller realizes too late that he has been lured into a trap. A sudden silence falls over the room before the final impact. The armored warrior strikes with everything he has left. The beast's shoulder plates shatter under the immense pressure. It recoils in pain as its defense finally crumbles. The controller's face pales as he loses control of the situation. With a final burst of speed, the warrior targets the master directly. He proves that even a monster has a limit to its pride. The battle has only just begun to reach its peak. The armored monster shattered under the weight of the assault. He couldn't believe the power being unleashed against him. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over the battlefield. The chained goddess rose like a nightmare from the depths. Speed was her greatest weapon now. A thunderous explosion rocked the entire facility. Smoke cleared to reveal her cold, glowing eyes. The armored warrior lay broken on the ground. Lin Mo stepped forward and pinned his enemy down with a beam of light. He demanded a total surrender immediately. The spear held the government hunter in place. Dragging a corpse through the storm would be a waste of time. Lin Mo looked down with cold eyes. He called the man a government lapdog. Just then, the air began to hum with dangerous energy. The broken armor didn't stay still. Lin Mo watched as blue shards gathered in the air. They swirled together with a mind of their own. A massive pillar of dark crystal formed in an instant. The enemy rose again, stronger than before. Lin Mo reacted by pulling his trigger. He fired shot after shot into the evolving mass. Bullets did nothing against the blurring speed of the monster. It moved faster than the eye could follow. A massive fist surged through the energy field. The impact sent a shockwave through the room. Lin Mo braced himself against the wind. He wondered what was happening to his opponent. A chain rattled against the cold floor. The armor had transformed into a gleaming white knight. It gripped a long, jagged lance. Power radiated from its every joint. The knight stood tall, ready for slaughter. The spear slammed into the ground with a heavy thud. It was time for the second round. Lin Mo realized the intel was correct about the rapid evolution. If the fight lasted any longer, he would lose. He had to finish this before the monster went out of control. The creature behind him unleashed a flurry of energy blades. They carved through the air in glowing arcs. Blue energy meant the knight was absorbing the power. He spun his lance to catch every single strike. The room filled with the sound of clashing spirits. Suddenly, the blue light turned a deep blood red. The knight's armor pulsed with the stolen energy. Lin Mo watched in horror as the monster prepared to strike back. It moved like a streak of lightning. A massive cross-shaped blast tore through the area. The explosion leveled everything in its path. Lin Mo gritted his teeth as he analyzed the situation. The enemy wasn't just blocking, but converting the energy. A massive storm of debris swirled around the knight. The creature screamed as the red spear pierced through the air. Lin Mo realized the nature of the barrier was like a field. He calculated a way to negate the power. Colliding fields would act like two bubbles popping each other. He gathered his own energy to create a counterforce. The two powers met with a violent roar. A blinding white light consumed the entire chamber. The creature was thrown back by the sheer force of the negation. Lin Mo stared at the aftermath in disbelief. The battle had taken a turn he never expected. The demon woman whispered a final apology before telling her companion to retreat and find rest. Lin Mo stood firm against the massive armored entity blocking his path. He questioned why the beast had stopped its relentless assault. The monster sneered back and claimed the boy was nothing without his small pet. Tension hung heavy in the air during the silent standoff. Lin Mo refused to believe they were at a stalemate. Looking at the glowing creature, he saw nothing but a mindless shell. The beast stood tall in its intricate blue armor. It looked no different from the monsters currently terrorizing the frozen world outside. Lin Mo challenged the creature's confidence with a cold stare. He gave the signal and commanded his ally to act. Suddenly, a guitar chorded the silence. Corbin began to play a melody that echoed through the halls. The sound hit the armored beast like a physical wave. A speaker mounted on the musician's chest amplified the strange frequency. Clutching its head, the monster screamed in sudden agony. The parasite hidden deep within its body was violently rejecting the music. Corbin did not stop his rhythmic strumming for even a second. Every note felt like a targeted strike against the creature's core. Pain surged through the beast as it struggled to remain upright. Dark shadows began to leak from the cracks in its armor. The entire mass dissolved into a pool of black sludge. Watching through a high-tech lens, the scout saw the target vanish. Corbin finally lowered his guitar and looked toward his leader. Lin Mo noted that the backup had arrived far too late. The mission was moving forward regardless of the delays. An unconscious man lay nearby as the team regrouped. Corbin stared into the distance with cold and focused eyes. He was no longer the clumsy boy they had known before. This was the true face of Agent Corbin. 30 minutes earlier, the situation had been much more ridiculous. Corbin was slumped over his desk snoring loudly. Drool dripped from his open mouth as he slept through the chaos. The security cameras caught every embarrassing second of his nap. Lin Mo and the veteran soldiers watched the feed in total disbelief. They eventually found him and Lin Mo poked his cheek with a rifle barrel. Corbin woke up with a start and immediately threw his hands up. He begged the officers for mercy and claimed he was clean. The boy insisted he had quit his old habits a long time ago. Ignoring the pleas, Lin Mo began reciting a series of activation codes. The words triggered a deep psychological shift in the boy's mind. His eyes glazed over as the sleeper agent personality took hold. Tears and drool fell as his original consciousness was suppressed. Corbin spoke with a robotic tone and confirmed he was reporting for duty. He stood ready as the unit known as 21 Guns. The veteran soldiers watched the transformation with visible shock. They realized this errand boy was actually a highly dangerous secret weapon. Corbin slammed his head onto the desk as the synchronization finished. The team prepared for the final assault despite the technical glitches. Rhodes monitored the situation from the command center with a grim expression. Corbin's eyes snapped open with a lethal new intensity. They needed to arrest Code Zero and save any remaining survivors. Briefing the team, Lin Mo handed over the coordinates for the next phase. They decided to split up to cover more ground before the power failed. Corbin walked down the dark corridors alone with his guitar case. He eventually reached a secure room and spotted a hidden camera. A woman and a small girl looked up at him in confusion. Seeing the logo of the Biological Safety Department, Corbin felt a surge of rage. He drew his handgun and aimed it directly at the woman's head. She recognized him as the errand boy and asked what he was doing. Corbin revealed her true identity as the former captain of a response unit. He called her a goddamn traitor and tightened his grip on the weapon. The woman tried to reach for her own gun as the room exploded with movement. Corbin did not hesitate and fired his weapon into the shadows. Smoke curled from the barrel as the lethal metal cooled. The empty casing clattered against the floorboards with a sharp ring. Fear paralyzed the mother while she shielded her child from the violence. Strands of severed hair lay scattered on the ground like broken promises. A heavy heel crushed the locks into the dirt. Surrender was the only option left. The blonde agent kept his aim steady and cold. He promised the next shot would be for blood. Slowing his breathing, he demanded she raise her hands. The woman turned around with a mocking smirk playing on her lips. She acted like this was all a boring game. Her eyes locked onto him with dangerous recognition. She called him an errand boy. It was as if she knew his deepest secrets better than he did. Confusion flickered across his face for a split second. Suddenly his radio crackled with a desperate report of casualties. Alpha was gone and the others were bleeding out. He needed a doctor. The traitorous woman laughed because she was exactly what he needed. She basked in the chaos she helped create. Deep in the facility, the old man checked his monitors with a heavy heart. His hands were wrapped in stained bandages. He insisted he was fine despite the obvious pain. Switching to a private channel, he prepared to share a dark truth. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Harsh plastic zip ties bit into the woman's wrists. He pulled her close to remind her of the penalty for treason. She didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered about a betrayal that started long ago. The words Operation Europa hung in the air like a death sentence. His eyes widened as the conspiracy finally took shape. She spoke of Jupiter's moons and the frozen hell they held. A vision of a world encased in ice filled his mind. New York had become a mirror of that distant dead moon. The snow falling outside was just the beginning of a planetary extinction. She claimed it was all part of a prophetic association. But anger finally boiled over and he lunged. He slammed her against the wall with a gun pressed to her temple. Death was only a trigger pull away. They stared at each other with pure hatred. He only spared her because her medical knowledge was vital for Code Zero. Leaning in, he made sure she understood her life was forfeit. The old man watched the feed with a grim expression. A sudden strike silenced the woman's taunts. Darkness swallowed the room as the power flickered. He moved out to find the survivors before it was too late. She stayed behind with a bruised face and a victory in her eyes. Outside, the sky burned a deep, ominous red. Precious cargo lay sedated and masked in the back of the transport. Guards whispered about the danger if the boy ever woke up. The agent took a long drag of his cigarette to steady his nerves. Suppressants were the only thing keeping the monster inside the boy asleep. They looked back at the research that made this capture possible. He approached the unconscious figure with a mix of pity and fear. A soft apology escaped his lips for the life he was stealing. The boy remained trapped in a chemically induced nightmare. Soldiers looked toward the horizon, waiting for their next orders. The veteran asked his comrade why he had even joined this fight. A young soldier stammered, caught off guard by the personal question. The old man knew they were part of a war they couldn't win. A white-haired warrior emerged from the shadows with a rifle in hand. He reported that the shelter in Manhattan was ready for the refugees. Relief washed over the tired men. But the warrior stopped and looked them in the eye. He asked if they had seen any monsters that looked like shells. The young soldier lied through his teeth while sweating profusely. He gripped his weapon tight to hide his shaking hands. The veteran joined the lie to protect their secret. They claimed they hadn't seen anything but the target. The warrior accepted the answer with a suspicious calm. He smiled and told them to keep working together. The transport rolled through the ruins of the city. High above, a voice asked why Jinyu was still waiting. She touched her earring while scanning the crowd below. There was a rat hiding among the sheep, and a wolf was hunting them both. She adjusted her gear with a seductive confidence. Her smile promised a bloodbath in the name of her father. The massive armored transport rumbled through the dying light of the ruined city. Inside the cold cargo hold, a masked prisoner lay strapped tightly to a metal stretcher. A young girl named Maggie stared at the bound man with wide, fearful eyes. Nearby, a doctor and another man sat helplessly with their own wrists bound tight. She could not understand why these kind people were being treated like dangerous criminals. Angrily, the girl pointed a finger at the blonde soldier standing guard. Corbin looked back with a mixture of confusion and pity as she accused him of being just like the guitar guy. Her mother quickly pulled her back, trying to keep her quiet to avoid further trouble. Suddenly, the captive woman with pink hair began to laugh mockingly at their situation. She claimed that only a child could see the ugly truth of their broken country. Her eyes narrowed as she taunted the guards with a sharp, cruel smile. The tension in the cramped space became almost unbearable as the captive continued her insults. In the front of the vehicle, an older soldier took a long, heavy drag from his cigarette. Smoke filled the cabin as he stared out at the ruins of a world he no longer recognized. The driver glanced at his superior, Joanna, noting the grim look on her face. Joanna ignored his concern and asked about the status of the survivors they had picked up. Her bandaged hand trembled slightly, a reminder of the failures she carried with her. Looking out at the desolate skyline, she realized the country could no longer protect anyone. Deciding to verify their identities, she walked toward the back of the transport. Her heart stopped when she locked eyes with the pink-haired captive. Shock washed over her as she realized the woman was Sonia Jo. Sonia waved a gloved hand and made a biting comment about Joanna gaining weight. She laughed at Joanna's demotion from Central Intelligence to a lowly field worker. Every word was designed to cut deep and provoke a violent reaction. Losing her patience, Joanna drew her pistol and aimed it directly at the woman's head. She screamed that she had once treated Sonia as a true friend. Trusting the wrong person had led to her current disgrace and misery. Sonia did not flinch, reminding Joanna that they both knew the risks of seeking the truth. From the driver's cabin, Corbin watched the confrontation through a small slot in the door. He told them to cut it out because a new threat had just appeared on their radar. Someone was tailing the armored truck at high speed. A mysterious motorcycle rider hovered in the distance, closing the gap rapidly. Strange purple energy crackled around the bike as it tore through the snow. Joanna sensed something was terribly wrong with the person approaching them. At such freezing temperatures, any normal human should have died from exposure by now. Sonia explained that they were likely dealing with a superhuman. These individuals could absorb environmental energy and convert it into internal heat. They had fully adapted to the frozen hell their world had become. The rider raised a weapon while maintaining a terrifying speed. Without warning, a shot rang out across the wasteland. A massive blast of purple energy surged toward the vehicle. The driver yanked the wheel as a massive explosion rocked the road. Everyone inside was thrown violently against the metal walls as the truck swerved. Mocking their frantic movements, the rider complained that the first shot was slightly off. The motorcycle pulled up alongside the massive transport. Panic flared in the driver's eyes when he realized the attacker was using a grenade launcher. Looking into the side mirror, he saw the predator was right on their heels. A soldier prepared his rifle to return fire from the rear hatch. He aimed carefully, knowing a single mistake would mean their certain death. Bullets sprayed from the back of the truck in a desperate attempt to stop the pursuit. The rider dodged the fire with supernatural grace while readying another blast. Purple energy illuminated the snowy road as the hunter prepared to finish the job. Realizing the inevitable outcome, Corbin braced for the impact. A blinding sphere of energy collided with the side of the armored transport. The force of the explosion tore through the reinforced hull. With a deafening crash, the massive truck flipped and slammed into the frozen ground. Smoke from the massive explosion billows across the highway. A gloved hand tightens its grip on the motorcycle's throttle. Getting sideways, the biker comes to a sharp stop amidst the debris. Her headlamp cuts through the thick haze. The massive transport vehicle lies completely overturned on the road. Dust and metal shards rain down as the truck settles. Purple energy pulses through the frame of her machine. She removes her cracked helmet and looks at the wreckage. Touching her neck, she asks about the status of the other team. Her purple hair flows in the wind as she prepares for the next move. She warns that the powers involved are becoming uncontrollable. Inside the dark cabin, the boy in the mask remains unconscious. The pink-haired girl wakes up and asks if everyone else is all right. He points toward the stretcher with a focused gaze. They confirm the boy is safe, but the danger is still rising. She asks about the safety of the civilians they were protecting. Mother holds her child close and confirms they are both fine. His eyes harden as he states the priority of the mission. Looking closely, he knows there is no room for error. She stares at him with wide eyes, realizing the cold reality of his word. Suddenly, a loud voice tells everyone to get out of the way. The force of a sudden movement throws them against the interior walls. She screams for the old man as she sees him pinned. A jagged metal bar has pierced through his side. He is stuck and bleeding heavily from the impact. Gritting his teeth, he tells the girl not to rush toward him. He spots something through the opening and his face pales. She looks where he is pointing and freezes. A massive horde of monsters is swarming the street. Their glowing eyes signal an imminent attack. He warns her that something even worse is approaching. Colossal creature with multiple mouths rises above the crowd. He realizes they have never seen this many shells in one place. Looking down from the truck, he tries to calculate their odds. He asks the driver if the sound system is still functional. The man stares at his broken guitar in total despair. He decides they must rely on firepower alone. She shouts for another weapon, but the blonde guard has nothing left to give. The traitorous woman watches the chaos with a calm smile. She pulls a surgical blade from her kit with steady hands. The pink-haired girl stares at her with pure suspicion. She tells the woman that she has no intention of forgiving her, but the old man is dying and needs immediate surgery. His abdomen is badly wounded and the bleeding won't stop. The rest of the group watches the tense standoff in silence. The mother steps forward and offers her medical skills. She hesitates because she doesn't want to leave her daughter's side. The little girl huffs and insists she is old enough to stay alone. The mustache guard asks to be untied so he can protect the child. He claims to be a simple security guard now. He reminds them that they have survived together before. Suddenly, a monster slams against the window with a roar. Its long fingers scrape against the reinforced glass. A soldier stabs his knife through the gap to kill the beast. He tells everyone to cover their ears immediately. A massive shotgun blasts tears through the creature's head. The old man prepares for the agony of the treatment. The traitorous woman begins to work on the deep wound. She realizes the metal bar might have severed a major artery. Outside, the white-haired youth sees a purple light approaching. He remembers the powerful pursuer from the highway. The biker woman draws her sword with a sinister grin. She is a superhuman capable of wiping them all out. She leaps toward the roof of the truck with incredible speed. The crude metal bar is the only thing keeping the wound closed, but the blood still won't stop flowing. Looking at her crimson-soaked hands, she realizes their time in this hellish place is running out. Memories of being powerless and small flood her mind as the pressure mounts. Only one person remains the key to turning this desperate situation around. Watching the smoke curl from her cigarette, the intruder knows her target is within reach. He remains unconscious, unaware that he is the only hope they have left to survive. Suddenly, a blade cuts through the air with lethal precision. Glowing markings flare to life across his face as the threat arrives. They leap back together to avoid the initial strike. A purple flash follows and the barrel of a gun is sliced clean through. Metal shards scatter across the ground as the weapon becomes useless junk. Wearing a mocking smile, the intruder asks why a holy one would protect mere sinners. He levels his remaining weapon and identifies her as a member of the prophetic association. She leans in and asks if he truly wants to return to his old life. Standing his ground, he demands to know exactly what she means. She claims he never belonged with the agents in the first place. Whispering about what he left behind, she probes for his deepest weakness. His eyes widen as he thinks of the one person he truly cared about. He remembers her bright smile and the way she looked in her uniform. She had been so excited to join his patrol group again. His hands begin to tremble against the cold steel of his pistol. A vision of a ringed hand buried in rubble nearly breaks his resolve. Shaking off the grief, he decides that his past does not define his current duty. He declares that he will never let her take Code Zero away. Locked in a straitjacket and mask, the prisoner remains the key to ending this frozen disaster. An explosion rocks the vehicle and someone screams for the child to cover her ears. Panic spreads through the rescue squad as they realize they are trapped. One woman reaches out to the prisoner, hoping for a miracle. Her comrade grabs her arm, demanding to know what she thinks she is doing. They glare at each other while the world outside descends into chaos. Looking through the window, the true scale of the horror becomes clear. Hundreds of faceless monsters surround their transport in every direction. With a superhuman attacking from behind, their survival seems impossible. The intruder's eyes glow with a terrifying purple light. She raises her hand and absorbs the incoming bullets like they are nothing. He stares in shock as his direct hits fail to leave a single scratch. A cruel smirk plays on her lips as she prepares her next move. Locating her target, she swings her blade against the transport's hull. Purple lightning crackles across the ceiling as the metal begins to buckle. The roof explodes inward as she finally forces her way inside. She stares down at the prisoner and whispers that she finally found him. Standing over the terrified squad, she demands to know why they are still hesitating. They scramble to defend the boy as the air thickens with killing intent. Monster suddenly grabs her leg, forcing her to shift her focus. She decides to fight their primitive magic with her own superior power. A massive burst of energy clears the area around the transport. She moves through the debris with unstoppable momentum. Nothing stands between her and the prize she came for. Suddenly, the prisoner's eyes snap open with a brilliant blue glow. Blue sparks dance across the restraints as his power begins to leak out. She stands before him, claiming she is there to escort him home. Their eyes meet, and for a moment the world seems to stand still. She freezes as she realizes something is very wrong. A massive shockwave blasts her backward and out of the vehicle. He falls to his knees, coughing as the surge of power drains his strength. Confused and weak, he wonders why his body feels like lead. He looks down at the restraints and the mask, unable to remember how he got here. His ally explains that she gave him an injection to keep him stable. She taps him on the head, telling him to stay focused. He winces in pain as the reality of the situation sets in. His stomach growls loudly, proving that even a savior needs to eat. Outside, the monsters continue to howl as their fate rests on his shoulders. The monsters let out a deafening screech that echoed through the ruins. Purple energy erupted from the void as projectiles rained down on the survivors. Joe gritted his teeth while sweat poured down his face because the situation was turning hopeless. He complained about the timing of the attack and his own health while the monsters closed in. Slumped against the wall, the young man felt his vision blurring from a lack of energy. He desperately needed glucose to stay in the fight. A small hand reached out and offered him a single candy bar. Maggie insisted he take it because she wanted to be helpful, just like her mother taught her. The others watched in concern while Joe tried to maintain a defensive line. Without waiting for an answer, the girl shoved the chocolate into his mouth. He chewed quickly despite having terrible memories of this specific brand. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open as a surge of power flooded his veins. Blue flames erupted from his body and tore through his restraints. The intensity of the aura cracked the ground beneath his boots. A massive beast lunged forward with its maw wide open. Joe stood his ground even though his heart was racing. He realized with horror that his magazine was completely empty. He yelled for everyone to cover their ears just as a blur of blue light shot past him. Joe could only watch in stunned silence. The young man clapped his hands together with a force that shattered the sound barrier. A massive shockwave pulverized everything in its path. Joe stared at the destruction and wondered how a human could possess such raw strength. A dark smile played on the boy's lips as the adrenaline took hold. More monsters emerged from the shadows to surround them. He stepped forward with total confidence. Looking at the horde, he realized they were no longer attacking. He tilted his head while observing their trembling forms. The creatures began to back away in pure instinctual terror. Agent White arrived on the scene and froze at the sight of the fleeing monsters. They were running for their lives from a single person. He quickly reported the anomaly to headquarters and requested instructions. A mysterious woman with purple hair watched the scene with an amused expression. She noted that even soulless vessels could learn the meaning of fear. After crushing a monster's skull with her bare hands, she turned her gaze toward the boy. She introduced herself as Han Jinyu and invited him to join her cult. She spoke of a holy purpose and a lord they must serve. The young man refused instantly because he had no interest in her anarchist games. Her expression shifted as she prepared to take him by force. She drew a blade while a sinister purple aura flared around her. A sudden flash of steel cut through the air. She reached into her own body and pulled out a second sword. He noticed strange cracks on the blades that looked like serpent scales. A mass phantom snake manifested behind her as she took a combat stance. She offered a mocking apology before launching her assault. She moved so fast that she became a purple streak across the battlefield. Their weapons collided with a force that shook the entire building. He barely managed to dodge a follow-up strike that seemed to defy physics. Confusion filled his mind as he watched her move. He wondered if she possessed multiple abilities at once. His eyes caught sight of a glowing fragment floating in the air. These purple shards were leaking from her wounds. He snatched one of the fragments out of the air to test a theory. He threw the shard back at her with maximum force. A massive explosion engulfed her position and kicked up a cloud of dust. His eyes widened when he saw that the attack had done 0 damage. She stood perfectly still among the rubble. The cracks in her skin weren't wounds but tiny portals that absorbed energy. She laughed because she realized he was trying to figure out her secret. Her eyes glowed with a predatory light. He asked if she was intentionally trying to provoke him. Back in the van, the agent looked at the monitor and saw his energy levels were at a critical 13%. She worried that his inner parasite wouldn't wake up in time to save him. He glared at his opponent while trying to hide his exhaustion. Without his ultimate form, he knew he was at a severe disadvantage. He remembered his previous battles and realized he needed to be more cautious than ever. The shadow of a giant cobra loomed over him as the pressure reached a breaking point. The blade hissed through the air as she launched a lethal vertical strike. Landing with a heavy thud, she marveled at how he had managed to avoid the attack from above. This was more than just quickness. She moved with the predatory grace of a serpent, striking with unnatural fluidity. Lin Mo decided to end the dance with a single crushing blow. His fist connected with a deafening roar that shattered the ground. Expecting a solid impact, he felt only a strange hollow emptiness. His arm sank deep into her chest as if her body were made of shifting shadows. Confusion gripped him instantly. He looked down at his trapped limb in horror. Instead of blood, a purple rift pulsed around his arm, absorbing the force of his punch. She smiled playfully, mocking his attempt to get close to her heart. A terrifying thought crossed his mind. Was her entire physical form just a gateway to another dimension? She stepped back, challenging him to try thrusting even deeper. This proximity made his sound barrier completely useless. He was trapped within her reach. Looking into her eyes, he froze in realization. Those pupils were unmistakable. They were otherworldly and terrifyingly familiar. Now he remembered where he had seen them before. They were a splitting image of the speaker's eyes. Suddenly she stiffened as if receiving an urgent command. The purple energy around her arm began to crackle and burn with intensity. Someone was speaking to her through a hidden earpiece. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. New orders had arrived to prioritize a retrieval mission at a secure base. Her interest in their duel vanished instantly. She promised they would meet again very soon to finish their business. With a wicked grin, she crossed her blades and gathered her power. A massive surge of energy erupted from her position in a blinding flash. The resulting blast threw him backward as a purple dome of light consumed the area. Searching the wreckage once the smoke cleared, he found no trace of his opponent. He stood alone in the quiet devastation, wondering if she had simply run away. Sonia approached slowly, asking if he was all right after such a brutal exchange. The immediate threat was gone, but the city remained a graveyard of broken concrete. A low thrumming sound began to vibrate in the air from above. They looked up together, shielding their eyes from the wind. A heavy military helicopter descended toward the ruins of the battlefield. The rescue team had finally arrived to assess the damage. Dust swirled violently as the rotors slowed and the landing gear touched down. Armed soldiers flooded the area, shouting orders to recover the civilians. Medics rushed forward with stretchers to stabilize the fallen. Anya watched with a suspicious gaze as a familiar figure stepped out of the craft. She had not expected a high-ranking commander to lead the extraction in person. He saluted the senior officers with practiced discipline and a stern face. More vehicles surrounded the perimeter, blocking any potential escape routes. These were not just common soldiers, but officials from the highest levels of national security. The strategic department head walked forward with a grim, authoritative expression. Beside him stood the head of biochemistry, looking bored by the surrounding chaos. Barbara Ripley casually smoked a cigarette while surveying the carnage of the battle. Sonia glared at her with clear disdain, remembering their last meeting in the depths of the bunker. She knew their presence meant something far more sinister was brewing. The arrival of the Slacker Club leaders was never a good sign for anyone involved. Kotick cleared his throat to regain control of the tense situation. He explained they were there specifically for the person known as Code Zero. Lin Mo felt the weight of their gaze and wondered what he had to do with their plans. Sonia stepped in front of him, warning him not to trust the bald man's lies. She accused them of trying to finish the horrific work they started years ago. The mention of Operation Europa made the air turn cold instantly. Barbara looked confused, claiming she had never heard of such a project. Kotick froze in genuine shock, demanding to know how she knew that forbidden name. His panicked reaction confirmed that Sonia had hit the mark exactly. The bald leader's face twisted in terror at the mention of a forbidden name. Not a smug smile played on the girl's lips because she had finally confirmed her suspicions. Cold fury washed over the man as he looked down at the former agent. High above, a sniper centered his crosshairs directly on her forehead. The trigger clicked. A deadly round whistled through the air. Moving with impossible speed, the test subject intercepted the girl before the bullet could strike. He stood there unfazed while the leader stared in disbelief at the failed assassination. Holding the crushed projectile between her fingers, she mocked their pathetic attempt at an execution. The youth realized the entire global catastrophe was linked to their secret operation. Suddenly, the blonde woman seized the leader by his coat to demand the truth. He refused to speak and simply promised that she would learn everything in time. Guards rushed forward to drag the shouting woman away on his command. Turning to her companion, the doctor warned him that he was still a test subject. She reminded him that his current power was a hollow shell. His eyes widened as the weight of her words settled in. Looking down at his hands, he saw the dark veins pulsing with the strain of his failing body. The leader pointed a trembling finger and ordered his men to kill them both. Soldiers leveled their rifles as the situation turned into a massacre. Surrounded by high-tech weaponry, the pair looked for any possible exit. The youth promised himself that he would never run away again. He grabbed her arm firmly despite her startled expression. Telling her to hold on tight, he prepared to defy the laws of physics once more. Muzzle flashes lit up the night as the soldiers opened fire. A trail of blue energy streaked across the skyline as they leaped over the rooftops. The leader watched them vanish and cursed their incredible speed. Silence fell over the rooftop as the targets disappeared into the darkness. Behind him, the blonde woman returned to vent her frustration. She stood there fuming while the leader looked away in silence. A sharp kick to his backside left the man groaning in agony. He doubled over in pain while the others watched the scene unfold. From the shadows, towering monsters watched the humans bicker among themselves. Below them, the ruined city was a graveyard of frozen buildings. Miles away, the duo crashed through a high-rise window to escape the cold. Shards of glass rained down as they tumbled onto the floor. She asked if he was all right while checking her own injuries. Blue liquid leaked from his eyes and nose as his system began to collapse. She ignored his condition for a moment to scavenge the dark room. Tossing a frozen carton of milk his way, she told him to take it. He stared at the block of ice and wondered how this could possibly help. She pulled out a handgun after discovering a stash of supplies. Nearby, the frozen corpse of a scavenger sat slumped against the wall. It looked like the men in this room had killed each other over these meager resources. She noted that their misfortune was the only reason they were still alive. Hearing those words triggered a flash of dark memories in the boy's mind. Shards of his past flickered before his eyes like broken glass. Seeing his distant stare, she demanded he get his head back in the game. A quick strike to his chest snapped him out of his trance. She began throwing onions and tofu into a pot along with the entire box of milk. He watched the bizarre concoction simmer over the coals with pure disgust. She explained that cooking everything at once was the most efficient use of their time. Staring at the floating leak, he realized she had absolutely no idea how to cook. He wondered if being a brilliant doctor meant she lacked basic life skills. She snapped back that she was a medical professional and not a chef. Since the world was ending, she argued that flavor no longer mattered. Before he could complain again, she shoved a hot potato into his mouth to silence him. The steam from the pot was the only comfort in the freezing air. A figure lurked in the darkness, clutching a baseball bat with trembling hands. Yu ignored the cold and focused on her meal, insisting this was not a social gathering. Her suit flickered with a low-energy warning that threatened their survival. Lin's eyes narrowed as he caught a glimpse of a silhouette moving in the hallway. Yu noticed his shift in posture and immediately sensed the threat. She reached for her sidearm with practiced speed. The barrel was aimed at the shadows before the intruder could even breathe. A terrified girl stood exposed, holding a bat like a clumsy shield. She tried to attack but tripped over her own feet in a blind panic. The impact with the floor echoed through the empty room. Yu kept the weapon steady, her finger resting on the trigger. Death loomed over the girl as she lay helpless on the ground. She begged for mercy, screaming that she was a survivor and not a monster. Her face was a mask of pure desperation and fear. She introduced herself as Penny and explained she was just scavenging for resources. After seeing they were human, she offered to guide them to a nearby sanctuary. Penny's eyes widened as she recognized Lin's face and his distinct earrings. She claimed he was the man from the apartment complex across the street. Lin realized his past self had been much more popular than he imagined. Penny insisted they come with her since they had nowhere else to stay. They followed her to the mouth of a dark subway entrance. The stairs led down into a damp, lightless world. Penny explained the station master had turned the tunnels into a fortress. Yu stared at the walls, noting the strange markings everywhere. She touched the red paint and realized it was still wet. Massive eyes stared back at them alongside promises of divine salvation. Yu whispered that she had encountered these cult symbols before. Lin felt the weight of the silence in the tunnel. The eye on the wall seemed to track their every movement. Blood-red letters declared that the children of God would save them. They finally reached the bottom of the staircase. The subway line had been transformed into a sprawling candlelit base. Lin sensed a deep wrongness buried beneath the surface of this place. A woman in white robes greeted them, her voice full of eerie calm. She spoke of holy ones while looking at Penny's bag of supplies. The rhythmic clicking of high-heeled boots approached from the darkness. Penny's face lit up as the leader of the station arrived. The woman's cap bore the same eye symbol they had seen on the walls. She carried herself with the cold discipline of a high-ranking officer. Her presence commanded absolute silence from everyone in the room. She looked down at Penny, questioning why she had sneaked out again. Penny stammered about quotas and helping her sick brother. She quickly presented the two newcomers as potential recruits. Warned Lin to stay alert and just watch for now. The leader's expression remained unreadable as she called for the usual procedures. She gave a sharp signal to the armed guards standing behind her. Masked men with heavy clubs surrounded the duo instantly. The woman told them to stay calm, claiming it was just a routine check. She stepped close to Lin and forced his head back to inspect him. A strange blue light pulsed within his eye, revealing something inhuman. The leader's eyes nearly popped out of her head in sheer disbelief. She collapsed to her knees, her voice cracking with sudden religious fervor. They had finally found him. The Holy One had returned to lead them. Confusion clouds his mind as he stares at the kneeling woman. Realization hits the doctor instantly because she recognizes the symbols of the prophetic association. The station master looks up with desperate eyes and explains they have waited for the Holy One since the world fell apart. Panic once filled these tunnels when the monsters known as shells arrived. A massive white creature loomed over a terrified mother and child. Suddenly glowing blue chains erupted from the shadows. The Holy Ones descended and bound the beast in a display of divine power. Everyone present bore witness to what they called a miracle. Since that day, the association has gathered survivors who have nowhere else to go. Fear remains because the protectors left and the people worry the shells will return. A specific prophecy kept their hope alive, describing a savior with a halo within his pupil. The station master begs for his help to save the shelter. Rows of survivors stand in the dim light holding candles like a silent prayer. Clinging to hope feels like a heavy burden in such a cruel era. A young woman with glasses steps forward with a solemn expression. She presents a tray with a meager offering for their guest. He looks down at the gift with a sense of grim irony. Scrawled in red over boxes of cereal are the words Holy Sup. Their duty involves risking everything to gather these resources for the association. Looking at the tray, he realizes these people have been turned into slaves. A masked guard quickly silences a survivor who tries to speak out. The station master ignores the tension and tries to convince him to stay for their protection. Seeing the red symbols makes his blood boil because these people are being brainwashed. Standing before the crowd, he feels the weight of being used once again. Rage flickers in his eyes as the manipulation becomes clear. He searches for a way to break the association's hold. The doctor watches him with a look of pure shock. She whispers that exposing the lie will only make the survivors hate him. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he tells her to trust his plan. Confused by his sudden change in demeanor, she asks what he intends to do. He strides toward the station master and asks for her name. Standing inches from her, he confirms that he is indeed their only hope. He offers a devious smile and asks how he can serve the people. Smoke rings drift through the air later that evening. The doctor leans against the wall and listens to his cold strategy. Under his direction, the passenger cars transform into a thriving greenhouse. Survivors smile while carrying crates of fresh vegetables through the warm train. She mocks him by suggesting he should be called the Holy Mother instead. Taking a long drag of her cigarette, she stares at him intensely. He scoffs at the idea of being kind and brushes off her praise. Trust is a word he no longer uses lightly. She watches him in silence as the smoke curls around her face. Happy survivors wave at them while carrying their harvest. He explains that using his powers drains massive amounts of energy. Memories of their first meeting surface when he was near death. A sharp slap to his head forces him to get back to the point. Using these people for labor is exactly what the association did. He gives a thumbs up and claims he is just being helpful. Her cigarette drops in disbelief at his blatant cynicism. He sticks out his tongue and stops teasing her for a moment. Being too trusting is a mistake he will never repeat. His old world was a nightmare of cruelty, thievery, and murder. Betrayal by those he loved created a never-ending cycle of pain. He admits that trusting the wrong person led to his obsession with the land. He stared ahead with eyes that had seen too much betrayal. Humanity was inherently weak when the world fell apart. People became sensitive and lost themselves in the chaos. Fear turned them into selfish monsters focused only on surviving the next hour. He refused to let history repeat itself in this new reality. Watching him closely, she asked if he truly believed one person could unite the weak through production. Her eyes sparkled with a dangerous curiosity. Suddenly, she reached out and grabbed his face. She leaned in close to ask if that unifying leader was supposed to be him. Heart racing, he told her to stop messing around and speak normally. She did not pull away. Instead, she studied him like a rare specimen and admitted her opinion of him was shifting. A frantic voice shattered the tension as someone screamed about a massive problem. He pulled back just as the door burst open. A heavy thud echoed through the room. Their scout had tripped and landed face first on the cold floor. Gasping for air, she looked up through cracked glasses to report a discovery beneath the rails. The restored power had revealed a hidden maintenance tunnel deep underground. They descended into the dark metallic depths of the station. Massive support beams loomed over them like the ribs of a giant. This was no ordinary tunnel. At the very end of the path, a reinforced steel door stood as a silent guardian. He stood before the threshold and felt the weight of a hidden history. Looking at the markings, he asked if this was really what it seemed. She nodded grimly because the evidence was undeniable. A chilling message was etched into the sight, wishing victory against the coming frost. The truth hit him like a physical blow. The organization knew the world was going to freeze long before the first snowflake fell. Her fist slammed into the console with a heavy thud. That anger flared in her eyes as she stared at the glowing blue tank. She demanded to know how many lives were lost to the organization's secrets. Watching her, he realized her calm mask had finally shattered. He wondered if the NSLB had been tracking superhumans like him for years. The connection between the shells and the facility felt like a tightening noose. He searched her expression for any sign of the woman he knew. Breaking the silence, he asked what was weighing so heavily on her mind. She looked away and claimed she was just caught in the past. Even after everything they had survived together, he realized he barely knew her. He wondered about the real Jo Shuya. She seemed so rational and composed on the surface. Yet underneath, he sensed someone incredibly fragile. Sensing his gaze, she asked why he was staring so intently. He panicked instantly and blurted out a clumsy excuse about his own memories. Suddenly, a loud warning siren echoed through the room. The computer system identified a massive cluster of life signals on the railroad. Looking at the monitor, they saw a crowd of civilians moving through the dark. She leaned in closer to study the blurry footage. Barbara was leading the group directly toward their location. They were estimated to arrive in just 30 minutes. Data streams flickered as the facility prepared for the arrival. She wondered why her old friend was bringing so many people to this dangerous place. Turning toward the exit, she announced she was going back to the tunnel. He refused to let her go alone and offered to deal with any shells they encountered. The AI voice warned that temperatures in the tunnel were reaching freezing levels. It recommended the use of hazardous environment protective suits. He made a sarcastic remark about where the taxpayers' money was going. She ignored the joke and said it was time to change gear. A warning light flashed on the equipment locker as it hissed open. He asked why he was being forced to wear one too. Suddenly, a heavy metal case flew through the air and hit him in the chest. He cried out in shock. She told him to talk less and start dressing. Without heat regulation, his body would turn into a frozen popsicle in minutes. She began to unzip her suit while explaining the features of the new gear. The suit fell to the floor in an instant. He froze in place with his eyes wide open. The force of the nosebleed sent him reeling backward across the room. Later, he sat with tissues stuffed in his nose while she finished the preparations. She began applying tape to his new dark suit. He looked down at the sleek material and felt the power within it. She explained that they had to cover the NSLB symbols to avoid being attacked by the prophetic association. The suit felt like a second layer of skin that preserved his energy. She looked ready for battle with a weapon in her hand. Looking up at her, he felt a surge of confidence. He stood tall in his new gear, ready for whatever was coming. High above them, a surveillance camera tracked their every move through the facility. An emergency broadcast suddenly flashed on the station monitors. That panic spread through the halls as the evacuation orders were issued to everyone in the western sectors. The emergency sirens blared through the cold metal corridors. People scrambled toward the last available transport as the station entered lockdown. Masked guards ushered the panicked crowd away from the western sectors. High above the chaos, a gloved hand pressed the final sequence to seal the tunnels. Hannah stood tall and asked if that was the end of his message. He nodded and thanked her for the help. Then her gaze sharpened as she asked what he really discovered in those dark tunnels. He forced a smile to hide the secret of the hidden base. Mentioning a simple gas leak seemed like the safest lie to tell. She studied his face for any hint of deception. He insisted it was just a safety measure until a full investigation began. Not reaching into her gear, she prepared to give him something important. She handed over a communication device for his journey. He took the radio as she told him to call if the situation changed. Addressing him with a title of respect, she leaned in close. Suddenly, she gripped his shoulder with surprising strength. She confessed that her faith rested entirely on his shoulders. While others only cared for their own survival, she believed he was different. He looked her in the eyes and promised he would stay. Gratitude filled his voice as he prepared to depart. A simple piece of tape marked his gear for the mission ahead. Minutes later, they were running deep into the pitch-black tunnels. The power was dead in this section of the subway. His companion checked the holographic map to confirm their location. Biting down on his flashlight, he reached into an open electrical panel. He worked quickly to restore the connection. With a final adjustment, the wire sparked to life. The overhead lights hummed as they flickered on. They marveled at the sturdy construction of this old line. Moving forward, they kept their footsteps quiet against the concrete. Suddenly, he pulled her back and signaled for absolute silence. He pointed toward the darkness ahead. Staring into the gloom, he saw a group of figures standing perfectly still. They looked like ordinary citizens waiting for a train that would never come. Then he spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Barbara stood among them with her back turned. She looked pale and distant. His companion wondered aloud why a doctor would be standing here with civilians. Thought something felt dangerously wrong. The crowd was no longer moving toward the platform. Barbara remained motionless as they approached. Her legs began to shake violently. A dark, oily shadow pooled beneath her feet. She began to mutter a single word over and over. Horror filled the air as her body started to warp. Her head split open with a sickening sound. Blue fluid sprayed everywhere as her humanity vanished. His companion froze in shock at the sight. Inside the girl, a mass of blue pulsating tissue replaced her organs. It was a trap, he shouted a warning as the monster lunged. A barrage of gunfire cut through the creature before it could strike. Bullets tore through the blue meat and white coat. He looked back in surprise at the speed of the attack. Smoke drifted from the barrel of his companion's weapon. She holstered the gun with cold efficiency. Speed was her only advantage in this nightmare. She lamented her own slow reaction time as if the kill was not enough. The thing on the floor was nothing more than a hollow shell. It had been a perfect mimicry designed to lure them in. She explained that the real Barbara was likely already gone. Suddenly, the other citizens in the crowd began to twitch. They all began to chant the same word in a haunting chorus. Dozens of shells stood up and discarded their human disguises. They were surrounded by a sea of monsters. The creatures revealed their true forms with multiple glowing eyes. Panic started to set in as the odds turned against them. Light explodes from the strange creatures as they prepare to strike. Joanna is caught off guard by the blinding intensity of the glow. Shielding her eyes, she struggles to stay upright while the brightness consumes the tunnel. Her vision blurs as a forgotten memory begins to surface. A simple cross-earring once represented a life she no longer leads. She remembers the day her friends surprised her with a small gift. They had sneaked out of the base just to celebrate her birthday. Even the cake was a fake creation made by the research team. Back then, her smile was genuine and full of warmth. Reality hits hard because Shuya knows he cannot outrun the speed of light. His eyes pulse with a cold and analytical blue energy. Suddenly, dozens of identical women appear and claim to be the real Joanna. Shock freezes him for a second while he tries to spot the difference. The clones scream at each other in a desperate bid for his trust. Standing between them, he realizes a choice must be made instantly. A spray of blood hits the floor near a discarded earring. One of the mimics is sliced open and reveals its hollow nature. Shuya reaches out to catch a flying piece of jewelry. He holds the cross earring and sees the blood of the real Joanna. Everything clicks into place as he stares at the stained metal. Then he radios the doctor to confirm the strategy worked. Joanna smirks despite her injury because she was willing to hurt herself to win. He charges forward. Blue light trails behind. His blades tear through. He bursts through. A mimic head spins through the air while blue fluid sprays the walls. Silence returns to the tunnel as the last of the creatures fall. Joanna wipes the blue filth from her face and glares at him. He can only offer a sheepish grin as an apology for the mess. Looking down, he inspects the earrings held tightly in his palm. Both pieces are finally back together where they belong. He tries to return them, but she stops him with a cold look. She claims they are nothing but trash she wanted to discard years ago. Being used as a human garbage bin was not how he expected the day to go. Joanna sighs and her eyes momentarily lose their sharp edge. He senses a deep and painful history hidden behind her casual dismissal. Looking at the corpses, they realize the real work is just beginning. She orders him to stop standing around and help her search. They need to find a core to understand how these things function. Shuya asks if she has found a new lead in this chaotic mess. She reminds him of the hound-type monsters that attacked earlier. Those creatures were merely familiars serving a much larger parent. Killing the offspring is useless if the source remains alive to spawn more. These specific mimics are different because they have no core at all. It feels as though they were left here on purpose to cause a distraction. A strange catacon appears on a nearby device. Suddenly, a blonde warrior stands over the carnage with a look of pure rage. She demands to know who dared to interfere with her prey. Shuya and Joanna exchange a wary glance as the pressure rises again. Irina screams about her ruined plans and her lost targets. Someone speaks into her ear and tries to calm her frantic anger. She declares that the mimics she was supposed to kill are already dead. Irina stood frozen as the voice in her ear demanded to know what happened. Looking ahead, she saw her targets were already being handled by someone else. The enemies were confused by her foul language and aggressive behavior. Sniffing the air, she caught a familiar scent that made her blood boil. She realized exactly who was standing right in front of her. The priest on the other end of the line begged her to remain calm. He reminded her that their leader explicitly warned them to avoid this specific man. Ignoring the order, she told the priest to shut his mouth. She crushed the communication device under her boot without hesitation. Green flames erupted from her body as her rage reached its peak. Screaming that everyone should go to hell, she let her power explode. She launched herself forward like a guided missile. The enemy girl reacted instantly and began firing her weapon. Irina didn't slow down and deflected the incoming lead with her blade. Seeing her bullets swatted away like flies left the shooter in total shock. Irina swung her sword with lethal intent to end the fight quickly. Her blade was suddenly stopped by a shimmering black field. The man in black stood his ground with a cold expression. He knew that running was no longer an option for either of them. Energy surged around him as a massive shockwave rattled the tunnel. Irina noticed his presence felt completely different than their last encounter. A thick layer of organic armor materialized over his entire body. His legs shifted into powerful claws as the transformation took hold. Watching from the side, the doctor realized the test subject had evolved again. The man felt a strange sensation as this new power flooded his veins. A spectral woman appeared at his side and declared this his complete form. Irina refused to be intimidated by his new look. A jagged mask snapped shut over her face as her own transformation deepened. She stood fully armored in a sleek cat-like suit of green energy. Threatening to beat him to death, she prepared for another round. She lunged forward with her mind focused entirely on the kill. Her speed was so great that she left afterimages behind her. The man sighed at the realization that talking was useless against a crazy teen. He extended razor-sharp blue claws from his hands. Irina pulled a hidden gun while keeping her sword gripped in her teeth. She unleashed a barrage of bullets at point-blank range. Moving with blurred speed, he sliced the projectiles out of the air. I countered her strikes with fluid precision. They traded blows and insults in a chaotic dance of steel and energy. He mocked her lack of manners while parrying her wild attacks. Irina flipped through the air to find a better angle for her blade. He spotted a momentary opening and prepared to finish it. His glowing claw swept through the air with crushing force. The blow landed with a thunderous impact against her side. He gasped when his strike failed to penetrate her defenses. He remembered that she had blocked his strongest attacks before. The spectral woman explained that the barrier was more complex than it appeared. Irina swung her sword with a ferocious roar. She followed the slash with a heavy kick to his chest. The force of the impact sent him skidding back across the floor. She leaped into the air to rain down more green slashes. The doctor observed the fight and finally figured out the secret to the barrier. She explained that Irina was manipulating the fundamental forces of physics. By creating a field of repulsion, she could redirect any incoming kinetic energy. This power allowed her to stay airborne by pushing against the floor and air itself. The man looked at his hands and wondered how to bypass such a defense. He focused all his energy into the tips of his fingers to find a solution. Memories of an ancient power began to surface in his mind. The monster looked down in confusion as his claws pulsed with a strange light. Something was wrong with his fingertips. They were turning a deep shade of crimson. He remembered the doctor's words about energy being transferable. He focused all his power into the technique known as the bear's fang. Just then, a green blur lunged from the shadows. She swung her blade with lethal intent. He barely blocked the strike as sparks flew. Moving with incredible speed, he prepared his next move. A massive explosion of green energy rocked the area. The impact sent shockwaves through the floor. She mocked him for standing around to talk during a fight. He asked if she was finished with her little display. The cold gaze of his mask offered no mercy. A massive surge of blue energy erupted from his body. Standing tall, he prepared to end the duel. It was time for his counterattack. He vanished into a streak of light. She could barely track his movements as he closed the distance. Speed was no longer a factor in this fight. Multiple copies of him seemed to strike from every angle. These were not clones, but after images born of pure speed. Her eyes widened as she realized his claws were glowing red again. Panic finally began to set in. Suddenly, her strength began to fail. He was acting like a vampire and draining her very essence. Her plan was falling apart in real time. The doctor watched with a cold smile. This was the power of piezoelectricity in action. Every blow weakened her defense while fueling his own body. The barrier that was supposed to protect her became a coffin. His claws tore through her protection like paper. There was no such thing as an unbreakable shield. Desperate and bleeding, she demanded to know why he was ruining their plan. He grabbed her and demanded answers about the frozen world. He shouted for her to tell him how they were all connected. She laughed through the blood and told him he knew nothing. She reached out to connect their minds for one final revelation. Their gazes locked as the link was established. A strange green energy began to assimilate his consciousness. She whispered for him to see for himself. Everything went white as he prepared to see the truth. His vision blurred as a single eye focused on the path. He opened his eyes to a vision of the city before the frost took over. He saw a younger version of himself standing in the middle of Brooklyn. A gun was suddenly pointed in his direction. Agent White stood nearby holding a gun to someone's head. He recognized the woman standing across from the agent. These were the memories she wanted him to see. He watched as a portal opened in the middle of the street. Stepping through the gate, he found himself back at the station. A hooded figure stood waiting for him in the darkness. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. The leader of the cult was his own reflection. The astral figure loomed over him like a cosmic nightmare. Lin Mo struggled to understand how this shadow could even exist. He demanded to know the identity of the ghost standing before him. A smug grin pulled at the stranger's lips as he challenged Lin Mo to recognize the truth. Reality hit him with the weight of a mountain. He had been turning his back on the obvious for far too long. His soul claimed ownership of the very body Lin Mo was currently occupying. Heavy chains rattled against a frame that looked exactly like his own. Doc paralyzed his mind as the implication settled in. This half-human shell was the only reason they could meet in this void. Desperate for answers, he asked what the entity was planning to do next. The monster vanished and reappeared behind him in a blur of speed. It whispered a chilling promise to accelerate the freezing of the entire world. Fear gripped his heart at the thought of the coming apocalypse. His vision blurred as the entity claimed his skin would be its final gift. Lin Mo gasped for air as his consciousness slammed back into the physical world. He found himself staring down the enemy who had nearly taken his life. Reacting on pure instinct, he drove a powerful kick into her chest. She flew backward and crashed into the metal floor while coughing up green bile. Before she could recover, he pressed a cold gun barrel against her temple. He growled a demand to know what she meant by accelerating the process. Her eyes widened as she realized she was no longer in control of the situation. Lin Mo tightened his grip and warned her that he would not ask again. His finger rested heavily on the trigger. One twitch would end her life. Shaking with rage, she finally agreed to tell him everything he wanted to know. She revealed their leader was a mysterious figure known only as the Speaker. Her only goal was to return to her own world no matter the cost to this one. The doctor watched from the side with a grim expression on her face. The prisoner laughed through her teeth and mocked their doomed attempts at survival. She screamed that everyone was already dead and they were just waiting for the ice. Turning to her companion, the doctor asked what he made of this madness. Lin Mo kept his eyes locked on the target and stated they would stop them anyway. She cackled at his arrogance and dared him to try and entertain her before she died. He accused her of brainwashing the survivors and turning them into slaves. She did not deny it and claimed the weak were born to serve the strong. Lin Mo pulled a hidden radio from his belt with a confident smirk. The device hummed with active power as he checked the signal. Terror finally replaced her smugness as she realized she had been tricked. He called out to Hannah over the open frequency to check if she was listening. Deep within the control room, Hannah stood ready at the broadcast console. She confirmed that every word of the confession had been sent to the entire subway line. Loudspeakers throughout the tunnels blared the truth for every survivor to hear. The woman slumped against the wall as her influence evaporated in an instant. Masked soldiers stopped in their tracks and realized they were nothing but pawns. Lin Mo smiled because he had just shattered their false hope forever. One by one, the guards tore off their masks in a silent act of rebellion. A heavy boot crushed the discarded symbol of their former masters. Hannah ripped the badge from her shoulder and tossed it aside with disgust. The doctor admitted that she had underestimated his tactical mind. He joked that escaping death twice tends to make a person learn quickly. Suddenly, the defeated woman began to laugh with a chilling, hollow sound. She looked up with glowing eyes and snarled that they talked way too much. Golden energy erupted from her body and caught them completely off guard. 30 minutes earlier, Hannah had received her secret orders to wait for the signal. Hannah stood at attention and waited for the command of her new master. Lin Mo remained silent while he weighed the risks of trusting her. He knew she likely saw through his disguise already. Turning to face her fully, he demanded the absolute truth. He asked if she truly believed in the divine authority of the prophetic association. She hesitated and began to give the standard scripted response of a loyal soldier. Lin Mo cut her off with a piercing gaze that demanded sincerity. His eyes burned with an intensity that left no room for lies. Hannah froze under the sudden pressure. Finally, she broke her professional facade and confessed her true feelings. She explained how the previous leaders had used faith as a weapon to enslave them. Her voice trembled with years of suppressed resentment toward her captors. Lin Mo watched her closely and realized her strength outweighed her self-doubt. Without her leadership, the station would have descended into absolute chaos long ago. She was a survivor looking for a way to break her chains. Lin Mo told her to follow his lead because he had a plan to expose the truth. He dropped the act and shared his real name for the first time. Meanwhile, the memory of past failures still haunted the outskirts of the station. Soldiers had opened fire on a fleeing girl without a moment of hesitation. Her body was torn apart by lead before a mysterious light intervened. A powerful shield flickered into existence just as the killing blow landed. The attackers looked on in disbelief as their prey survived. Suddenly, a massive surge of energy leveled the area. Dust and debris filled the air. The combatants were tossed aside. Lin Mo emerged from the wreckage. He scanned for remaining threats. Smoke rose from the ground where the blast had centered. They stood amidst the ruins and searched for the source of the power. Looking at the collapsed tunnel, he realized the enemy had used a teleportation ability to escape. His partner remained silent while she processed the narrow escape. Miles away, a man in white walked through the freezing snow. He left a trail of blood behind him as he approached a fallen comrade. Cross looked down at Arena and offered a shallow apology for her state. Despite her wounds, she raised a defiant hand to show her disgust. She struggled to speak and begged him not to reveal her failure to the others. Back at the station, the atmosphere turned thick with hostility. The refugees stared at Lin Mo with eyes full of cold suspicion. When he tried to approach them, the crowd recoiled in fear. He couldn't understand why they were suddenly treating him like a monster. His companion pointed out the obvious truth of their situation. They walked through the parting crowd while the tension reached a breaking point. Lin Mo realized that losing faith had left these people with nothing but paranoia. Every step he took felt like he was walking on a knife's edge. In the end times, suspicion was a survival instinct that couldn't be turned off. He tried to explain that the association had orchestrated the monster attack as a performance. He promised them that he was different from the tyrants of the past. A young man stepped forward and shouted his defiance at the supposedly holy one. Lin Mo looked into their fearful faces and felt a wave of frustration. He only wanted to provide safety and order in this dying world. The crowd demanded proof of his intentions while his partner considered using force. Lin Mo knew that violence would only deepen their terror. His partner asked what his next move would be. If he didn't find a way to reach them, the community would destroy itself from within. Suddenly, a deafening crack shattered the silence. Hannah fired a round into the ceiling and ordered the mob to shut their mouths. Hannah stepped before the restless crowd and called for silence. Looking at the desperate faces, she announced she had something vital to share. She spoke of a promised Messiah who would descend when destruction rained from the heavens. Perhaps that savior had been standing among them all along, hidden in plain sight. People listened with bated breath as she warned that frauds had clouded their vision. Watching from the side, Lin Mo wondered what game she was playing. This message of unconditional love resonated deeply with the broken survivors. Hope began to flicker in eyes that had seen only darkness. Another woman looked on, feeling the weight of the Lord's supposed love. The crowd erupted in a unified chant of devotion as a beam of light struck the floor. Turning her gaze back to them, she asked who their true Messiah was. She reminded them of the one who brought food when they were starving. He was the source of warmth during the freezing frost. Standing directly in front of Lin Mo, she signaled the end of their search. He was the one sent to save them all. Lin Mo realized her plan was to turn him into a living icon. Suddenly, a girl pointed at him and shouted that he was the one. He had fixed the heaters and solved the food shortage. Hannah officially presented him as the light in their darkest hour. Desperate hands reached out to touch the man they now called their savior. They swarmed him with cries of worship. Hannah watched the chaos with a satisfied, knowing expression. The subway echoed with the name of the Messiah until the world seemed to fade into that single title. Once the fervor died down, the station finally returned to a tense quiet. Lin Mo approached Hannah to thank her for defusing the riot. She stopped him with a sharp question, asking if she was speaking to the man or the legend. He felt a chill, wondering if she was testing his ego. With a humble smile, he insisted he was just a human like everyone else. She noted his difference from other leaders with a smirk. As they shook hands, her tone shifted to a serious warning. The grip was firm, signaling a shift in their alliance. She explained that the masses only understood the language of faith. Lin Mo processed the weight of her words. Most refugees came from religious backgrounds, so leading them required speaking their perspective. Fools only saw despair, but she believed the wise saw the truth of their situation. Dr. Joe watched the exchange with a skeptical eye. Lin Mo felt overwhelmed by the sudden philosophical depth. Excusing herself, Hannah left to attend to other duties. The two companions stood alone on the platform. Joe teased him about his new divine status, but the mood remained heavy. Returning to the control center, the logo of the eyes machine glowed on the monitors. Joe asked what their next move should be. They knew the current balance in the subway was fragile and could break at any moment. Lin Mo revealed he had already analyzed the floor plans for a permanent solution. He found a hidden section designed for disaster relief. It contained a full power system and medical units, making it the perfect bunker. While planning the move, his thoughts drifted to friends in Manhattan. Suddenly a red alert flashed across the screen. Static filled the monitors until a familiar face appeared. Lin Mo and Joe froze in horror at the sight. It was little Maggie, sobbing and begging for help because she was trapped by monsters. New York's Chinatown glows under the festive lights of a New Year celebration. Red lanterns sway above the crowded streets as the sounds of laughter and music fill the air. Inside a cluttered office, a ringing phone cuts through the holiday peace. A hand emerges from a pile of blankets to silence the persistent noise. Lin Mo answers with a tired yawn and asks what the caller wants. On the other end, Sonia Jo walks through the city with a playful smirk. She is surprised he actually picked up the phone. Flattery is her first weapon as she calls him the best investigator in the district. Lin Mo pours a fresh cup of coffee while listening to her suspicious praise. He demands she stop being vague and get to the point. Outside, the celebration continues with a massive dragon parade. Lin Mo threatens to hang up because he refuses to take cases during the holidays. Sonia quickly switches to a pleading tone and claims it is an absolute emergency. He refuses to be tricked again and starts to walk away. Just then, she mentions the reward is enough to clear his massive debt. The memory of a terrifying debt collector flashes through his mind. Desperation takes over and he immediately asks where they should meet. They gather at a traditional restaurant where a man introduces himself as the manager of a famous streamer. He slides a folder across the table with a serious expression. Sonia laughs off the tension while Lin Mo examines the details of the request. The target is a creator named Mingming who has suddenly vanished. Her agency is desperate because they cannot contact her. Kurt places a briefcase full of cash on the table as an advance payment. The sight of the money makes their eyes widen in pure shock. Time is running out because a major live stream is scheduled for tonight. Lin Mo realizes this is his only chance to finally be free of his financial chain. He declares that the case is officially his. Later that night, the trio arrives at the missing streamer's apartment building. Working quickly, Lin Mo picks the lock while the others keep watch. He finds a diary inside that reveals the girl quit and fled back to her home country. Kurt collapses in despair and cries about the end of his company. His chin trembles as he realizes the stream is doomed. He begs the detective for help while Lin Mo tries to push him away. If the company fails, there will be no second half of the payment. Kurt continues to wail on the floor in total misery. Sonia watches the chaos and suggests a secret plan to save the situation. Lin Mo agrees to the scheme as long as they double his pay. Sonia and Kurt look him over and decide he looks the part. Moments later, Lin Mo stands in a pink dress with his hair in buns. The silk fabric and heart cutouts are a far cry from his usual attire. Pink heels complete the humiliating transformation. He screams at Sonia and asks why he has to be the one to do this. Sonia ignores his complaints and starts applying makeup to his face. They use a high-tech AI filter to replace his features with the streamer's face. On the screen, he looks exactly like a cute girl. The live stream begins and he greets the fans with a fake smile. Lin Mo forces a high voice and starts selling products to the viewers. He even makes a heart gesture to keep the donations flowing. Kurt realizes he forgot a major detail. A behind-the-scenes camera is showing the real room to a top fan. A massive man with a scarred face bursts into the studio looking for his idol. It is Luo, the very mobster Lin Mo owes money to. Lin Mo freezes in terror and realizes he is going to die. He hides his face while the mobster demands to see the real Ming Ming. Lua Dalong looks down at the phone in his hand. The AI image of the girl smiles back at him. He looks back at the muscular man in the pink dress. Tears of pure horror stream down his face as his fantasy is shattered. He realizes his favorite streamer is a fake. His henchmen drag him away as he wails about his broken heart. Far away from the city, a mysterious figure stands in a high-tech facility. Huge cables pulse with blue energy throughout the room. Stasis pods line the walls containing strange biological experiments. A man with horns stares at a specimen labeled as number 13. He claims they need her power for the sake of the future. Deep inside the pod, a pale face stares back with cold and angry eyes. Helicopters roar over the Manhattan refugee camp as orders to prioritize the injured echo through the freezing air. Inside a makeshift medical bay, an old man struggles for breath behind an oxygen mask while a medic confirms his rare blood type. Life hangs by a fragile thread as his daughter watches in silence. Outside, the commander barks orders to double the firepower and fortify the perimeter against the encroaching monsters. A sharp voice interrupts his authority, calling him a stupid baldy with no regard for the living. Without warning, a leg blurs through the air in a high-velocity strike. Barbara slams her boot into the commander, demanding the explanation she was promised. Exhaling a cloud of smoke, she stands her ground with cold defiance. She grabs his gear, refusing to let him retreat into his silence. White steps between them, trying to de-escalate the tension before it turns bloody. He reaches out to hand over a new identification card issued by the High Command. The blonde agent stares at the small piece of plastic with a hollow expression. His eyes scan the text as the weight of his reality shifts. The name on the card reads Kurt Cobain, a title that feels more like a cage than an identity. Looking toward his companion, Kurt asks how much of his life as a sleeper agent was actually real. White hesitates, his face falling into a mask of shared pain. Kurt forces a laugh, masking his existential dread by claiming a regular agent wouldn't understand the bad boys unit. He turns his back, waving off the heavy question as if it were a mere joke. White watches him go, feeling the distance between them grow. Suddenly he speaks up, admitting that he truly understands the burden of a false identity. He confesses that he often felt like his own life was nothing more than a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Turning toward the freezing wind, he admits he had once tried to run from his own past. A cheerful voice breaks the somber mood, welcoming Agent Cobain back to the fold. Officer Bridges stands there, introducing herself as a member of the NYPD with a polite salute. White's face flushes deep red as he fumbles to return the gesture. She laughs, telling him there is no need for such formality among survivors. Her smile is a rare light in the dim camp. Beyond the fences, the lights of the tents flicker against the dark horizon. They stand together, watching the civilians undergo their checkups. She looks away, her face turning pink from more than just the biting cold. Embarrassment washes over them both as the silence grows heavy and awkward. Walking side by side, they move through the snow-dusted grounds of the fortress. She asks if he feels the chill in such thin clothing. He replies that he has simply become numb to the freezing air. They stare at the perimeter, hoping the others can endure the coming winter. In the distance, the Statue of Liberty stands as a frozen, silent sentinel over the ruins. Later, White enters the underground fortress to deliver his final report. The commander looks up from his screens, his face etched with grim determination as he orders the door locked. The heavy metal slab slides shut with a definitive thud. Standing guard, White watches the room darken as the true briefing begins. He announces that while the primary target has escaped, he has found something far more dangerous. Barbara lurks in the shadows, her patience finally wearing thin. The commander opens a weathered folder containing secrets recovered from a Brooklyn stronghold. She bares her teeth, ready to tear the truth out of him. White begins to detail the intel gathered by the field agents. He presents the key evidence that will change everything they knew about the apocalypse. The commander stares at documents dated decades before the current disaster. This wasn't the first time the world had frozen, and Project Europa was the proof. He grabs his intercom, demanding Barbara's presence immediately. She doesn't wait, kicking the door open with a thunderous bang. He looks at her with a haunted expression, promising to explain the origin of the monsters. The truth about the Earth's freezing was buried in blood and ancient history. A new shadow looms, watching from the darkness with a blade ready to strike. The door closed behind Barbara and White as they entered the restricted office. Standing by his monitors, the commander admitted they were the only ones he could still trust. He pulled out a stack of files and explained they lacked the clearance for this information. Barbara snapped at him to get to the point because they were running out of time. Taking a heavy breath, the man confessed that this frozen disaster was not the first of its kind. Barbara realized the organization knew the world was going to freeze long ago. Handing over the files, the commander mentioned a secret called Project Europa. Hidden in the shadows of his mind, he wondered why the higher-ups were so desperate to keep the plan hidden. Across the frozen city, the world lay in ruins while refugees huddled in freezing camps. An officer led a mother and child through the snow toward a supposed shelter. White watched the screens and recognized faces from his previous mission with Code Zero. According to the records, only a superhuman could disable the national engine. White stood stiffly and tried to hide his growing unease. In the camp, Officer Bridges smiled as she ushered more people into the dark building. She knew the enemy had already infiltrated every level of their system. Back in the office, Barbara demanded to know what the invaders actually wanted. The commander admitted he did not know and asked for her professional opinion. Looking over the documents, they realized they were missing a vital piece of the puzzle. White remembered an agent from the fieldwork department who had sent something back. In a separate wing, a strange shell-like creature stood motionless in a glass chamber. It looked like a hollow husk waiting for a soul. Suddenly, the doors to the surveillance room slid open. A girl in a school uniform stood there with a terrifying mask and a blade. She told the staff it was time for them to clock out forever. The commander insisted that the item the agent brought back was the key to everything. Behind him on the screen, the girl stood over a floor covered in blood. Reaching out, she pressed the release button on the console. The containment doors hissed open to reveal the creature. Its body split down the middle and began to unravel into a mass of blue fibers. It struggled to pull itself through the doorway as it birthed new forms. The girl watched the familiars emerge and noted they looked exactly like their parents. She ordered them to go out and cause as much chaos as possible. Her eyes glowed as she prepared to reclaim what was hers. On the desk sat a glass jar containing a severed head. The group stared at the gruesome trophy and realized it held the answers to the freeze. This severed head was the key to saving or destroying the world. Suddenly, a piercing alarm filled the room. White sensed a presence and drew his weapon instantly. He shouted for the others to stand back as the wall behind them buckled. The metal plating exploded into fragments as the girl burst through. She looked at them with a manic grin and eyes full of murder. White did not hesitate and pulled the trigger. Moving like a blur, she deflected every bullet with her glowing blade. Mocking his efforts, she told him he should not just stand around. She lunged forward with a look of pure insanity. Outside, the staff began to scream in terror as the monsters arrived. Panic spread through the halls of the headquarters as everyone realized they were trapped. In the refugee camp, the sound of gunfire erupted as the betrayal turned into a massacre. Total slaughter fills the freezing streets. Civilians and colleagues tear each other apart without a shred of mercy. Desperate men beg for their lives while claiming they are still human. Soldiers watch through their scopes with trembling fingers. They cannot distinguish between man and beast anymore. Blood sprays across the cold snow as the transformation takes hold. A man collapses when his own body begins to betray him. Standing over a fallen victim, a crazed survivor raises a heavy axe. He ignores the desperate pleas for mercy. The blade bites deep into a skull and shatters it. He does not care who is a monster and who is innocent. To him, anyone can turn at any second. Only the cold-blooded deserve to live in this new world. He smiles with a madness that rivals the monsters themselves. A police officer watches the carnage with grim determination. She pulls the trigger without a moment of hesitation. Bullets rip through the madman's chest in quick succession. He refuses to fall even as the metal pierces his skin. She stands her ground while the world collapses around her. Everything is falling into total ruin. A crowd of mindless husks begins to close in from the shadows. She orders a mother and child to find a place to hide immediately. The woman asks if the officer will be okay alone. Flashing a brave smile, the officer reminds them she is still a cop. Protecting people is the only job she has left to do. She fires into the darkness while the pair escapes. Monsters masquerading as men whisper their lies through the tents. These creatures can mimic human appearance perfectly. High above the carnage, a man in a white hat adjusts his brim. Their twisted plan is finally reaching its peak. A young girl approaches him with a bored expression. She stands on the edge of a container overlooking the death below. Shifting the weight in her hands, she hands over a glass jar. It contains a severed head that serves as their 13th subject. She has finished the task the boss gave her. He instructs her to use the mimics to spread even more chaos. Blank-faced puppets wait for their orders in the snow. With a golden glow, the mastermind prepares to move. He vanishes into the light to find a new target. The mother and child find a small gap between heavy containers. She prays this spot will be safe enough for them to survive. Shazos move through the alleyways searching for fresh meat. Knowing time is up, the mother tells her daughter to be a good girl. She tucks the child away in a dark corner behind some machinery. Tears stream down her face as she prepares to say goodbye. Maggie is a good child and she must stay silent. The little girl stares out from the darkness in terrified silence. Leading the monsters away is the only way to save her daughter. The mother screams to draw their attention toward herself. She runs into the freezing night to keep them away from the hiding spot. Inside the dark container, a phone screen lights up the girl's face. A remote connection signal blinks rapidly on the display. Maggie trembles as she looks at the strange device. With shaking hands, she taps the glowing screen. She whispers her name into the transmitter with a cracking voice. She begs for someone to come and save them from the dark. Back in the narrow corridor, the officer is running out of bullets. She looks up at the sky and asks for a miracle. The mob is only inches away from her throat. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light shatters the darkness above. The monsters freeze in terror as the air begins to hum. He gasps as the pressure changes in an instant. A massive blue figure crashes down from the heavens like a comet. The impact sends the monsters flying in every direction. Determined to find the truth, she monitors the screens as the system tracks a distress signal through the darkness. Most systems remain offline, but a rough approximation of the signal appears over a holographic map of Manhattan. Narrowing the search area proves difficult with the limited data available. The signal seems to originate from an unregistered facility belonging to the security department. Not realizing the danger, she concludes that the department is likely working for their enemy now. She commands the system to save a waypoint at a nearby logistics base. Her partner watches the screen with a look of mild annoyance at the nickname she uses. After a moment, she transmits the coordinates directly to his suit. He questions if the protective gear is truly capable of such advanced navigation. The system calculates an ideal path through an emergency maintenance tunnel. Following that, he will need to navigate the abandoned civilian railroad tunnels to reach the target. She smiles and tells him that the rest of the mission is his responsibility. As he prepares to leave, she whispers that he might be their messiah. Suddenly, blue light explodes as his transformation takes hold. His face becomes a jagged mask of alien armor and glowing. A young officer watches from behind a crate, her eyes wide with pure terror. Rain pours over his dark, hulking frame as he stands in the center of the yard. He turns his head, his predatory gaze locking onto her position. Trembling, she raises her pistol and aims it at the center of his head. He stands perfectly still as she holds her breath. Not a human voice comes from the monster, assuring her that he is not one of the creatures. She gasps in shock at the realization that a man lives inside the armor. Movement in the shadows catches his attention as a group of hostiles approaches. Not these figures move with an eerie, possessed rhythm. He tells the officer to stand back because he intends to handle them alone. Blue energy crackles along his claws as he prepares to lunge. He moves like a blur, shredding through the attackers in a single violent motion. The officer can only stare at the carnage in absolute awe. Seeing his massive wings spread against the dark sky, she asks if he is an angel. Inside a nearby container, a little girl named Maggie hears a familiar voice. She looks at her phone with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. A man calls out to her, telling her to stay away from the door. Claws slice through the heavy metal as if it were paper. The door is ripped open and Maggie hides behind a bunk in fear. Recognition hits her instantly when she sees the man standing in the light. He steps into the container, his armored suit gleaming. A gentle smile crosses his face as he greets the young girl. She shouts for him and runs forward with all her might. Maggie leaps into his arms, squeezing him so hard he can barely breathe. She asks about the bad people, and he explains that the monsters have been chased away. Outside, the frozen remains of a creature lie broken on a crate. Maggie looks up at him and asks if he has seen her mother. He remembers the other neighbors and hopes they are still alive since their bodies were missing. But escorting two people to safety through the chaos seems like an impossible task. The officer suggests heading toward Liberty Island for evacuation. They look out toward the harbor where the statue stands in the distance. Suddenly, the officer's radio crackles to life with a frantic message. A voice screams for them to stay away from the island. High above the harbor, a silent monster watches the city from the base of the statue. The armored truck sat dead on the frozen wasteland. Faceless horrors pressed against the glass, their distorted voices echoing the same frustrated curse over and over. Inside the cabin, Joanna gripped her head in a desperate attempt to find a way out. Every path led back to Liberty Island where the horde originated. Lee watched through the binoculars, his face pale as he realized the sheer scale of the nightmare. Monsters swarmed the perimeter like a suffocating tide. Panic finally snapped the mother sitting in the back. Reaching for the door handle, she insisted on returning to the harbor for her daughter. Joanna lunged forward and pinned her down instantly. The woman screamed that Maggie was all alone. Joanna roared back that opening the door meant death for everyone. Tears streamed down the mother's face as she begged to go back. Joanna's patience finally hit its breaking point. Raising her hand, she didn't hesitate. A sharp crack echoed through the metal hull. Joanna hissed that her selfishness would get them all killed. Looking up with hollow eyes, the woman reminded them that they were the ones who forced her into this car. Memories of their previous safety flickered like dying embers. They had been lucky to survive the first wave. Mr. Lin had given them hope in a world of ice, but that hope was gone now. Joanna felt the weight of those words sink in. Softening her tone, she addressed the woman as Mrs. Prez. She explained that they were a rescue team and not the enemy. It was their duty to protect her. Joanna truly wanted to help, even if her methods were harsh. Admitting she overreacted, she offered a silent olive branch. Mrs. Perez looked away, her voice small as she apologized in return. Joanna decided it was time for a gamble. She reached for the radio, hoping for any sign of life. Static hissed through the speakers, carrying a broken message about a civilian. Far away at the harbor, a desperate group called out for assistance. Mrs. Prez froze when a tiny familiar voice asked for her mommy. She grabbed the radio and screamed her daughter's name. The signal flickered one last time. Then the device went cold. The connection was dead. Joanna promised that they would find a way to stay safe. Suddenly, Lee shouted that the situation was changing. The monsters outside began to thrash with sudden agitation. A low, rhythmic rumble started vibrating through the floorboards. The sound of a heavy engine grew louder with every second. Looking in the side mirror, they saw a blur of motion cutting through the dark. Donna recognized that specific mechanical roar. A motorcycle tore across the ice at impossible speed. The rider twisted the throttle, pushing the machine to its limit. Skidding into a sharp drift, the biker released a wave of violet energy. Monsters were torn apart as the rider carved a path of blue blood. The vehicle circled the armored truck like a predator. Removing her helmet, the woman smiled as she noted her early arrival. The motorcycle roared through the snow as the predator closed in. Inside the transport, Joanna felt the weight of the coming storm. A strange purple flame flickered in the distance, cutting through the dark. Recognition hit her like a physical blow because this was the same monster that had ambushed them before. Standing in the middle of the wasteland, the woman held a weapon infused with dark energy. She took aim with a chilling smile. The trigger was pulled. Run now or die. Joanna screamed for everyone to abandon the vehicle. A streak of purple light tore through the freezing air. Then everything vanished into a blinding violet explosion. The force of the blast sent bodies flying like ragdolls. Looking back at the wreckage, Joanna could not believe the scale of the destruction. Smoke billowed from the mangled metal of their transport. This was not just a weapon, it was a terrifying black hole ability. Panicking, she checked on her comrade. Lee tried to move, but his leg was a mangled mess of blood and bone. The enemy laughed at their weakness. She did not understand why her leader wanted to wipe out such pathetic mortals. Joanna promised Lee he would be fine, even as her own heart hammered against her ribs. The monster did not care for mercy. Drawing a blade, she prepared to finish the job. Joanna stood her ground and aimed her pistol. She would cover him until her last breath. Bullet after bullet flew toward the target. The enemy just stood there. She suggested they stop resisting because it was useless. Lead shells bounced off her energy field as if they were toys. The shells hit the ground, spent and wasted. With a sadistic grin, the woman taunted them that no one was coming to save them. Then the worst sound possible echoed in the snow. Click. Joanna was out of ammo. The monster relaxed, joking about her own age catching up to her. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed behind her. A heavy vehicle smashed into the enemy at full speed. The impact shattered the ground and sent the woman tumbling into the distance. Joanna stared in disbelief at the sudden intervention. It was a rescue squad vehicle, but it should not be here. Inside, the driver was just as confused about the collision. High above on the roof, a figure stood amidst the swirling energy. Lin had arrived. By using his acceleration powers on the truck, he had turned it into a high-speed battering ram. He looked down at the survivors with calm eyes. He recognized the faces in the snow. Seeing the agents were safe brought a small moment of relief. He greeted them, his voice steady despite the chaos. Joanna froze when she saw his face. It was Code Zero, the wanted man. Instinct took over and she leveled her gun at him. She could not risk her team even if he just saved them. Maggie rushed forward to stop the violence. She begged her superior to listen. Lin reminded them that he was not the enemy. He pointed to Li's bleeding stump, urging them to prioritize life over duty. Joanna hesitated. She lowered her weapon, knowing the mission had changed. They needed Sonia to save Li's life. Without a doctor, he was a dead man. Just then, Lin's communicator chirped with a new signal. He checked the device on his arm. Behind them, the nightmare was not over. The purple flames flared up once more. The monster stood up, her clothes shredded but her smile wider than ever. Static hissed through the comms as the signal began to fade. Lin called out for Dr. Sonia but received only the sound of interference. Realizing the connection was lost, he lowered his hand in frustration. The truck began to pull away into the snowy distance. Its passengers shouted their thanks and promised to see him later. A heavy metal door slammed shut with a resounding bang. Standing alone in the freezing wind, he watched them leave. Everything seemed quiet for a fleeting moment. Suddenly, a jagged purple rift tore through the air behind him. His eyes widened as his internal sensors detected a massive surge of energy. A katana wrapped in dark violet flames thudded into the ground. Lin stared at the weapon as the snow around it vaporized instantly. Behind him, a woman stepped out from the shadows. She asked where he thought he was going with a calm, deadly voice, her face twisted into a cruel, manic grin. Recognizing her immediately, he cursed himself for forgetting she was still on his trail. She declared that he was not going anywhere today. Two heavy pistols appeared in her hands as she prepared to fire. Purple energy surged through her tattered clothes. Lin turned and screamed for the driver to start the engine. Inside the cab, the woman frantically gripped the steering wheel. The massive tires spun against the ice with a deafening roar. Just then, the assassin pulled her triggers. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark sky. Lin threw himself into the air to avoid the initial volley. He twisted his body mid-flight as energy beams streaked past. A sharp grin spread across her face as she watched him dodge. Panic flared in his mind as he realized the trap. She was not aiming for his body at all. The projectile streaked toward the katana embedded in the ground. Multiple impacts struck the blade simultaneously. A violent chain reaction of purple energy ignited the air. The resulting explosion tore through the battlefield. Lin was thrown backward by the sheer force of the shockwave. The blast hit the armored truck with terrifying power. It lifted the massive vehicle off the ground like a toy. Those inside were tossed against the metal walls in a blur of motion. Gasping for air, Lin struggled to understand the nature of her ability. The truck skidded toward the edge of a jagged precipice. It teetered precariously over the dark void below. Dazed and bleeding, the women inside tried to regain their senses. A young girl looked out the window with wide, terrified eyes. They were in a desperate situation with no way out. The truck began its final plunge into the abyss. A dark silhouette appeared on the windshield like a nightmare. Large rocks shattered against the hull as the vehicle tumbled. Looking down at the chaos, the assassin bid them a cold farewell. She raised her guns one last time to finish the job. Her eyes glowed with the promise of slaughter. Blue flames suddenly erupted from Lin's body as he pushed past his limits. He moved so fast he seemed to vanish into the snow. The survivors looked up in shock as a new light filled the sky. A massive boom echoed as he reappeared directly behind the killer. She barely had time to turn before he struck. Lin's hand clamped around her throat with iron strength. He drove her downward with enough force to shatter the earth. The ice exploded into 1,000 shards upon impact. His eye burned with an intense celestial blue light. Gasping for breath, she asked why he would bother helping these people. She reminded him that they were merely natives of a dying timeline. They had absolutely nothing to do with him or his past. Standing over her, he loomed like a vengeful god. She insisted that as a holy one, he should know better. He did not belong in this wretched place. Anger flared in his gaze as he looked down at her. She called him a brother and urged him to return to his true family. She begged him to go back to where he belonged. A memory of a different woman's mocking face flashed through his mind. He remembered the doubts and the stinging pain of betrayal. He had already died once in that world. That place had abandoned him to the darkness long ago. He tightened his grip as he looked at her with pure resolve. Memories of his new friends and their simple kindness filled his heart. He saw the faces of those who had finally treated him like a human. This frozen wasteland was his home now. He had resolved to stay here and protect what was left. A pillar of blue energy erupted from his palm. The ground groaned and buckled under the weight of his power. A massive explosion of light consumed the entire horizon. The cold blade slid between her ribs with a sickening squelch. Shock paralyzed her as the man she trusted held her close. He did not look away when her blood stained his jacket. But survival demanded this sacrifice. This frozen wasteland left no room for mercy. One final thrust ended her life and her scream. Gasping for air, she called him a traitor with her final breath. Her eyes fixed on Lin Mo, they were full of hate. He merely looked at the supplies. This world turned everyone into monsters. Suddenly her corpse began to twitch. Veins pulsed with a terrifying blue light. She promised he would pay the price. Skin tore bones and reshaped. A massive shadow loomed over the panicked man. The thing that was once a girl became a nightmare. He realized too late it was a white skin. It lunged forward, it swallowed his gear and coiled around his body. The creature whispered that everything was hers now. Otnet let out a bone-chilling shriek. An explosion of ice shattered the ground. Amidst the chaos, a figure stood tall with glowing eyes. Dark serpents of energy hissed around him. They were shadows of pure malice. The ground groaned under the weight of the coming storm. A sphere of purple light erupted. It consumed everything in its path. Debris rained down on the frozen plains. He sighed at the predictability of it all. Above him, a new horror materialized. She looked down with multiple eyes. She recognized the strength in the one who had hurt her kin. Not suddenly, the ground gave way beneath the transport vehicle. Inside, the crew screamed as the controls went dead. The door was jammed. They were trapped in a metal coffin. Gravity took hold. The massive machine slid toward the abyss. It tipped over the edge. The hero watched the descent. He knew the people inside were doomed. Maggie clutched the child tight. She braced for the impact. He moved like a streak of lightning. His hand slammed into the metal. The screech of tearing steel echoed. A massive bang shook the frame. The falling stopped. Silence followed the chaos. His claws dug deep into the hull. They were moving again, but this time they were going up. He roared with the effort. Every muscle in his body burned. He lifted the entire transport toward safety. Just then, the purple snakes struck. They bit into his back. They injected venom into his veins. He gritted his teeth. He refused to let go. The monster mocked him. She called him her brother. She laughed at his foolish attempt to be a hero. He was nothing but a child playing a game. That purple energy pulsed through his chest. She watched his agony with a cruel smile. His grip tightened on the vehicle. He would not let them fall. She offered him a deadly ultimatum. He could drop the humans and save himself, or he could hold on and be consumed by her poison. The toxins began to crack his skin. Death was creeping in. Agony ripples through his body like a million burning blades. This poison feels like it is tearing his very soul apart. Spatial distortion warps the air around his head. Memory floods back of a snake from his dark past. That creature was exactly like this current nightmare. Thinking back to that day, the fangs sank deep into his flesh. Blood sprayed everywhere as the venom took hold. He fought back with pure desperation. He swung his knife with every ounce of strength remaining. That metal sliced through scales. Blue blood mingled with his own red stains in the air. A final strike landed. The serpent shrieked and recoiled in its final moments. It retreated into the shadows of the cold stairwell. Panic gripped his chest as he realized the danger. He was trapped and slowly dying. Losing his weapon made the situation feel hopeless. The pain intensified with every heartbeat. Thick blood coated his hand. It dripped steadily onto the concrete below. Sitting alone on the stairs, he tried to patch the wound. Today was the absolute worst day of his life. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. Exhaustion weighed more than the injury itself. Worry for his friends gnawed at his mind. They would be so angry with his recklessness if they saw him now. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the darkness. He looked up in total shock. A shadowy figure loomed over his broken body. It asked if he regretted his past betrayals. The silhouette mocked his survival. It claimed he only lived by stabbing others in the back. A bitter smile crossed his face despite the pain. Survival was the only thing that mattered in this dying world. He believes there are only two choices left for anyone. One must either be the hunter or be the hunted. The shadow questioned his logic. He had abandoned stable resources for a short-term gain. It whispered that he knew the truth all along. Guilt flashed in his eyes for a split second. The dark presence seemed to consume the entire room. It told him that he always had more than just two options. Then the figure vanished into the void. He doubled over and coughed up fresh blood. The poison was still working through his system. Doubt clouded his mind. He wondered if he was actually poisoned or just hallucinating from the intoxication. Looking at his bandaged arm, he felt a small sense of relief. At least the wound was not lethal. Staggering down the stairs, he questioned if the entire encounter was real. The words about having more options burned in his memory. Reality snaps back into focus in the freezing. The monstrous entity sits perched atop the heavy vehicle. She demands to know if he will give up or give in to the darkness. He grins despite the overwhelming pressure. He asks why she thinks he will choose either of those pathetic paths. Anger flares in her eyes. She demands to know who he thinks he is dealing with. He is not the type of man who limits himself to two choices. Red energy begins to boil beneath his skin. The power surges through his veins. Innocent lives are on the line inside that transport. He refuses to let cowards control their fate any longer. The entity scowls as she realizes he is resisting her will. He tells her to watch closely. His transformation begins with a roar of pure power. The red aura consumes his face. His eyes glow with a primal fury. This is his final decision. The mask of a demon settles over his features as his power peaks. A massive explosion of energy rocks the battlefield. He heaves the entire armored tank into the air. The entity is thrown off balance by the sheer force. Ground shatters beneath his feet. The impact creates a massive crater in the ice. Debris flies in every direction as the vehicle tumbles. Inside the rolling transport, the passengers scream in terror. It crashes back down with a deafening thud. He reaches out to stop the momentum. He catches the massive weight with a single hand. Dust and red energy explode around him. The survivors stare in disbelief at the man who saved them. Standing tall, the warrior reveals his final form. Code Zero has finally awakened. The ground shattered as the massive container slammed into the earth with a deafening roar. Panic gripped the observers as they realized Code Zero had finally arrived to end the stalemate. Standing amidst the frozen wreckage, a monstrous figure clad in black and red armor exhaled a breath of pure malice. He wondered why his eyes had turned such a blood-red hue as his pulse quickened. This power felt different, yet he could not understand why his body was reacting with such violent intent. Deep within his mind, the parasite girl confirmed she had borrowed energy from his protective suit to save his life. Instead of feeling grateful, she told him to thank the dangerous woman who provided the equipment in the first place. He sensed her deep-rooted hatred for the doctor, but there was no time to argue about past betrayals. Glancing ahead, he saw the real threat finally making its move through the snow. A bolt of jagged purple energy suddenly tore through the air with lethal precision. It missed his head by inches and obliterated the frozen ground behind him. Dust and debris clouded his vision as the shockwave rattled his very bones. He stood his ground while the purple flames licked the edges of the fresh crater. From the shadows, a new predator emerged and noted how interesting his evolution had become. She was a towering nightmare of tentacles and blades that seemed to defy nature. Her voice dripped with envy as she spoke of his capacity to grow stronger through every trial. Drawing a massive sword from her own body, she prepared to end his journey right there. She revealed that her master wanted his blessing for himself and would stop at nothing to get it. Licking her lips, she confessed her plan to steal that power and claim it as her own. He repeated the word blessings in total confusion while trying to find an opening. The parasite girl manifested beside him and proudly claimed that she was the prize everyone was fighting for. The monster lady watched the girls in the distance and decided to ignore her orders for once. She would not just watch from the sidelines when a real fight was right in front of her. Screaming with bloodlust, she charged forward with her blades raised high. He did not flinch as she rushed him head-on with terrifying speed. They collided with a deafening roar that shook the very air around them. Suddenly, she slashed the space in front of her and vanished into a purple cross. He spun around in a panic, but she was already stepping out of another rift behind him. He narrowly dodged her strike as she reappeared with a lethal, toothy grin. Her speed was impossible to track with normal eyes in this darkness. She tore through the fabric of reality again, leaving him grasping at thin air as she disappeared. Seeing the cross-shaped gates, he realized she was transporting herself across the battlefield. The parasite explained that she was technically tearing a hole in space-time to move through a pocket dimension. That dark energy was filled with unstable antimatter used to coat her weapons and armor. Looking at her form, he realized her abilities were shockingly close to his own dark origin. He could not understand what that meant for his future or his humanity. The monster lady mocked his distraction and lunged with renewed ferocity. He threw himself out of the way just as her blade carved a path through the stone. Purple energy erupted from the ground where he had stood only a second before. Pushing off the ground, he soared high into the snowy sky to gain the advantage. She looked up in shock as he positioned himself directly above her, reaching his peak height. Falling like a meteor, he prepared a devastating counterattack with his full weight. He aimed his foot directly at her head with enough force to shatter the earth beneath them. She did not move, smiling as if he had just handed himself over on a silver platter. She raised all her blades to impale him the moment he reached her. Victory seemed certain for her as she braced for the inevitable impact. Just as he was about to strike, a massive void opened in the air beneath him. His eyes widened in pure terror as he realized he was falling into her final trap. Screaming in frustration, he was swallowed whole by the darkness of the pocket dimension. The portal swallowed him whole before he could even react. Floating in this strange void felt like a nightmare without an end. Massive chunks of ruined architecture drifted past him like ghosts. Gravity seemed non-existent, yet he kept plummeting deeper into the abyss. Desperation clawed at his chest as he searched for anything to stop his descent. He lunged for a passing piece of stone. His fingers barely grazed the surface before it turned to dust. A silent explosion of purple energy consumed the debris. Antimatter was eating everything in this dimension. Even the largest structures were being dissolved into nothingness. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught his eye. Dozens of bodies drifted in the purple haze like discarded dolls. Finding a floating ID card confirmed these were government agents from the early days of the crisis. The Prophetic Association had been burying their victims here for years. A corrosive atmosphere began eating at his own skin. Just then, a blinding light appeared below him. Diving toward the exit, he used every ounce of strength he had left. Hope flared for a single second. Then the reality of the trap hit him. A massive tear in reality hung over a frozen city. The purple monster smiled as she watched him tumble back into the physical world. She mocked his struggle and licked her lips with hunger. With a flick of her hand, she commanded him to keep falling. Crashing through another portal, he fell back into the freezing sky. The ground rushed up to meet him at terminal velocity. High above, the creature decided to end the game. She reached into her own chest and pulled out a massive organic pillar. The weapon shifted and groaned as it took a lethal shape. It transformed into a gargantuan cannon pulsing with dark energy. A cruel grin spread across her face. She aimed the barrel directly at his falling form. A beam of pure destruction erupted from the weapon. The sky turned purple as the energy surged forward. It slammed into the city below with the force of a falling star. He looked up in pure shock as the light consumed his vision. A strange dark orb sat at the center of the black. Everything around him was pulverized into a swirling vortex of ruin. The impact tossed his body through the air like a leaf in a storm. He crashed into the jagged ice with a bone-shattering thud. The monster descended and claimed that bigger was always better. She taunted his broken body with twisted, suggestive words. He lay motionless in the center of the crater. A familiar voice hissed in his ear to stop daydreaming. Dark energy surged through his veins as his wounds began to knit together. Shards of his broken armor lay scattered across the ice. The blue-haired spirit realized those fragments belonged to her. Pushing himself up, he felt a new plan form in his mind. His eyes burned with a renewed violent light. Red energy began to solidify into heavy links. The chains wrapped around his arms with a metallic ring. Power flooded back into his tired limbs. He stood tall, wreathed in glowing red restraints. Whipping her into shape was the only way to handle a woman this crazy. The chains lashed out, ready to claim his revenge. The monster's gaze felt like a death sentence. Chains of pure energy rattled against its chest as its true power awakened. Observing the transformation, the purple-clad entity noted that his form looked much more complete than before. Pink energy surged through the air with a deafening buzz. She licked her lips in anticipation of the coming slaughter. Her tongue flickered like a serpent sensing its prey in the cold air. He did not wait for her to move first. A massive blast of purple light erupted from her weapon and tore through the battlefield. Narrowly dodging the beam, he pushed his body to the absolute limit. A giant pink arrow materialized and sliced the sky in half. The collision of their powers sent shockwaves across the snowy wasteland. Two opposing forces clashed with enough pressure to level the city below. Light and shadow fought for dominance in a frantic dance. Everything vanished in a blinding explosion of violet and rose. Dust settled as she realized their attacks had canceled each other out completely. Moving with impossible speed, she soared through the falling debris. Frustration boiled in her eyes while she braced for the next round of combat. He lashed out with a horizontal strike that cut the very air itself. Her confidence wavered for just a split second. Another massive eruption shook the ground beneath their feet. He realized that he finally possessed an option for lethal ranged attacks. A heavy pink chain slammed into the ice, anchoring his resolve. Suddenly, the crazy woman appeared right behind him by bending the rules of space. A cold click echoed as she leveled her weapon at his skull. The weapon fired with a thunderous bang that shattered the silence. He barely moved his head in time to survive the execution. She grit her teeth and swore that he would not be able to run anymore. Spinning his chains, he created a lethal vortex around his muscular frame. The links of metal whistled as they gained terrifying momentum. He launched a massive pink projectile straight at her heart. Mockery filled her voice as she asked if that was really all he had. She leaped into the air and dodged the massive spear with ease. Escaping into a pocket dimension seemed like her only safe bet to regroup. A glowing portal opened to swallow her whole and hide her from his wrath. She mocked him one last time, claiming he never stood a chance. He watched her retreat with a predatory smile hidden behind his mask. She laughed while sinking into the darkness of the rift. A metallic snap silenced her laughter instantly. Terror gripped her heart as she realized a chain was wrapped firmly around her arm. He whispered that he finally caught her. The chain did not break. It followed her right through the portal into the void. With a savage roar, he commanded her to get back over here. She was yanked out of her safe haven like a hooked fish. He swung her through the air with enough force to break her spirit. He planted his feet and prepared for the final devastating strike. His fingers tightened around the glowing links of his weapon. Charging forward, he became a blur of red and white fury. She looked up just in time to see her end coming for her. The impact was cataclysmic as his fist connected with her chest. Rocks shattered and the earth groaned under the immense pressure. She coughed up a spray of purple blood that stained the snow. The fluid dripped slowly onto the cold ground in the aftermath. It stained the darknesses of the battlefield with the mark of her defeat. His vision blurred and then cleared with a sudden jarring snap. He was standing in front of a familiar house, his body glowing with a strange starlight. A woman's voice welcomed him home with a sweet domestic tone. He froze in horror as he realized the crazy woman from the battlefield was standing right there in his doorway. He stood paralyzed as the world shifted around him. Confusion clouded his mind as he demanded to know the meaning of this vision. The woman before him wore a gentle smile that felt completely out of place. Suddenly, a man in a suit arrived and greeted his wife with warmth. Watching from the sidelines, the blue-haired girl explained that these were the buried secrets of the enemy. She confirmed that they were looking directly into the woman's memories. Her eyes gleamed as she asked why he looked so shocked by the revelation. Focusing on the domestic peace of the past, he narrowed his eyes. The woman in the memory looked genuinely happy as she spoke about practicing her English. Frustration boiled over as he reminded his companion that they were still in the middle of a real fight. Turning away, she asked if he lacked even a shred of curiosity. She hinted that this vision held the key to the prophetic association's plans. He wondered why such a powerful organization would ever be interested in him. Stepping deeper into the illusion, she suggested they needed a better understanding of the situation. Knowing the enemy was the only way to survive the coming battles. A dark smirk played on her lips as she prepared to show him the truth. Every previous victory against them had been a desperate struggle for survival. He remained silent. The gravity of her words finally sank in. Accepting the risk, he agreed to follow her deeper into the rabbit hole. They stepped through a shimmering gateway into a darker moment of time. Crimson blood splattered across a pale face. Rain poured down on a pregnant woman broken and bleeding amidst car wreckage. Disgust filled the air as they witnessed the aftermath of the brutal accident. He demanded to know how this tragedy connected back to their enemies. Pointing a finger upward, she spoke of the inescapable whims of fate. A mysterious figure emerged from the shadows of the downpour. The masked woman walked with purpose while carrying a strange woven vessel. All eyes fell on the container held tightly in her trembling hands. Slow movements revealed the lid sliding open. 4 glowing eyes peered out from the darkness within the jar. Shock paralyzed the blue-haired girl as she recognized the creature. A spectral spirit slithered out into the cold rain. She could not believe her own past self would ever work with such people. The masked priestess commanded the spirit to fulfill its duty and choose a path. That glowing entity lunged toward the dying woman on the pavement. Fear filled the woman's eyes as she gasped for her final breath. Without hesitation, the spirit forced its way into her open mouth. A horrific scream tore through the night. Purple energy surged behind her eyelids. Her soul was being rewritten. She collapsed against the car as the life seemingly drained from her. Suddenly, her broken legs shifted and she began to rise. He watched in horror as her fatal wounds closed instantly. Looking around in a daze, the woman seemed to have no memory of the crash. Nothing about the scene made sense to him anymore. The girl laughed and noted that his confusion mirrored the woman's own. Golden light began to swirl around the masked stranger. She spoke of a newborn child needing to pass to the other side. A streak of lethal light shot forward with blinding speed. The projectile hissed through the air. Blood erupted as the spear pierced the woman's throat. The masked figure silenced the world while claiming death was only the beginning. Death was supposed to be the final curtain. Opening her eyes, she found herself surrounded by neon lights and the smell of cheap alcohol. A stranger's tongue grazed her skin, sending a wave of revulsion through her core. The sensation was oily and vile. She lashed out with a stinging slap that echoed through the VIP lounge. Panic set in as she realized her stomach was empty. Her hands trembled against her dress while the memory of her unborn child surfaced. Flashes of a masked woman in a brutal car accident flooded her mind. Suddenly, armed men closed in to end her second life before it truly began. A crushing void opened within her chest. It felt like an endless cold abyss. A woman tried to plead for her life, claiming she was just a confused newcomer. The hammer of a pistol clicked into place. This man intended to teach her the rules of the Antonori family through blood. She stared at the barrel with hollow eyes. A thunderous bang filled the room as the bullet found its mark. Her body slumped onto the table amidst scattered bottles. Looking down at her, the killer lamented the waste of such a beautiful form. A predatory grin stretched across his face. He began to unbuckle his belt to claim a final sick prize. Purple veins began to pulse with a rhythmic, ghostly light. Her eyes snapped open, revealing a glowing sigil of pure malice. She moved like a blur, pinning the man's head with unnatural strength. Darkness erupted from her body like a living shadow. He gasped in horror, unable to comprehend how a dead woman was now towering over him. She mirrored his earlier cruelty, tasting his fear with a long, inhuman tongue. His screams were cut short as her power began to tear his reality apart. A massive explosion of violet energy consumed everything in sight. Blood painted the walls of the club in a gruesome display of rebirth. Standing amidst the carnage, she felt the void inside finally begin to fill. The monster smiled with a mouth full of jagged teeth. Spattered blood marked the door to room 6. Watching from the shadows of time, the protagonist realized the horrific truth behind these events. The prophetic association was not finding superhumans, but creating them through trauma. This woman was a bridge between parallel worlds forced into existence by tragedy. The complexity of the situation weighed heavily on his mind. He stood alone in the silent hallway. Just then, 2 figures approached with calm, measured steps. One man stepped away, leaving the situation in the hands of his companion. The priest adjusted his hat with a smirk. He turned his gaze directly toward the invisible observer. A chilling smile touched his lips. The protagonist froze, realizing his cover was completely blown. Cross spoke of their previous meeting in a future that had yet to happen. Confusion clouded the protagonist's thoughts as he struggled to follow the logic. This was not a mere memory or a projection, but a tangible reality. His eyes widened in shock. Everything in this world was bound by the cruel whims of fate. Time was not a straight line, but a tangled web where past and present coexisted. He wondered if it was possible to flip the script and change the very cause of their suffering. He stood tall against the mocking figure in the hallway. Red eyes narrowed as he processed the insults. Demanding an explanation, his voice remained steady despite the growing tension. The horned man laughed and claimed that his current form could not possibly understand. Pointing a gloved finger, the stranger loomed closer in the narrow corridor. A thumbs down sealed the insult as he called his opponent weak. Confusion flickered across his face as he asked what those words meant. Grinning widely, the horned man called him a little brother while reading his every thought. He remained still, his back a canvas of shifting stars and cosmic energy. The stranger explained that he was merely a projection on a timeline without physical matter. Standing alone in the hall, he realized he was being told he could never affect the past. Looking down, the horned man prepared to provide a painful example of this weakness. Clutching his chin, the villain savored the upcoming revelation. A sharp snap of his fingers echoed through the silence. Images of his own past mutilation flashed before his eyes like a cruel mirror. Mocking laughter filled the air as the villain questioned why his life had gone so wrong. Gritting his teeth, the Stardust Warrior felt the sting of humiliation. The horned man took delight in seeing the rage finally boil over. Moving forward, the stranger promised a follow-up to the crushing truth. A vision of a trapped alternate version of his enemy appeared in a cage. Realization struck hard when he was told he had killed the wrong man for revenge. Clenching his fist, he listened to the stranger laugh at his pointless struggle. The villain mocked him for being blinded by a rage that led to the wrong target. Looking away in shame, he heard the stranger claim there was still a chance to fix it. Pointing toward a door, the horned man offered a path to the true killer. A new spark of hope and bloodlust ignited in his gaze at the prospect of a real kill. Formalizing his offer, the stranger boasted about his power to interfere in any timeline. Reaching out, the villain touched his face with a condescending smirk. He pushed the hand away and asked if the talking was finally finished. Surprise flickered in the stranger's eyes when his manipulation failed to take hold. Standing tall, he declared that petty anger only worked on children. Clenching his glowing fist, he warned that he had been vastly underestimated. The horned man apologized with a sneer, but the power dynamic was shifting. Looking directly at his foe, he realized he was fundamentally different from his past selves. Shards of memory shattered as he redefined his purpose in this frozen world. Viewing the images within the glass, he identified the true cause of his suffering. Thinking deeply, he planned to switch the cause and effect of his destiny. His target shifted to the one who had created this nightmare in the first place. Staring down the stranger, he named the villain as his next objective. Ending the world's freezing process became his new definition of revenge. Impressed by the resolve, the horned man laughed and praised his individuality. Examining his opponent closely, the villain noted he was a deep thinker. The blue eye of the stranger glowed with a predatory light. Wondering if he was the first to reach this conclusion, he waited for the next move. The horned man reached into his coat to offer a special reward. Suddenly, his arm transformed into a massive white limb covered in glowing eyes. Flexing the monstrous claws, the stranger revealed his terrifying true nature. Pulsing cores within the arm leaked a sinister blue energy. Seeing the sheer number of cores, he felt a wave of genuine dread. Lunging forward, the villain pinned him against the floor with overwhelming force. Sharp claws pierced deep into his chest, tearing through the stardust. A dark shadow loomed behind him as the villain preached about the law of the strong. Standing over his broken body, the stranger encouraged him to grow and devour. A blinding flash of energy erupted as the winner claimed his prize. Looking up one last time, he felt the weight of his own powerlessness crushing him.